laying closer. And he pointed at me and shouted the funniest thing. He said, 30 years the river runs east, 30 years it runs west. In 5 years I'll come back and make every last one of you regret this. She laughed like it was the punchline of the year. I did not laugh. Because somewhere in the back of my skull, in the part of me that used to spend 12 hours a day reading trashy cultivation web novels instead of doing anything useful with my life, a very cold little bell had started to ring. Let me explain what I was hearing, because it's important. A boy. Humiliated in public. His fiancée gives him a death sentence with a bow on it. He kneels in the mud and swears revenge in 5 years. And then, this is the part that made my stomach drop through the very expensive floor. He goes from trash to genius, kills people 2 whole realms above him, and comes back to burn down everyone who ever wronged him. I knew that boy. I'd read that boy 100 times. That boy is the protagonist. That's the main character. That's the guy the whole universe bends over backwards to protect. Which made me the young master lounging in the giant mansion, the one whose saintess had personally handed the hero his origin story, the villain. Not just any villain, the first one, the warm-up boss, the stepping stone, the guy who exists in Chapter 1 specifically, so the hero has someone to kill in Chapter 40 and feel great about it. I was the tutorial. May, I said very calmly, staring at the dragons on my ceiling. Where is he now? This boy. Jiang Wuji? Oh, he ran off and joined some sword sect. She waved a hand. Why would you care about garbage like that? Right, because in the version of this story where I do nothing, garbage like that walks back in here in a couple of years, and by then he can kill people who could kill people who could kill me, and the first thing he does is peel this beautiful murderous woman off my chest and put my head on a spike as an appetizer. So, new plan. 2 words. Kill him first. Here's what I figured out about the guy whose life I'd inherited in the 90 seconds I spent lying very still and reading his memories like a stranger flipping through someone else's phone. His name was Long Fentian. Divine son of the Lingxiao Holy Land, which was the #1 power in this backwater called the Fushui realm. Everybody in 1,000 miles bowed when they said his name. Sounds great, right? Except the Lingxiao Holy Land wasn't even his real family. It was more like a summer home. His actual family was the Immortal Long family, one of the 5 ancient clans of the Upper Realm, a place so far above this one that the people here talked about it the way medieval peasants talked about heaven. His grandfathers up there were emperors. His parents could probably sneeze a continent flat. They loved him so much that when they found out his bones were trash, no talent, cultivation slower than continental drift, they didn't disown him. They did the opposite. They buried him in life-saving treasures and shipped him down to the minor leagues where nothing could hurt their precious boy. So that was the joke. I had the most powerful family in the sky, and I personally could not fight my way out of a wet paper bag. My cultivation was sky-soaring realm, entry level, the kind of thing the hero had already blown past 2 years ago in a cave somewhere. Cool, very cool, love that for me. I was still lying there feeling sorry for my new self when a window opened in my head. Not a real window, a blue one, floating, the kind of thing that, back on Earth, had made me waste my one and only life reading about other people's power fantasies. Ding, system detected, binding host. I'd like to tell you I stayed calm. I did not. I sat up so fast May Roland nearly rolled off the bed. Because I knew what this was. Everyone who's ever read one of these stories knows what this is. This is the cheat. This is the golden finger. This is the universe leaning down and whispering, okay, fine, you got a raw deal, here's your compensation package. And then it offered me 3 of them. Option A, Auxiliary Dao System. Assist the children of destiny. Guide the heroes to glory and share in their fortune. Hard pass. The children of destiny were the protagonists, the heroes, the Xiao-Shisans of the world. Assisting them meant being the loyal sidekick who dies in Chapter 30 so the hero can cry over my grave for half a page. I have read that death. I am not volunteering for it. Option B, Longevity System. Live forever. Cultivate slowly and peacefully in seclusion. Sure, if I wanted to spend eternity hiding in a cave while a vengeful teenager hunted me across the cosmos. Next. Option C, Super Great Villain System. Hunt down every child of destiny. Take their opportunities. Inherit their fortune. Raise their wives. Become the disaster the heavens themselves cannot script around. I did not read the fine print. I did not think it over. I did not weigh the pros and cons. C, I said out loud. Obviously C. I choose C. Look, I know how it sounds, but I'd read enough of these stories to know exactly how they go, and every single one of them is written from the hero's side, The hero gets the cheat, the hero gets the fortune, the hero gets the girl and the treasure and the ancestral legacy, and every villain in his path is a cardboard cutout who exists to lose. I was tired of being the cutout. If this world was going to run on the logic of protagonists eating everyone in their path, then fine, I'd just be the thing that ate the protagonists. The system liked my answer. It gave me a welcome gift, and the welcome gift nearly stopped my brand new heart. The first thing it handed me was a physique, the devouring heaven divine body. Red grade, which I'd learn was the highest an item could roll. What it did was simple and horrifying. It let me devour anything. Techniques, treasures, bloodlines, other people's divine bodies, swallow it, digest it, keep the power, throw away the wrapper. The catch, because there's always a catch, was that a body like that, once the world found out about it, made you the natural enemy of everything that lived. Every genius in creation was carrying something I could eat, which meant every genius in creation had a very good reason to want me dead first. I decided that was a problem for future me. The second thing was a technique to go with the body. The creation demon scripture, also read, which promptly kicked my family's proper, dignified Chang'e art out of my head like a bouncer clearing a squatter. The third thing was an egg. A little golden egg, warm, humming faintly, with a note attached that basically said, "This is an auspicious beast. Its name is Momo. Raising it will bring you peace of mind." I tucked it away. It did not, at any point in the years that followed, bring me peace of mind. But we'll get to her. And then, the moment everything bound to me, the cold, slow river of my useless cultivation caught fire. I want you to understand what this felt like, because he broke through doesn't cover it. It was like being a rusted-out pipe with a trickle of water in it, and then someone hooked me up to a dam. Sky soaring, fusion spirit, profound connection. King Sealing Realm, which, down here in the Fushuai backwater, was old ancestor level, the sort of power Greybeard spent 300 years crawling toward. I hit it sitting up in bed with my hair a mess and a saintess staring at me like I'd grown a second head. From tutorial boss to walking apex predator in about the time it takes to microwave a burrito. "Young lord," May Roland whispered, and there was something new in her voice now, something careful. "Your aura, it's—" "I'm fine," I said. I was better than fine. I opened the system properly, and it laid out my toolkit like a hunter's map. A radar, first of all, it could pick a child of destiny out of a crowd, ping their location, tag them like game. A panel, second, I could look at anyone and read their attributes, their bloodline, even the neat little future the heavens had scripted for them. And a shop, third, where the loot I stripped off my victims turned into currency I could spend on more ways to strip loot off my victims. A perfect closed loop. Beautiful, really. I checked May Roland's panel while she was still lying there, because I'm nothing if not thorough. Her fate, in cold blue letters, child of destiny, female villain, scheduled to die at Zhang Wuji's hands in roughly 2.5 years. Her death, the exact match that lit the fuse of his hatred for the Lingxiao Holy Land. So that was the arrangement. She was written to torment the hero, then die screaming to make him stronger. Everyone in this story was on a track, and every track ended in the same place, under the hero's foot. I don't like tracks. I got up, I got dressed. I crushed the jade token on the bedside table. Longfentian's memories told me what it did, and somewhere below me a bell tolled, and the holy master of the Lingxiao Holy Land, a man named Xiao Haoran, along with all 7 of his peak masters, every one of them a realm I'd been beneath 20 minutes ago, dropped to their knees facing my door. "Divine Son," they said in one voice through the floor. "Prep the ark," I told the token. "We're going to a sword sect." There was a boy there, a very promising boy. A boy with 5 years of destiny stacked up in front of him like a winning lottery ticket he hadn't cashed yet. I intended to cash it for him. The place was called the Heaven-Covering Sword Sect, which was a lot of name for what turned out to be a fixer-upper. Here's what was happening when I arrived. The sect had one old ancestor left, a woman named Xiang Mingxia, and she'd recently blown a breakthrough and crashed from peak king ceiling down to half step, which in cultivator terms is like a heavyweight champion waking up as a bag of wet cement. Her other old ancestor had gone missing. The whole sect was a paper tiger holding a sword. And to fix her recruiting problem, Xiang Mingxia had put out an offer. Anyone who could climb to the 8th floor of the sect's sword tower would become her personal disciple, inherit everything, the works. The 8th floor had never been climbed, not in the sect's entire history. I got there just in time to watch the light on the 8th floor flicker on. Guess who was inside? My arc came down through their protective formation like a brick through a window. I didn't even slow down. The whole array, the pride of the sect, generations of work, popped like a soap bubble, and every cultivator in the courtyard hit their knees, because that's what happens when a king's sealing aura you weren't expecting lands on top of you. Xiang Mingxia came out to meet me. Even fallen, even half-step, she carried herself like someone who used to be somebody. Her fate, when I checked, read destined female supporting character, and the little footnote said she was about to become Jiang Wuji's master, his first big backer, the one who'd hand him the sex-founding sword art and set him on the road to grinding my face into paste. Not today. Ling Xiao's divine son, she said, guarded. To what do we owe? There's an empty position behind me, I said. Chief retainer. Handles my affairs, keeps my people in line, gets paid in the kind of resources a place like this couldn't dream of. You're qualified. Take it. I'll be honest, I expected a fight. She was proud, and I was some stranger crashing her recruitment drive to poach her out from under her own students. Her sect master, a fellow named Jian Jun, was the one who couldn't keep his mouth shut. You dare barge into our sacred grounds and, I flicked 2 fingers. A hand of golden light the size of a house peeled itself out of the air, picked him up like a man plucking a weed, and put him somewhere in the mountains about a mile off. I genuinely don't know if he lived. I didn't check. My patience, I told the courtyard pleasantly, is limited. Anyone else have a comment about the sacred grounds? Nobody did. Xiang Mingxia looked at the space where her sect master had been. Then she looked at me. She was, whatever else you want to say about her, a person who knew how to read a room, and the room had just been redecorated. She knelt. This one, she said, pays respects to the young lord. I fed her a pill from the system shop, nothing fancy by my new standards, a little breakthrough medicine. She swallowed it, and her aura climbed back up to King Ceiling 7th in the space of a breath, past where she'd been before her fall, and the look on her face was worth more than the pill. That's the thing nobody tells you about recruiting the fallen. They remember exactly what it cost them to lose, so they know exactly what you're giving back. That's when the 8th floor's light went out, and the 9th floor's light came on. The 9th floor, the founder's floor. Nobody but the man who built the tower had ever set foot on it. Jiang Wuji walked out onto the balcony glowing like a lit match, an innate sword bone freshly awakened in his back, drunk on his own destiny, and he did the single most main character thing I have ever witnessed. He looked down at a courtyard full of kneeling people and a stranger in fine robes, and he laughed. With this, he announced to the sky, even the Lingxiao Holy Land will be trampled under my feet. There was a very long pause. You know, I said, the Lingxiao Holy Land is standing right here. To his credit, he recovered fast. To his detriment, what he recovered into was arrogance, because arrogance was the only setting the plot had ever let him run at. He came down off the tower ready to demonstrate the innate sword bone on the nearest available face, and Xiang Mingxia, my Xiang Mingxia now, met him halfway and slapped him out of the air before he cleared the 2nd floor. I want to note, for the record, how fast loyalty works when you buy it with power instead of promises. I made him kneel. Not with my hands, with the devouring heaven divine body, which reached into that beautiful, precious, 1 in a billion innate sword bone and started pulling it out of him the way you'd unthread a stitch. He screamed, and then something in his chest screamed back. Turns out my little tutorial boss had a cheat of his own. Every protagonist does. His was a soul, an old man, a genuine expert from the upper realm, riding around inside a ring on Jiang Wuji's finger, whispering strategy, handing out miracles, the classic ring grandpa. And the ring grandpa, seeing his golden boy about to get filleted, went straight for the smart play. He flung a soul possession pill at Xiang Mingxia, betting he could hijack a fresh King Ceiling body and turn the tables. He bet wrong. Xiang Mingxia caught the pill, looked at me, and handed it over with a small bow. Because I'd fixed her cultivation in one breath, and the ring grandpa was offering her a hostile takeover of her own skull. It wasn't a hard call, and that's when the egg in my sleeve hatched. A little white cat tumbled out into the courtyard, blinking, fur sticking up in every direction, roughly the dignity of a wet sock. This was Momo. This was the auspicious beast that was supposed to bring me peace of mind. She took one look at the terrified old soul screaming inside the ring, decided it looked like breakfast, and ate it. Just inhaled it. The great upper realm expert, the secret weapon, the ring grandpa who'd been carrying the whole protagonist on his back, gone, in one bite, with a small satisfied burp. Then she spat out something small and dark and skittering. Jiang Wuji's own soul shrunk down to the size and general charisma of a cockroach scuttling for the cracks in the flagstones. I picked up a pebble. Any last words? I asked. For the record, you did do the whole speech. The cockroach did not have last words. I flicked the pebble. That was the end of the protagonist of this story, the boy who was going to trample everyone under his feet, the tutorial that was supposed to be teaching me humility. Ding. Child of Destiny, Jiang Wuji slain. Reward, 100 free draws, all possessions transferred, opportunity detection unlocked. That last one was the part that made me grin. Opportunity detection. Because when a child of destiny dies, all the fortune the heavens had set aside for him, the caves, the legacies, the treasures waiting patiently in secret realms for the chosen one to arrive, just goes ownerless, and the system had helpfully printed me a shopping list. 9 of Jiang Wuji's future opportunities lit up on the map, a sacred spirit fire in the north, a divine beast's remains on some ancient battlefield, a long family ancestor's legacy in a mountain range named after burying gods. All of it, waiting for a chosen one who was now a smear under a pebble. I was going to be so much more efficient than he ever would have been. I didn't even get the list closed before the next one showed up. A spirit crane came sailing over the mountains carrying a girl in white and a scowling old man, and the girl's arrival came with its own little fanfare of blue text. Ye Shuyan. Water Moon Spirit Physique. Fate. Heavenly Mandate Female Lead. Future Dao Companion of Jiang Wuji. The old man was a Peak Deng Chen expert, the 17th elder of some Ye family, here to escort the precious young lady to her destined meeting with the rising hero, except the rising hero was currently the consistency of jam, so the timing was awkward. Now, here's a thing about her that the panel showed me and she didn't know I could see. On a cord around her neck, tucked under her collar, was a small pink token stamped with a single character, long, my family's mark. Because, and this took me a second to piece together from Long Fentian's memories, years ago, back when I was a sickly little boy in the upper realm with garbage bones and 2 of the most powerful, most anxious parents in creation, my family had done a very political, very ancient clan thing. They'd gone out and identified 9 young women across the realms with rare physiques and rarer talent, and bound them to the Long family's heir by name. Betrothed in the old sense, not touched, not claimed, inscribed. Allies in waiting, a network of gifted people whose fortunes were tied to mine so that whatever weakling their son grew into, he'd never stand alone. Ye Shuyan was one of the 9. She just didn't know it, because nobody had ever told her the name of the boy the token pointed to. The heavens had quietly rerouted her toward Jiang Wuji instead, filed her under future wife of the protagonist, and let her walk right past her own arrangement. I reached out, gently. The devouring body has a soft setting if you want it, and touched the edge of her spirit platform, and I let her see the token for what it was, who it pointed at, which was me. I watched it land. The confusion, then the recognition, then the strange vertigo of a person discovering that the story they'd been living was somebody else's edit. You, she breathed. You're divine son of the immortal Long family, I said. Yeah, sorry about the crane ride. You came a long way to meet a corpse. She was quiet for a second. Then she drew a slender sword, walked over to what was left of Jiang Wuji's body, and, this part I did not ask for, put it through his cheek and then through his heart, cleaning up the last flicker of him herself. A loyalty test I hadn't set. She'd set it for herself, and passed. The 17th elder started to object, on the general principle that his precious young lady was supposed to marry the hero, not the guy who'd just recycled the hero into fertilizer. Momo looked at him. He reconsidered. So that was the first day. I woke up a dead man's understudy in a doomed body, and by sundown I had a holy land, a chief retainer, a betrothed in name with a physique the heavens had earmarked for greatness, a cat that ate souls, 100 free lottery pulls, and a hit list 9 names long. Somewhere up in the upper realm, my parents were probably still worrying that their fragile little boy might catch a cold. The first thing I did with a dead protagonist's belongings was find out what they were worth. The answer was, not much. I fed Jiang Wuji's entire life savings into the system's recycler, his sword, his robes, his little hoard of pills, the ring his grandpa used to live in, and it all came back as a grand total of 3,625 coins. What a pauper, I said out loud, to no one. Because I'd already priced out the shop, and the shop was rude. It was called, with no shame whatsoever, the exclusive mall for villains, and it was stocked accordingly. A rebirth pill was 10,000 coins. The good body refining materials were more. Everything worth having cost more than a whole slain hero could pay for. The system had given me a supercar and charged me for premium gas, but I still had 100 free draws burning a hole in my soul. So I spun them. I need you to understand that the villain lottery has a sense of humor, and the sense of humor is bad. Draw 1. A bag of dried fish. For the cat, presumably. Momo perked up. Draw 7. A complete bedding set. Silk. Very nice. Absolutely useless. Draws 12 through 40. Cat treats, a comb, a decorative gourd, more cat treats, a single embroidered slipper with no partner, and something the system proudly labeled premium incense. Draw 63. A pair of undergarments. Women's. Red grade. The highest tier an item can roll, which for a piece of clothing is deeply concerning. They materialize 6 inches above my head and drop directly onto my face. I peeled them off very slowly. I looked at the ceiling. The dragon stared back, unhelpful. System, I said. Why do I own these? The system did not answer. It never answered the important questions. It just kept spinning, and then, on the 100th draw, the last one, when I'd fully made peace with walking away from this experience with nothing but betting and shame, the wheel landed on gold. Tao fruit. Gold grade. Consumed to comprehend the great Tao of force. I stopped breathing for a second. Let me explain why this was insane. Down here, comprehending a great Tao, a real one, a fundamental law of the universe you could bend to your will, was the wall between mortal and emperor. People clawed at the quasi-emperor realm for centuries and never touched a Tao. It was the final exam of cultivation, and the system had just printed me one as a consolation prize for 100 spins of mostly cat food. I ate it. The great Tao of force settled into me like it had always lived there, and the truth of it was so simple it was almost funny. Not technique, not tricks. Just, when your force is great enough, you don't need anything else. A strong enough fist doesn't outmaneuver a problem. It ends the problem. My cultivation, already sitting pretty, ground up to peak king ceiling on the strength of it alone. So that was the deal I'd made, laid out plain. A garbage system that would hand me a betting set, a bag of fish, a stranger's underwear, and then, buried at the bottom of the pile, a law of creation. You couldn't trust it, but you couldn't quit it either. I put the red undergarments in the corner of my storage space and tried very hard to forget they existed. Spoiler, I would not get to forget they existed. My next customer came to me. They usually did, once the word got around. And this one arrived gift-wrapped in the single most punchable aura I'd encountered yet. The Fu Rui Divine Sect, out of the northern region, sent a whole delegation, headed by their young sect leader, a beaming golden retriever of a young man named Mu Yanfeng. And Mu Yanfeng, the panel informed me, was a child of destiny with a very specific and very obnoxious blessing. He had the great luck Tao body. Fate, auspiciousness, arriving at the door. I want to describe to you what that actually looked like in person, because reading great luck on a screen does not prepare you. This man could not walk across a room without something wonderful happening to him. He tripped over a rug and caught himself on a shelf, and the shelf had a false back, and the false back hit a spirit medicine. He sneezed, and a passing servant's tray tipped, and a pill rolled off it and bounced, physically bounced, into his open mouth. The universe treated him like a beloved child. Everything he needed fell toward him. He'd never earned a single thing in his life, and he had everything. His sect had come to Lingxiao to buy something specific. See, their founder, an old fellow named Xiao Jingje, had gotten stuck one step from the peak of his realm for one reason. He'd never been able to find an auspicious beast. That was apparently the missing ingredient, and word had reached them that the Lingxiao Divine Son had recently come into possession of exactly such a beast. They wanted Momo. They'd pay any price. Momo at that moment was lying on my shoulder chewing a dried fish, and she gave the delegation a look that suggested she had heard the phrase any price and found it insulting. But I'll be honest, I wasn't really listening to the sales pitch because Mu Yanfeng had, in the 2 minutes since arriving, tripped over absolutely nothing, staggered sideways into a decorative pillar in my own hall, and popped a hidden seam in the stone that no one in the Lingxiao Holy Land had known was there for 1,000 years. Behind it was a small dark space. And in the small dark space was the personal treasure vault of the Holy Land's first-generation founder, in my house, that his luck had just found. For me. I checked his panel again while he was still apologizing for the pillar. Great luck Tao body, minor achievement, inner. 2 treasures of real note on him, a whip called the Auspicious Sect Whip, and something better, a Fantian seal, a heavy divine imprint the Fu Rui sect had built their whole legacy around. There was a note at the bottom of the panel, small, easy to miss. Once the host intervenes in a child of destiny's path, their future becomes unpredictable. No further trajectory can be read. Which was the system's polite way of saying, the heavens have a plan for this man, and if you touch him, the plan goes dark, and after that, buddy, you're improvising. I looked at the beaming, blessed, spectacularly lucky idiot who had just walked a treasure vault into my hands and offered me any price for my cat. I did love to improvise. You know what? I said, and I smiled my most reasonable smile, the one that had nothing behind it. Let's talk terms. The swindle was almost too easy, and I say that as the swindle's beneficiary. Here's the thing about the system's recycler that I'd figured out. It worked on anything I acquired, and acquired, it turned out, had a very generous definition. It didn't require me to fight for a thing or steal a thing. It just required the thing to be, in some legally arguable sense, given. So while Mu Yanfeng was gushing about his beloved sect and the terrible unfairness of his founder being stuck one step from the peak, I nodded along and I let my gaze drift to the Fantian seal hanging at his waist, the heavy divine imprint his whole sect had built its name on. And I said, in the mildest voice I own, "That's a fine treasure. Give me a look?" He handed it to me. He just handed it over. Because he was raised lucky and trusting and had never once in his charmed life had a reason to think a request might be a trap. The moment it left his fingers and touched mine, the system chimed, cheerful as a doorbell. Item voluntarily gifted. Recycling. Fantian seal. 9,999 coins. The Fantian seal dissolved into light in my palm. The soul bond that tied it to Mu Yanfeng snapped like a plucked string, and he doubled over, choking, staring at his own empty hand with an expression I can only describe as a man watching his childhood pet get repossessed. You tricked me. I asked for a look, I said. You gave it to me. The system's very strict about consent, actually. Ironic, given the underwear situation, but I don't make the rules. He did not understand the underwear reference. That's fine. It was for me. His grand elder, an old man who'd come along to supervise, made the mistake of shouting for the guards, and the holy master of my Lingxiao Holy Land, remember, these people bowed to my door now, took the old man's arm off at the shoulder without being asked. No arm I sever, he mentioned, ever reattaches. A little on the nose, but you take the help you're given. Mu Yanfeng, robbed and bleeding, did the thing the plot always makes these characters do when the ground opens under them. He found new gears. His temperament flickered from beaming golden retriever to something darker, his great luck body flaring, and I felt the panel go blank the way the system had warned me it would. His future had gone dark. From here we were both improvising. What do you want? He ground out. The whip. Take the whip. Take the sect. What do you want? You, I said. I meant his physique, the great Luck Dao body, a bloodline that pulled fortune toward its owner like gravity. That was the prize. I wanted to eat it. That is not, however, how the Grand Elder interpreted it. The old man's face went through several colors, and then he leaned in and whispered to his young leader a strategy so deeply, catastrophically stupid that I need you to hear it in full. The divine son, he hissed, is a young man of certain appetites. There are rumors. If you would only lower yourself, offer yourself to him, think of it as being mounted by nothing more than an animal, we may yet leave here with our sect intact. And Mu Yanfeng, proud, blessed, out of options, set his jaw and reached for the tie of his own robe. Stop, I said, loudly. Stop that. What are you doing? Put your— No. I said I wanted you, your body, your bloodline, your luck, the physique. I have never in my life been less interested in whatever you think is happening right now. He froze, hand on his collar, mortified. You look like a startled eunuch, I told him, because someone had to break the tension. Fix your robe. We're going to do this the normal way. The horrifying way from your angle, but the normal way from mine. And I reached for him with the devouring heaven divine body and began to pull the great luck out of his bones. He had one card left, and it was a good one, and it very nearly cost me the whole game. Mu Yanfeng, feeling his greatest treasure, himself, being unthreaded strand by strand, shattered a jade pendant hidden in his sleeve. His father's ultimate trump, his sect's last resort. The sky went purple. A Qilin descended. A real, mountain-sized, purple-flamed Qilin, one of the most sacred beasts in creation, its aura pressing the whole Holy Land flat, and it opened its mouth and breathed a river of purple fire down at me, promising to reduce my ancestors and descendants to a memory. I want to be clear that this was, on paper, extremely bad. I blocked it with a mirror. Specifically, an old rusty bronze mirror my parents had shoved into my luggage before they sent me down here, one of the dozen god-tier trinkets I'd never learned the names of because Long Fentian had been a spoiled kid who never read the manual. I held it up mostly on instinct. The mirror drank the purple flame, sat with it for a second like a man savoring wine, and spat it back twice as hot. The Qilin's projection burned to nothing, then it reformed. Palm-sized this time, wary, and it did something a marauding divine beast should never have to do. It stopped to check who I was. And that's when I got to enjoy the single best piece of information I'd collected all day. Because it wasn't a purple Qilin. There had only ever been two of those in all of history. One was long dead, and the other was the Qilin clan's own chief. This was a fire Qilin, a lesser breed, faking the purple bloodline out of pure vanity, the way a man rents a nicer car for a first date. I know this because I happen to own a writing brush made from genuine purple Qilin fur, another parental hand-me-down. I took it out, and its bloodline pressure alone put the imposter flat on its metaphysical face. But the part that made me laugh, actually laugh out loud, in front of everyone, was where the brush came from. See, the real purple Qilin. The clan chief, 5,238 years old, a quasi-emperor who'd mastered 3 great Daos, the single most terrifying beast this side of the upper realm. My family had snatched him 20 years ago. He currently lived at the Long Estate as a guard dog. The story, as my inherited memories told it, was that when I was born a sickly little heir, my family had rounded up 100,000 Qilin to audition as my personal mount, found every single one of them too poor quality for their precious boy, and then, having gone to all that trouble, took the clan chief home anyway on general principle. He'd been fetching my family's slippers ever since. My memories were fairly confident that if you threw him a bone, he'd wag his tail. The fire killen heard all of this, watched the purple fur brush in my hand, connected the dots, realized that the young lord it had come to incinerate was the heir of the family that kept the god of its entire race as a pet. It did not run. To its credit, it was braver than that. It burned its own true body to ash on the spot, severing every thread that could lead back to its clan, so that whatever I did to it next couldn't be blamed on anyone it loved. I let the ashes drift. I almost respected it. Your father, I told the gray-faced Mu Yanfeng, who had just watched his family's ultimate trump card immolate itself out of sheer terror of my relatives, spent a fortune on a fake. You should ask for a refund. Then I went back to eating his luck. Eating a man's luck while he's still using it is not a clean process. I devoured the great Luck Dao body right out of Mu Yanfeng's living bones, and I fed his sect's tag-along experts into a black banner I'd inherited without ever learning its name, a thing that had started life as some noble human emperor's treasure and had, the moment I poured my chi into it, turned pitch black and vaguely gleeful about the whole business. Every soul it swallowed made it hungrier. I'd have to look into that eventually. Not now. Because Mu, cornered, out of luck and out of tricks, did the last thing a desperate protagonist has left. He broke. His fate flickered on the panel. Manic. Deranged. And then, in gold, heaven-defying fate. Turning the tides, his cultivation didn't climb so much as detonate, profound connection into King's ceiling in the space of a scream, and the sky above the Holy Land started to churn, because he'd done something that should have been impossible at his level. He'd called down a lightning tribulation. On himself. On both of us. The math was suicidal and elegant. If he couldn't beat me, he'd drag me into a tribulation strong enough to kill us both, and rob me of the meal even in death. Somewhere behind me, my holy master saw the sky and made a judgment call. He crushed a jade slip, the emergency kind, the kind that shouts for the upper realm, which is a good moment to tell you about my parents. Far above the Fushui realm, in a place so high the people below prayed toward it, the immortal Long family sat in the eternal Dao domain, and in the family head's residence, a man was getting his ear pulled. His name was Long Haoshan. He was my father. He was a great emperor, an absolute hegemon, a man who could flatten a mountain range while thinking about lunch. And at that moment, his wife had him by the ear, twisting, because their son was in the lower realm, and she'd felt a distress signal go off, and she decided, instantly, without evidence, that this was somehow her husband's fault for agreeing to send the boy down there in the first place. I told you, she was saying. I told you he was too fragile. Jinyue, dear, the signal is a tribulation signature. It's just a breakthrough. My father, hegemon of the age, was wincing. My mother was Jinyue, the female sword immortal, and she loved me with the ferocious, illogical devotion of a parent who'd found out early her child had garbage bones and had responded not by loving him less, but by burying him in every life-saving treasure two obscenely powerful people could buy. They both had. That was the whole tragedy of Long Fentian, if you think about it. He'd been so loved and so protected that he'd never had to become anyone. Two doting kings had cushioned every fall until the boy forgot how to stand. I'd inherited the cushions. I just intended to stand anyway. When they checked the signal properly and saw it really was only a tribulation, my father exhaled and my mother let go of his ear, and, because she was still worried and would rather die than say so, she summoned the one person she trusted with her son's life. Her only disciple. A veiled young woman with a temperament like cold water over stone and a talent that came along once in a very long time. Xiao Yun, my mother said. Go down to the Fushui realm. Watch over him. The girl bowed. Yes, master. He comes first, my mother added, softer, in the voice she used only for me. Whatever it costs. I'm willing to pay any price to make up for the aptitude I couldn't give him, even if the price is you. And the girl, Long Xiaoyun, who I would soon be very glad to see and even more embarrassed to face, bowed again, lower, because to her that was not a burden. It was the whole point of her. She'd been my mother's disciple, but she'd grown up in the Long house, half a step from me, and there was a version of this story where watch over him meant a great deal more than a bodyguard's duty. We'll get there. She had a sword to catch first. Back down in the burning courtyard, the first bolt of Mu's tribulation came down, and I ate it. I want to stress how much that ruined his whole plan. A lightning tribulation is supposed to be a death sentence you survive by enduring. I stood in it like a man enjoying a warm shower and let the devouring body treat the heavenly punishment as a light snack. My cultivation ticked up. Somewhere in the ash, Mu Yanfeng had gone spread eagle on the ground, arms out, offering himself to the lightning, praying it would take him before I could. The last spite of a man who couldn't win, deciding at least I wouldn't either. I pulled him out of it by the collar. Then I finished the meal. I devoured the great Luck Dao body down to the root, and I made a point, this mattered to me, of keeping only the pure fortune and throwing away the rest. Because the bloodline came wrapped in the heavens' favor, that little tag that marked its owner as a chosen darling of fate, and I did not want it. I'm a villain. What do I want with fate's affection? I'll take the power. The heavens can keep the hug. The second bolt came down, and I punched it into glass. And then, because the tribulation clouds were still up there sulking, I drew a nameless saber off my back, poured the great Tao of force into it, and cut the whole sky in half. The clouds split, roiled, and this is the part that made even me raise an eyebrow, birthed a small dense bead of pure lightning tribulation origin, a freak treasure, coughed up because the residue of Mu's own monstrous luck was still swirling around in the moment of his death. His last gift to me, wrung out of him against his will. Then I burned what was left of him to ash, soul included. No coming back, no ring grandpa, no reincarnation. Just gone. Ding. Second child of destiny slain within 3 days. Hidden title unlocked. Destiny's Great Villain. Reward, Xuanyuan Qiankun Bao. 100 draws. All possessions transferred. 2,376 treasures. 2 protagonists in 3 days. The heavens had scheduled both of them to grow up and become someone's nightmare, and I'd eaten them before breakfast on the third morning like a man clearing his inbox. Momo burped. She'd swallowed the little lightning tribulation bead when I wasn't looking, grown a size, and gone back to sleep in my collar. The system, meanwhile, had helpfully noted that killing this many chosen ones this fast was the sort of thing the heavens tended to notice. I didn't know yet how right it was, but I was about to find out that the sky, up there, had an eye, and the eye did not like me at all. 2,376 treasures. That was Mu Yanfeng's estate, because a great luck body doesn't just find fortune, it hoards it. His luck had been quietly vacuuming up loose treasure across hundreds of miles for his entire life. I recycled a lot, and among his leftover opportunities tucked at the bottom were a few that pointed not down but up into the upper realm, a mountain range, an ancient clan, a good fortune Dao fruit, one of the top 3 Daos in all creation, sitting in a cave waiting for a chosen one who was now a smudge. I filed those for later. You don't cash an upper realm ticket while you're still a lower realm nobody. The system also handed me a new toy off the back of 2 dead protagonists, and this one was the good stuff, trace detection. I could look at any person, any object, and read whether they'd ever brushed against a living child of destiny, and if they had, the thread would lead me home to the target, a bloodhound's nose for chosen ones. My hit list had just gained a search function, which left me one loose end before I went hunting again, and the loose end was Xiang Mingxia. She had a rare constitution, a profound yin body, the kind of thing that, in the stories I'd read, always got a woman shoved into some pervert's harem as a cultivation cauldron. I want to be clear about how I handled it because it matters. A profound yin body isn't a bedroom accessory, it's a formation engine. Channeled right, it can anchor a great array, amplify a whole faction's cultivation, turn a fortress into a fortress that also makes you stronger just by standing in it. So that's what I made it. I set her to studying the Holy Land's grand formations, told her that her body was the key to running them at 3 times their rated output, and gave her the resources to do it. She got stronger. My territory got stronger. Nobody got degraded. This is not a difficult thing to do, and I remain baffled by every other young master in every other story who couldn't figure it out. Then I broke through, and the sky tried to kill me for it. I'd hit the ceiling of my current realm faster than the Fushui realm had ever seen, and the moment I stepped for the Dongchen realm, the heavens rolled out the good china. 9 heavens profound extinction thunder, the legendary one. 9 layers, 9 bolts each, 81 strikes, each one a 10 deaths, no life verdict, the tribulation reserved for people the heavens have decided should not be allowed to keep climbing. Across the whole lower realm, old monsters who hadn't opened their eyes in 1,000 years cracked their caves to watch, because you did not see this tribulation. You heard about it in the way you hear about comets. I met it with the Xuanyuan Qiankun Bao. The first bolt came down, and I drew 1 arrow and shot it out of the sky. The second bolt came, 2 of them twinned, and I drew 2 arrows. The third 3, then 5, then 9. By the 5th layer, I wasn't so much dodging the tribulation as conducting it, an arrow for every fang the heavens bared, and by the 8th layer, the sky was a solid sheet of white fury, and I was standing in the eye of it drawing arrows faster than the eye could count. The 81st bolt came down as a single spear of annihilation wide enough to erase the mountain, and I answered it with 81 arrows at once, loosed in a formation shaped, if you were watching from the right angle, like a grinning skull. The tribulation broke. I stood in the Dengchen realm, not a scratch on me, in a crater that used to be a courtyard, and the old monsters watching from their distant caves collectively decided to mind their own business for the rest of their lives. That's when the sky tore open a second time, not for a tribulation, for an arrival. She came down through a rift in the world in a sword robe the color of deep water, a veil across her face, a plain cyan sword at her hip, and she landed in my ruined courtyard the way snow lands, without weight, without sound, without asking. Before I could say a word, two men in the gray of the Skywatch Pavilion, the lower realm self-appointed traffic cops, the ones who logged every unlicensed descent from above, flanked her and started reciting a citation. Illegal descent. 15 days in the heavenly prison. Present your credentials, ma'am, or come quietly. She drew her sword and put it back before I registered the motion. Both men's heads left their shoulders in the same instant, and the rest of them realized it a full second later, the way a candle doesn't know it's out until the smoke starts. The Long family, she said to no one, sheathing the sword, is handling its own affairs. Idlers, leave. I checked her panel, because of course I did. Long Xiaoyun, my mother's one and only disciple, the female sword immortal. In her 20s, which meant nothing until you saw the next line, which was that she'd already reached the sovereign realm, a height that should have taken centuries and had taken her a couple of decades, the single greatest sword talent to be born in a very, very long time, 5 years older than me. And, per the small print my mother had written into the arrangement, sent here to guard my life with her own. She turned to me, and even through the veil, I could feel her recalibrating, comparing the fragile boy she remembered to whatever I was now, standing in a tribulation crater with a soul-eating cat asleep on my shoulder. Young lord, she said, I came as fast as I could. A pause. You appear to have handled it. I've had a busy 3 days, I said. There was a lot I could have said to Long Xiaoyun in that first moment. There was, it would turn out, a great deal of history between the boy I'd inherited and the sword immortal in front of me, the kind of history that made this reunion far more complicated and far warmer than bodyguard reports for duty. But that's the next part of the story, and I need to warn you before I tell it that I embarrassed myself very badly. Long Xiaoyun and I grew up together. I got this in pieces from the memories the body came with. A girl a few years older, my mother's disciple, but really more like the one steady thing in a sickly boy's small world. We'd shared the same courtyard, the same tutors, the same summers. There's a memory in there of the two of us as children small enough to share a bath back before either of us knew to be embarrassed about anything. She'd been guarding me before guard him was ever in order. It was just what she did. So when the tea was poured and the courtyard was quiet and she lifted her veil for the first time, and I will not attempt to describe her face except to say that the whole ruined courtyard seemed to hold its breath, I was already braced for the reunion to be a little emotional. I was not braced for what she actually said. Young lord. She set down her cup, perfectly composed, the deadliest sword in 1,000 years. Your cultivation has changed. If your body is straining to stabilize it, I can help you relieve it, the way I used to. I inhaled my tea. I want to be clear that she meant it in the most innocent, old-fashioned, dutiful way imaginable. Some cultivation assistance arrangement the two of them had apparently had as kids, a hand on the back to steady a breakthrough, nothing more. But it did not land in my head as any of those things, because I am not from here, and she delivered it with the flat sincerity of a woman offering to refill your water. I coughed for a solid 10 seconds. Tea went, I regret to report, directly onto the front of the veil she'd just lifted. That's not, I managed. We're not doing that. Whatever that was, historically, we are not, going forward, doing it. She tilted her head, and something behind her eyes that I would learn to recognize as her being quietly, enormously amused, went very still and very careful. As the young lord wishes, she said, and dabbed the tea off her chin, and I understood, with a cold and total certainty, that the aloof legendary sword immortal was going to enjoy watching me be flustered for the rest of my natural life. Here's the honest part. I liked her. Not the way a villain is supposed to collect people. She wasn't a physique to eat or a piece on a board. She was the one person in this whole strange world who'd known the boy before the system, and who looked at what he'd become and simply adjusted her stance to keep guarding him. If I had a warm thread in this cold story, it started there, with a woman who'd spit-take-worthy phrasing and a sword that could cut a citation officer in half before he finished his sentence. Mei Ruolin and Shang Mingxia, off to the side, took one look at Long Xiaoyun's unveiled face and visibly shrank, and I could feel the shape of the line the old Long Fentian would have said here, some sneer about how romance was for heroes, and he'd only ever kept women for his own convenience. I didn't say it because it wasn't true, and it was beneath the operation. Mei Ruolin and Shang Mingxia weren't conquests. They were a saintess who'd defected the instant the wind changed, and a fallen old ancestor I'd put back on her feet, capable, pragmatic subordinates who'd chosen the strongest patron in the room, which is the only kind of loyalty worth anything. I didn't need them to adore me. I needed them sharp. Both of you, I said instead, have work. Mei, especially. And I turned to the more useful problem, which was that my next target had just walked into my search radius. I'd used trace detection on the old monsters who'd surfaced to watch my tribulation, on the theory that someone in that crowd had touched a live protagonist. One of them lit up red. An old recruiter named Wu Guang, 863 years old, out of the Chaos Holy Land, a place on par with my own Ling Xiao. Years ago, he'd personally scouted and inducted a child of destiny into his holy land. The target's name was Zhou Liang. The problem with Zhou Liang was that Zhou Liang is a name like John Smith. There were thousands of them. So I set Mei Roland a 3-day job. Find me every single Zhou Liang who joined the Chaos Holy Land in the last decade, and we'd sort the chosen one out of the crowd. And while she worked, I had an errand of my own. One of the opportunities I'd inherited from the late Jiang Wuji was a sacred spirit fire up in the frozen north, the sacred ice spirit fire, ranked among the 10 greatest flames in the world. A fire that burned cold. My devouring body was going to enjoy that one. But first, a father came to bury his son on top of me. Mu Xuanwu, sect leader of the Fu Rui divine sect, Peak Dung Chen, and now the father of a boy I'd turned to ash, put on mourning white and rallied his entire sect for a revenge march on the Lingxiao Holy Land, the whole sect. Every elder, every disciple, gathered under one banner and pointed at my door. Gathering your whole family in one place is the worst thing you can do to a man who owns a soul-eating flag, but he didn't know that yet. Long Xiaoyun and I met them halfway, in the open sky between his mountain and mine. He was still building up to his big vengeful speech when she drew and sheathed her sword once, a single unseen beam of intent, and his war arc came apart underneath his entire sect like a dropped plate. Then she raised one finger. "Freeze," she said, and the air around Mu Xuanwu turned to glass. "Break." And he was simply no longer a problem, cleanly, without a mess, because the female sword immortal did not do messes. I checked that his whole sect was present and accounted for, floating there stunned in the sudden absence of their leader and their ship, all of them, in one place. Then I unfurled the black banner. I'll spare you the specifics. It's enough to say that the flag was hungriest for the strongest souls, so it took the Fu Rui elders first, and the elders, reforged into the banner's obedient, ravenous spirits, reaped the rest. When it was done, none of them got up, and the sky over the pass was empty and quiet, and the banner in my hand was a shade blacker and quietly, horribly content. 2 sects erased in 3 days, plus their protagonists. Somewhere, the Skywatch Pavilion's deputy master, a man named He Wuchen, was reviewing his world monitoring reports, working himself into a righteous fury over the unlicensed carnage in the Fushui realm, right up until an old elder leaned over his shoulder, read one word off the report, long, and watched all the color drain out of his face. I'd be seeing He Wuchen soon. He was going to be so helpful. They always were, once they saw the name. 2 dead protagonists worth of treasure came out to 545,000 coins. Real money, finally. So I went shopping in the Villain Mall, and I want to tell you about the Dao fruit shelf because it taught me something about myself. You could buy a low-grade Dao fruit for 50,000, medium 500,000, high $1 million, top 5 million, and then at the bottom, like a slot machine in a nice restaurant, random, 150,000 coins, 99% chance of garbage. I still had a whiff of the great luck I'd eaten off Mu, and I have a gambling problem, so obviously I hit random. High grade, first try, gold light, the 1%, on the first pull. I bought a body refining art off the winnings, the Heavenly Tyrant body art, the kind that syncs with the great Tao of force so cleanly that a fully tempered body can end a great emperor with one punch, plus a pile of body refining materials 2 men tall. Then I spun my 100 free draws, and here's the thing. With the residual luck still in me, they all came up good. 2 of them came up gold. The first was the Great Desolation Prison Heaven Finger, a technique plus 1 stored full power strike of the founder who created it, a single finger that could poke a hole in the sky. The second was a piece of women's undergarment, specifically a doo-doo, gold grade, radiating an emperor-tier aura higher than my own grandfather's sword, my grandfather, the #1 swordsman of the upper realm, and it was warm, recently worn. I sat there holding a stranger's still warm, intimate apparel that outpowered a legendary weapon, and I looked at the red undergarments already sitting in the corner of my storage space, and I did the thing you should never do, which is start to see a pattern. "System," I said quietly. "The panties. Now this. Is there a person? Do these belong to a person?" The system, as always, declined to comment on anything that mattered. I put the doo-doo next to the panties in the corner, facing the wall, and I resolved to think about it never. This resolution would last approximately as long as all my others. The sacred ice spirit fire lived in the primitive ice cave, the oldest and deadliest place in the frozen north, the kind of place people go into and don't come out of. It grew on a slab of ancient black ice, a flame that froze instead of burned, cold enough to still your heart mid-beat. 2 guardians, a snow realm ice ape with natural divine strength, and a void mirror cold boa dripping ice poison. The ape I answered with the great desolation prison heaven finger, 1 point of my finger, 1 hole punched clean through it, and the cost was that it drained every drop of my ki, and I could only do it once a day. Worth it. The boa, I didn't have to answer at all. Long Xiaoyun looked at it, and it came apart, sword intent alone, without her taking a step. She was, I was learning, the kind of strong that made a fight feel like a formality she was too polite to skip. I swallowed the sacred ice spirit fire whole. The devouring body ate the cold like it was warm milk, and I went up to Dongchen 6th. Then I sat down with my 2-man pile of body-refining materials and ate them by the fistful all night, tempering the whole time with the new cold flame, and by morning my body could sleep through a tribulation that would kill most men awake. The warmth beat, because there was one, and I'm not going to pretend there wasn't, was that I woke up once in the night, mid-refinement, and Long Xiaoyun was sitting cross-legged at the cave mouth with her sword across her knees, guarding a man who at that point could probably have guarded himself. She hadn't been asked to, she just was. I went back to my cultivation and didn't mention it, and neither did she, and that was somehow the most anyone had said to me since I arrived in this world. He Wuchen found me in the sky over the north, and the deputy master of the entire Skywatch Pavilion, a superpower backed by a quasi-emperor, groveled so hard he nearly fell out of the air. He gave me a ring. He gave me apologies. He gave me a solemn, sweating promise never to point his organization's world monitoring at the Long family again, and he begged me, please, please, not to mention any of the recent unpleasantness to my parents. I have never in my life felt so powerful as I did being begged for mercy by a man who could have squashed the original Long Fentian like a bug, purely on the strength of a surname. So naturally I put him to work. Find me a Zhou Liang. He had a mountain river map, a treasure that could locate anyone in the lower realm. He fed my target into it, and the map's thread shot out, then darted, then reversed, then tied itself into a knot and sat there vibrating like it had a headache. My lord, He Wuchen said, uneasy. This is the signature of a protagonist from a hidden genre. The heavens are shielding him directly. I cannot find him. No one can. Of course, the heavens had learned. 2 of their chosen ones gone in 3 days, so target number 3 came pre-wrapped in a cloak the Skywatch couldn't peel. I couldn't find Zhou Liang, but I didn't need to find Zhou Liang. I needed to find someone Zhou Liang couldn't help but come back for. Then find me his family, I said. He Wuchen dug, and what he dug up was this. 3 years ago, a demonic cultivator had slaughtered Zhou Liang's whole town, and only 2 people had walked out, Zhou Liang himself and an ant. Shortly after, the Chaos Holy Land's recruiter had come to collect the promising boy, and somewhere on the road up the mountain, Zhou Liang had excused himself to use the bathroom and simply never come back. Vanished 3 years ago straight into the heavens pocket, which left exactly 1 living person in all the world with a thread tied to the untouchable Zhou Liang, an ant, in a place called Small Stone Village. Set a course, I told He Wuchen, and he nearly wept with gratitude at being allowed to keep helping. I want to meet the family. Small Stone Village was exactly what it sounds like. Mud, chickens, a well, and 1 small house at the edge of it where a woman was dying quietly so as not to be a bother. Her name was Zhou Qingling. She was thin and plain and gentle, the kind of face you'd walk past 100 times, and she was coughing up her life a little at a time with the resignation of a person who'd made peace with it long ago. She got up when I ducked through her door, apologized for not having better tea, and offered me the cracked cup anyway. Then I read her panel, and I had to sit down. Heavenly mandate female lead. The human emperor's daughter, the future human emperor, not blood related to Zhou Liang. I need to explain what those words meant in this world, because they meant more than important girl. The human emperor was the legend, the one who'd led all of humanity through the War of the 10,000 Races back in the age when the world was young and every clan on Earth was trying to eat every other clan. A figure so revered that there was a statue of her in my own family's ancestral hall, up in the upper realm, where we kept the faces of gods. And this coughing farm woman with the cracked teacup was her heir, her successor, the next one. Here's the future the heavens had drawn for her, the one I'd interrupted by killing Jiang Wuji and hunting his replacement. Zhou Liang would come, rescue her, and in gratitude she'd give him what he needed, and he would take her human emperor bloodline for himself and ascend on her back to become the human emperor. She was never meant to be the emperor, she was meant to be the latter. And the reason she was dying, she'd been born with a body too weak to hold her own destiny, and she'd survived only because of a small white pearl, the human emperor pearl, that she kept pressed to her chest, feeding her failing body just enough life to keep going. 3 years ago, Zhou Liang, her adoptive godfather's grandson, had borrowed the pearl. Just for 3 months, he'd said, leaning on the memory of the dead old man to guilt her into it. Then he'd vanished into the heavens pocket for 3 years, and she'd been slowly folding in on herself ever since, coughing out the days she had left, waiting for a boy who was never coming back. The hero of this story had stolen a dying woman's heart medicine to power up, and the story had planned to reward him for it. I did not kidnap her. I want that on the record. She was the human emperor's daughter, the successor of the woman enshrined in my own family's hall, and there are things even a villain doesn't do, and dragging that person off by the wrist is one of them. Instead, I put a pill in her hand. Red grade, off the shop. 1 month of painless, easy life, no more coughing, no more folding in. Come with me, I said. I'll take you in. I said it the way I say everything, flat and a little cold and entirely without romance, and I braced for her to be frightened. She wasn't. She looked at the pill, and she looked at me, and something in her recalibrated, because for 3 years the person who was supposed to protect her had used her and left her to die. And now a stranger with a hard face and no pretty words had walked in and simply fixed the coughing and offered her a roof. She'd learned the hard way that the man who says he loves you and the man who actually takes care of you are, frequently, not the same man. Thank you, she said, and she meant it. And that was the whole heart of it. The villain treated her better than the hero ever had. I'd remember that later, when it mattered. Now, the scheme. And I'm proud of this one. So let me walk you through it. I couldn't find Zhou Liang. Nobody could. The heavens had him wrapped up tight. But Zhou Liang needed something, and the something was her. Specifically, her human emperor bloodline, the inheritance he intended to strip out of her and keep. As long as she was available, his whole plan stayed on the table. But if she got taken, if she got claimed by someone else, folded into another house, put permanently out of his reach, then his ladder disappeared, and he'd have no choice but to come running to stop it before it was too late. So I made an announcement, a public one. I had the Skywatch Pavilion put it out across the entire Fushui realm. In 3 days, the divine son of the Lingxiao Holy Land would formally take Zhou Qingling into his household, and every power in the realm was invited to witness it. It was an open trap. A Yang Mu, the kind of scheme where the enemy can see every gear turning and still can't stop himself from walking into it because the alternative is losing everything. Zhou Liang would know it was bait. He'd have to come anyway. The invitations landed, and the comedy started immediately. Every holy lord in the realm, Skyfire, Chaos, Winter, Dark Yin, the whole roster, read a mere divine son's little banquet and scoffed because that's what you do to a junior throwing his weight around. Then each of them noticed the second seal on the invitation, the Skywatch Pavilion's mark, the one that meant attendance is being logged and we will be noting who fails to appear. And every single one of them, in the space of a heartbeat, went from, I would not lower myself, to actively racing each other to arrive first, because offending the Skywatch was a good way to end your bloodline, and nobody wanted to be the one empty chair on the list. I love this realm. Everyone in it is terrified of exactly the right things. Meanwhile, somewhere I couldn't see, inside the human emperor pearl itself, in a hidden pocket of space the heavens had tucked him into, Zhou Liang sat cultivating, a month away from the peak of his power, riding high on a stolen inheritance and the sole legacy of an ancient warlord called the Shura King. His plan was patient and ugly. Take the woman's bloodline, become the emperor, come down and burn the world that had burned his town. He'd earned the tragedy honestly. The town, the massacre, that part was real. It just didn't make what he intended to do to a dying woman any less monstrous. And then the news of the banquet reached him, his ladder, about to be taken. His inheritance, about to walk out the door on another man's arm. He came out early, a full month before he was ready, straight into the exact spot I'd painted on the ground for him, which is the first rule of hunting protagonists, and I'll give it to you for free. You can't chase a chosen one, the heavens won't let you, but every chosen one has a thing he can't stand to lose, and if you pick that thing up and hold it where he can see it, he'll walk into your open hand every time. I spent the 3 days before the banquet in seclusion, eating the high-grade Dao fruit I'd won on a coin flip, and I came out of it having comprehended my second great Dao, the great Dao of killing, slaughter distilled, a law that made every intent to end a life sharper, truer, harder to survive. Forced to break things, killing to end them. A good pairing for a man throwing a party with a murder scheduled. The banquet itself was a crush. Every power in the realm had come, terrified of the Skywatch seal, packed shoulder to shoulder in my hall, all of them politely pretending they hadn't raced to get there. Zhou Liang made his entrance the way protagonists do. He kicked the doors open. 15 minutes earlier, a bell had rung 9 times over the Chaos Holy Land. The Chaos Bell, their sacred treasure, the one that only tolls to name a divine son. And then Zhou Liang had stolen it off its altar and flown here on borrowed authority, so he swept in glowing with the thing cradled in his arms and announced, to me and the entire realm, my gift for your little banquet is the Chaos Bell itself. Consider it your funeral toll. Behind him, the Chaos Holy Lord, a man named Sichuan, went the color of old cheese, because his holy land had waited eons for its first divine son, and its first divine son had promptly robbed its altar and dragged its holiest relic into a fight with the Long family in front of everyone who mattered. Sichuan scrambled forward to force his own chosen one to kneel and apologize, half to save Zhou Liang and half to save himself. I flicked a finger and cold snorted him through a dozen tables, pinned his elders where they stood. Stay out of it, I said. This is a family matter. Then I sprang the actual trap, and the trap was made of manners. Everyone here knows what happened, I told the hall, warmly, reasonably, the picture of a wronged host. This woman was dying alone in a mud village, coughing her life out, and I, a divine son with 1,000 better things to do, went and found her and cured her and offered her my house. Meanwhile, her own kin, this filial nephew, took the very treasure keeping her alive, abandoned her for 3 years, and has shown up today for one reason, to stop her from finally being safe so he can keep the thing he stole. I watched it move through the room. Because these were cultivators, and cultivators respect exactly 2 things: power and the appearance of virtue. And I had just handed them a chance to perform the second at 0 cost. One by one the Holy Lord stood and vouched for me, the noble divine son, the ungrateful nephew. Return the pearl, boy, return what you stole. The whole hall turned on Zhou Liang like a tide, and the beauty of it was that I hadn't lied about a single fact. Zhou Liang, cornered by his own biography, did the thing that seals every chosen one's fate. He panicked, and he said the true thing out loud. You'll never get the human emperor pearl. The human emperor pearl. Not my aunt's keepsake. Not the family treasure. He'd named the prize in front of everyone and confirmed he'd known exactly what he was stealing and exactly what it was worth. The last of the room's sympathy evaporated. And Zhou Qingling, thin, plain, 1 month of borrowed life in her, stood up from her seat beside me, faced the man she'd waited 3 years for, and cut the thread herself. Whatever you were to me, she said, quiet and steady, is over. I owe you nothing. I'll follow the young lord now. She turned to me and bowed, formal as a treaty. If the young lord will have me under his protection, I pledge him my loyalty. Not a wife's vow. A retainer's oath, an heir choosing a house. I inclined my head and accepted it, and the trap closed with a click you could feel in the floor. That's when Zhou Liang stopped being a schemer and became a weapon. He went berserk. His stolen Shura King legacy erupted out of him, the Shura path, a great Tao pressure that froze the QE of every cultivator in the hall solid. The whole room locked mid-breath. I walked through it. Because I had 2 great Taos of my own, and his borrowed one couldn't touch me, so I strolled across the frozen hall like a man crossing an empty street. He threw Asura Karma fire at me, an ancient battlefield flame that had cooked emperors. My sacred ice spirit fire opened its mouth and drank it. Exotic fire eats any Tao-born flame. His hottest weapon was my snack, so he went for the big one. He rang the chaos bell, the real one, the sacred relic, and space and time cracked around the toll. Reality itself starting to come apart in rings. It was, genuinely, a treasure that could kill people far above his level. I punched the sound wave. Great Tao of force. One force breaks all methods. The bell toll shattered against my fist like a pane of glass and fell out of the air in pieces. And while Zhou Liang was still staring at that, I reached into my own storage and took out a chaos bell of my own. Bigger than his. Older than his. Refined, my grandfather's note had said, from the corpse of a great emperor who'd been born with a chaos holy body, the real thing, of which Zhou Liang's stolen altar relic was the smallest, thinnest, most decorative shard. Yours is the chip, I told him. This is the block it came off of. Father and son. Want to guess how the family reunion goes? He bet on his bloodline. His chaos holy body reached out to seize my greater bell, to swallow it the way it was born to swallow lesser chaos things. My bell swallowed his instead. It reeled in the little stolen relic, digested it, and coughed up 999,999 coins into my account, and I kept the core fragment as a souvenir. Zhou Liang, his bell bond severed at the root, folded over, gasping, and then, because the heavens still had one hand on him, he tore open the human emperor pearl and fled back inside it, into the pocket of space I couldn't reach, swearing the usual revenge on his way out. Long Xiaoyun appeared at my shoulder. I can send word to the Long family, she offered, mild as ever. They'll level the entire Fushui realm to be certain he's dead. The hall, which had just started breathing again, stopped breathing again. Several holy lords grabbed their own jade pendants like men grabbing a railing. That won't be necessary, I said, because I had a better tool than my whole terrifying family. I had the one person in creation who could find the boy the heavens had hidden. Zhou Qingling closed her eyes. She was the human emperor's daughter, and Zhou Liang had spent 3 years feeding off her stolen pearl, and that meant her blood knew exactly where he was, no matter how thick the heavens wrapped him. She reached out along that thread, the one connection the Skywatch's greatest map couldn't trace, and she pulled. Zhou Liang came ripping back out of the human emperor pearl mid-gloat, dragged into the middle of my hall by the very woman he'd robbed, wearing the expression of a man who's just discovered the exit was a mirror. I didn't make a speech. I'd already made mine. I put a fist through his dantian, and as the half-formed Shurapath guttered out of him, I ended it properly with the great Tao of killing, and Zhou Liang, grade 9 protagonist, the boy the heavens had shielded so carefully that no map in the world could find him, died on my floor with his eyes open, undone by the one person he'd been sure was too weak to matter. Ding. Third child of destiny slain. 3 chosen ones. And I'd have called it a clean day's work, except that Zhou Liang's death cracked open the human emperor pearl, and out of the crack came a light that made every hair on my body stand up. Because killing the boy had been the easy part. What his death summoned was something else entirely, and for the first time since I'd woken up in this world, I was about to meet a person I couldn't beat. The pearl bled red, and something ancient came out of it. A soul. 8, Zhang Tall, wrapped in chains it had worn so long they'd become part of it, an aura like a battlefield that had never stopped screaming. This was the Shura King, one of the 8 kings who'd served under the human emperor in the War of the 10,000 Races, the one who'd personally killed more of the enemy than the other 7 put together. Zhou Liang had inherited a splinter of him. This was the whole thing, erupting out of the pearl to avenge its dead heir, and then it saw Zhou Qingling, and it stopped, because whatever thin thread had linked it to Zhou Liang, it could see the real bloodline standing right there, the true one, the human emperor's own. The Shura King's fury drained out of it and became something else. Reverence. It called, and 2 more of the 8 kings' remnant souls answered from inside the pearl, and all 3 of them, these 3 ancient warlords who'd shaped the age, knelt, and then, without hesitation, burned themselves down to nothing and poured what was left into the pearl, for the future human emperor, a last gift, freely given, from soldiers who'd waited an eternity for their emperor's heir to arrive. That's when time stopped. The whole Fushui realm froze mid-breath. Every guest, every holy lord, Long Xiaoyun, me, everything held, except for one figure that stepped out of the empty air where a moment before there had been nothing. I knew her, not her face. She never showed me her face, then or ever. I knew the shape of her, because there's a statue of exactly that shape standing in my family's ancestral hall, up in the upper realm, in the row where we keep the faces of gods. The human emperor. The legend herself, or the last echo of her, reaching down through her heir's pearl into a frozen moment to look at the man who just walked into her successor's life. She called Zhou Qingling little sister, a cover the way emperors use covers, and Zhou Qingling was in truth her heir, the next of the line. And then she turned that faceless attention on me, and she did not ask about the girl. She asked about Long Yuan, the Long family's first ancestor, our founder, the man who wrote the Chang'e art that runs in all our veins. The one who'd walked out of the War of the 10,000 Races untouched when she and all 8 of her kings had died holding the line, who'd somehow survived the thing that killed the greatest emperor of the age and every warrior she had, and then vanished from history so completely that even his own descendants only had a name and a technique. I didn't have an answer for her. I don't think she expected one. I think she just needed to say the name out loud one last time to somebody carrying his blood. Take care of her, the human emperor said. Her heir. The last thing in creation she had left to protect, entrusted to a stranger with a hard face because there was no one else left she could trust with it. I have no one else. One long, unreadable look. And then she was gone, and time came back, and the whole realm exhaled without knowing it had ever stopped. I'm not going to make a joke here. There's a version of me that undercuts everything, and it's most of me, but not this. A dying legend spent the last flicker of herself asking a favor of the one person present, and the favor was, keep the child alive. I don't joke over that. I filed it, and I meant it. I cleared the guests out fast, the terrified ones tripping over each other to leave, the Chaos Holy Land quietly folding itself into my Lingxiao while its holy lord played dead to keep his life, and then Zhou Qingling drew me into the pearl itself. Inside was a small world. Time ran strange there, a year inside for a day outside. There was a broken sword resting on a stone, the human emperor's own, kept as a keepsake, snapped in the war that ended her. And there was the legacy, waiting, and when Zhou Qingling triggered it, it did something I hadn't expected. It copied. Both of us received it, in full, no dilution. For her, it was an awakening. For me, it was a meal. I devoured a drop of the human emperor's own essence blood, and my body, which had been Dengchen that morning, tore straight up to the transcendent realm, sixfold, a jump so large it should have killed me and didn't, because the devouring body does not care what should, and wrapped inside the legacy was a Tao, my third, the great Tao of time. I sat in that small world and watched a seed I held sprout, flower, wither, and rot to dust in the space of a breath, and then run backward to a seed again, and I understood that I now held the three that mattered most: force, killing, and time. There were two more doors in that small world I hadn't opened yet: a 10,000 races blood pool for tempering the body, and a battle soul arena where you could fight the heroic spirits of your own realm until you clawed your way toward Emperor. Later. Across from me, Zhou Qingling was changing. The plain farm woman was burning away, and something regal was rising up underneath, the bloodline settling into its true shape, her surname resolving into the old imperial one it had always secretly been. Xuan Yuan. She wasn't Zhou Qingling anymore. She was Huangfu Qingling, and she was becoming the human emperor's heir in front of my eyes. And then a fourth person walked into my meditation, uninvited, and ruined the solemn mood entirely. Her name was Shen Qing, and she was the last of the 8 kings, the Mirror Queen, once the most beautiful woman in all of humanity, a mind reader and shapeshifter who in her prime could wear any face and steal any thought. Her remnant soul had survived down here, but it had survived badly. Ages of erosion had knocked something loose, and what was left was less a solemn ancient warrior and more a frivolous, scheming, permanently hustling ghost with a legend's memories and none of a legend's composure. The comedy started the instant she tried to read my mind and hit the system's blank wall. "I can see everything you're thinking," she informed me grandly, floating there, radiant, even half dissolved. "Your every secret is laid bare before the Mirror Queen. You may as well confess." "Then what am I thinking right now?" A pause. "Something devious. I can tell by your face." "You can't read me at all." "I absolutely can. I'm choosing not to, out of respect. You've bluffed me 3 times in one conversation." "That was a test," she said with total dignity. "You passed. Congratulations." I liked her immediately, which was inconvenient, because she was fading. Her remnant soul had a day left, 1 day inside the pearl, which was a year, but a year runs out. And there was exactly one way I knew to save a dying soul, and it was sitting in my storage space being pitch black and vaguely hungry. "I can keep you," I said. "In a banner I have. It'll hold your soul together. You won't dissipate." The Mirror Queen recoiled like I'd spat on the floor. "The human emperor," she said, scandalized, "would never make such an evil soul-eating banner. What kind of monster do you take her for?" I did not at that moment tell her whose banner it actually was. Some things you build up to. It took some talking, but the Mirror Queen chose surviving over principle, which is a very Mirror Queen choice. She went into the banner, and the instant her soul settled inside it, the dissipation stopped. She stabilized, whole, permanent, bound now as the banner's primary spirit and, per the rules of the thing, obligated to do as I said. She celebrated her new lease on existence by immediately eating all the leftover Furui souls rattling around in there, tidying the place up like a woman who just moved into a haunted house and had opinions about the previous tenants. I still hadn't told her whose banner it was. I was saving it. Huangfu Qingling, meanwhile, finished becoming herself. 8 totems of the 8 kings rose up and knelt to her. A 9-petaled golden lotus bloomed at her brow, and the frail farm woman was gone completely, replaced by the ancient human emperor body at Dongchen Peak. There was one more legacy zone I could have pointed her at, the 10,000 races blood pool, a body tempering trial that would push a physique well past its realm, and I sent her into it while I waited outside, because it was a cultivation furnace and nothing more, and she came out of it stronger and unbothered. Then I left her in the pearl. The Battle Soul Arena was the real prize in there, a place where she could fight the heroic spirits of the age and climb, over 30 or 50 years of inside time, all the way toward the Emperor Realm. She'd be invincible in her own little world, and completely helpless the moment she stepped out of it, which meant she was safest exactly where she was. 10 days had passed outside while I did all this. A year inside. Time is a strange currency, and I was learning to spend it. Zhou Liang's estate was a disappointment. He'd been a poor protagonist right to the end. The Chaos Bell already recycled, nothing left but clothes. But the title kept ripening, Destiny's great villain, deepening with the 3rd kill, and it coughed up a binding rope and pointed me at his 5 leftover opportunities, an Earth Vein Palace, a supreme spiritual vein, and filed under future events. Something called the Heavenly Evolution chess game, which I underlined for later. Then I spent 880,000 coins on the Netherworld battle armor, which does exactly one thing and does it perfectly. It passively drinks any attack that touches it. No activation, no thought, no warning required. Ambush me in my sleep and the armor handles it before I wake up. For a man collecting enemies at my pace, invincible defense was worth every coin. And then I spun 200 draws, and the lottery finally answered the question I'd been trying not to ask. 3 gold items came up. The first was a primordial long technique, the art of deception, which let me raise and command heart prison curse long, little worms that could seed illusions, bend a will, or quietly erode a soul from the inside. Useful, very useful, given where I was headed. The second gold item was a pair of stockings. I laid them out next to the panties and the doo-doo. A matched set. 3 pieces of one terrifying woman's wardrobe, each of them outpowering treasures that empires went to war over. And this time, the system, in the mood at last, explained itself. Note: the villain lottery does not create, it acquires. By the law of conservation, every reward is taken from somewhere. A real object, from a real world, from a real owner. I read that twice. Somewhere out there was a person. A real, living, presumably furious person, whose undergarments were more powerful than an extreme emperor weapon, which put her somewhere north of everything I'd met or heard of or could imagine. And my helpful little cheat had been, this entire time, quietly stealing that person's laundry and dropping it on my head as a consolation prize. I looked at the corner of my storage space where 3 pieces of the most dangerous wardrobe in creation now sat, facing the wall. When she finds out, I said to Momo, who yawned, she is going to be so upset. I did not yet know how right that was, or how far away she was, or that far away was, in her case, not nearly far enough. I put the stockings with the rest, and once again, resolved to think about it never. Mei Rolan and Xiangming Xia asked to come up to the upper realm with me, not as anything but what they were, my chief people, capable and placed and loyal for the sensible reason that I was the strongest thing they'd ever hitched to. And I said yes, because you take your good subordinates with you, and I intended to set them up somewhere proper to cultivate. The Fushui realm was handled. Ling Xiao had swallowed the Chaos Holy Land. It was time to go home to the family I hadn't earned. But home, it turned out, had already gotten interesting without me, because up in the upper realm, in a place called the Myriad Manifestation Dao Domain, my name was already doing work I hadn't authorized. The Ye family, Ye Shuyan's family, the girl with the pink long token, had risen fast on one rumor, that their daughter was tied to the Long Divine Sun, under Long protection, and that rumor had drawn a certain kind of attention in the shape of a scheming beauty named Wen Ruxu, a woman who collected suitors the way some people collect debts, strung them along for pills and favors, and was quietly in the pocket of a man called the Fourth Prince. Wen Ruxu had done her homework. She'd confirmed Ye Shuyan's secret, that the girl really was bound to the Long Heir, and she'd decided that was a ladder worth climbing. Her goal was simple and enormous: use the connection to reach the Long Divine Sun himself and become the young mistress of the most terrifying family in the sky. The Fourth Prince's goal was cruder: use her to get in good with the Long family and burn the Ye family down on the way. Neither of them had met me yet. Both of them were about to be extremely useful, because a villain doesn't chase away the schemers who come sniffing around his name. A villain gives them jobs. I went home to the upper realm on a divine arc with a sword immortal, 2 retainers, and a banner that talked. The banner talked constantly. Shenxing Shuang, freshly saved and freshly bored, spent the trip trying out shapes on me. She'd wear Long Xiaoyan's face and bat her eyes, wear a stranger's, wear mine, mostly to see if she could rattle me. She couldn't. The system kept my mind a blank wall, which drove her up one. Her real request, buried under all the theater, was serious though. Her soul was whole now, but she had no body, and to get one, she needed a specific and rare ingredient: the corpse of a female great emperor, 7th realm or above. I filed it as a standing job. Bring the Mirror Queen a dead empress. Get a great emperor tier bodyguard who has to do what I say. Worth keeping an eye out for. The immortal Long family was, in person, everything the lower realm was scared of, and then some. My parents were exactly the 2 doting monsters my inherited memories had promised. My father, Long Haoshan, hegemon of the age, spent our reunion being henpecked with real enthusiasm. Call me husband, not old Long, he complained, and my mother informed him that with his temperament he could pass for her grandfather's grandfather, and he took it because a man who can flatten continents still cannot win an argument with his wife. My mother's own father, I learned, was Zifu, the #1 swordsman of the entire upper realm, transcendent, one of the 3 names on everyone's do not provoke list, holed up in a place called the Burial Sword Mountain Range. My family tree was a weapons rack. There was politics waiting for me, because there's always politics. A faction under the 4th Elder had been angling to get their prized young descendant, a genius named Long Feng, the coveted entry slot into the family's ancestral land, the training ground reserved for the very best. Long Feng was gifted an 80% match for our founder's Chang'e art, and he'd decided the returning Divine Son needed to be shown his place on arrival, so he blocked my arc. Planted himself in the sky in front of it, arms crossed, to welcome me in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. I told the Ark to keep going. It ran him over. A treasure vessel the size of a temple, at cruising speed, straight through the spot where Long Feng had been standing. When I stepped off, I looked at the smear and the stunned crowd and said, "Was there a bird?" I think a bird hit the windshield, and my father laughed so hard he had to sit down. "More ruthless than his old man," he wheezed, delighted, wiping his eyes. "That's the immortal Long family for you. Warmth and casual homicide, served together." The fourth elder did not laugh. He went white, then red, and swore to drag me before the law enforcement hall for the murder of his prize. The trial was short because I'd read enough of these stories to know how the emperor is also bound by law scene is supposed to trap the powerful young master, and I'd brought a counter. Long Feng's father tried to take a swing at me on the way in, an entering saint, a realm above me on paper. My own father froze him mid-motion with a thought, but I waved him off because I wanted this. I turned, put the great Tao of killing through the man's mind so he bled from the 7 openings, and then, because his family needed to understand something about the difference between a realm and a body, I ended him with a bare fist. No Tao, no weapon, just the heavenly tyrant physique, punching a man a full realm above me into red mist. Physique alone. The law enforcement head convened his hall and replayed the scene of the Ark for the record, framing me as the aggressor who'd murdered a welcoming junior. He was proud of his mirror Tao, his ability to project the past for all to see. I had a better mirror Tao in my pocket. Her name was Shen Qingxuang, and she was one of the 8 kings, and she projected the whole sequence, not the edited clip, the whole thing. Long Feng deliberately blocking a divine son's arc to humiliate him. The arrogance, the threat, the choice. Under the family's own laws, that made Long Feng the aggressor. His line was ruled at fault. The verdict came down hard. His descendants purged 10 generations back. The fourth elder's faction gutted. The whole gambit turned into a crater. That's the thing about bringing a legend to a knife fight. Nobody expects the junior to outlawyer them with the ghost of a war hero. My father, it turned out, had done all this before. When he'd first taken the family head seat, the fourth elder of that era had challenged him, and my father had answered the challenge with a single palm, and the old ancestors had simply nodded, because the immortal Long family runs on one law under all the other laws: the strong are right. He demoted the current fourth elder to guarding the ancestral land's gate, which for a proud old cultivator is a life sentence of humiliation. And then, in the same breath, he handed the law enforcement head a 9-patterned imperial pill to save the man's comatose wife, buying, with one gift, a loyalty that no verdict could. My father was a statesman wearing a butcher. Then we had dinner, and it was the warmest thing that had happened to me since I died on Earth. My mother force-fed me venison from a deer demon she'd made my father go catch, and complained that I was too thin, and I teased her for being the laziest cultivator in a family of monsters, and my father got henpecked some more, and for a little while I wasn't a villain hunting protagonists. I was just a kid who'd come home. I thought about the boy whose body I wore, sitting at that same table. 2 of the most powerful beings in creation had loved him so much, cushioned him so completely, that he'd never had to become anyone at all. Soft, spoiled, and doomed. A walking stepping stone. Same parents, same treasures, same table. The only difference between him and me was that I had a system that made the cushions unnecessary. I could afford to be loved and still be dangerous. Then my father gave me his welcome home gift, and the warmth curdled a little, in an interesting way. He set a bone on the table. A supreme bone. One of the primordial ones, born with the world, carrying a terrifying inborn power. A priceless heirloom, he said. A gift for his boy. The system looked at it and told me the truth. Item recognized. Supreme bone. Origin. Child of destiny. Xiao Yuan. Stripped from host 2 days ago. Even at my own family's dinner table, in the safest place in creation, a chosen one's stolen destiny had come sliding into my lap on a plate. The heavens really could not stop feeding me. And this one, Xiao Yuan, was still alive somewhere, hollowed out, missing his bone, and that meant for the first time I had a target who wasn't going to die on schedule. He was going to make me work for it. Here's where the supreme bone came from, because it's the kind of story that tells you exactly what world I was in. There was an empire called Great Qi, and its emperor, everyone called him the old ruler, had a son named Xiao Yuan, the most talented child he'd ever sired. And when the old ruler heard that the terrifying immortal Long family wanted a nice gift, he did the reasonable thing for a man of his character. He tore the supreme bone out of his own most gifted son, wrapped it up with an imperial pill, and handed it to my family as a priceless heirloom in exchange for 10,000 years of protection. He sold his best child for a handshake. Xiao Yuan did not die. That was the problem. For everyone. He crawled up out of the grave they'd thrown him in, hollowed out, bone gone, and he knelt in the dirt and swore he'd bury his father alive. And then, in the dark, a voice found him. "Young man," it said, the way these voices always do. Do you crave power? Somebody had picked up my first escape target. They absorbed the supreme bone, waste not, and sent Long Xiaoyun and one of the family's quasi-emperor stewards down to gather everything they could on Xiaoyuan and Great Qi. Because he wasn't going to sit still and die on my schedule, he'd become the first chosen one to slip my hand. A persistent problem. And I found the best way to handle a persistent problem is to make sure you own several of the people standing next to it before it knows you're playing. The players came to me, as they do. Xiao Zhou, Great Qi's fourth prince, Xiaoyuan's half-brother, a mediocre man the story had cast as a minor stepping stone, arrived at the Long family with Wen Ruxu on his arm, the two of them here to report the delicious secret that the Ye girl was tied to the Long divine son. They thought they were bringing me useful gossip and buying their way into my favor. I let them think it. Then I put them both to work. To Xiao Zhou, I promised the throne of Great Qi. Simple, effective, a weak prince will do anything for a crown he was never going to get. To Wen Ruxu, I gave something quieter. I planted a heart prison curse long in her, not to own her body, that's the crude use, but to bind her loyalty and lock her tongue. A leash on the soul. She was a famous schemer, a woman who'd spent her life stringing suitors along for pills and favors, exactly the sort of person who could talk her way into anywhere, so I aimed her at the one place I needed eyes. Go find Xiaoyuan, I told her. Let his people recruit you, and then tell me everything he does. I sent my enemy a spy dressed as a prize, and he was going to be so pleased to catch her. Xiaoyuan built fast, because the story wanted him strong, and because he was, credit where it's due, genuinely good at this. His backer turned out to be a poison master, the heaven poison venerable, a man named Wei Long, who'd saved Xiaoyuan's life and then poisoned him with a leash of his own, because everyone in this story keeps people the same way, by putting a hand around their throat and calling it mercy. Wei Long had picked Xiaoyuan for a reason. On top of the Supreme Bone's residue, the boy carried a Calamity Demon body, and a Supreme Bone plus a Calamity Demon body in one person is a future catastrophe you'd want to own. Xiaoyuan recruited the way protagonists do. He rescued Wen Ruxu from a suitor he killed for the occasion, and my mole slid neatly into his camp exactly as planned. He talked a cautious Saint King, the Thunder Saint King, a genuinely powerful man, into his service with nothing but a silver tongue, and at his side the whole time was Anruolan, a prime minister's daughter, the childhood sweetheart who'd smuggled him out of Great Qi when his own father tried to erase him. She loved him the way the tragic ones always do, completely, and against her own interests. Then he overreached, and it nearly ate him. He went to a sorceress, the Seven Absolutes Venerable, a woman called Zhou Fang who drained people for power, and she took one look at his Calamity Demon body and made him a blood slave, a living well to draw from. Except the Thunder Saint King had a 10,000-year grudge with Zhou Fang, an old wound from a dead master she'd tormented, and he broke Xiaoyuan loose out of that ancient hatred. And Zhou Fang, faced with the man whose life she'd ruined lifetimes ago, joined Xiaoyuan's banner out of guilt, of all things. His faction stitched itself together out of grudges and debts and pity, which is a weak glue, and I made a note of that. His actual goal was not subtle. Raise a demon army out of the 3,000 devil domains, march it on Great Qi, and bury his father under the ashes of the empire. Xiao Zhou, my puppet prince, felt his half-brother's power growing and panicked. He ran to the old ruler, and the old ruler, a man who solved every problem by feeding someone to it, solved this one by executing his two other rival sons to clear the path, crowning Xiao Zhou his heir purely to keep the Long family's favor, and sentencing the entire Yun family to death for the crime of having a daughter who'd once helped Xiaoyuan escape, which meant that Anruolan, the one person who'd loved Xiaoyuan without a leash or a price, was about to lose her whole family to his war, and that, I realized, watching all of it unfold on the mole's reports, like a security guard watching a bank of monitors, was the crack in Xiaoyuan I'd been looking for. Not his poison master backer, not his borrowed Saint King. Her, the girl who loved him. Every fortress this man had built was held together by people who loved him or feared him. I was very good at both. Long Xiaoyun came back with the rest of Xiaoyuan's story, and I'll give it to you straight because he earned an honest telling. His mother had been a concubine the old ruler forced to poison her own brother, a rival prince, and when it was done she'd killed herself rather than live with it. Xiaoyuan got thrown away, raised on scraps and contempt for 25 years, and the day he finally broke through and swore to bury his father had him killed and his bone torn out. He wasn't a monster who woke up wanting the world to burn. He was a boy the world had set on fire and then blamed for the smoke, none of which changed what I was going to do to him. I'm a villain, not a hypocrite. I just prefer to know exactly who I'm dismantling. My people had also grabbed his poison master backer, Wei Long, off the board, caught the heaven poison venerable, and brought him to me with a leash of his own around his neck. I sent him back to Xiaoyuan's stronghold with a script. He'd ask my questions, in my words, at the moment I chose. Because I wasn't going to fight Xiaoyuan's fortress. I was going to stand outside it and pull the one thread holding it up. That thread was Enruelon. The old ruler, still solving every problem by feeding it a body, executed the entire Yun family in public to bait his son out of hiding. I watched it from the imperial dais, where the Emperor of Great Qi groveled at my elbow and called me his most honored guest, and I did not lift a finger to stop the executions, because I needed them to happen. I'm telling you that plainly. This is not the part where the villain turns out to have a soft center. And Ruolin was not, it turned out, a prime minister's ordinary daughter. She was the reincarnation of the White Bone Demon Emperor, a sovereign of the 3,000 devil domains, who in a past life had split her own great Nirvana demon body in half to save a dying Xiaoyuan she'd loved across lifetimes. When her father's head came off, that ancient thing woke up inside her, and the weeping girl became a quasi-emperor of white bone, grief given a body. And that was the moment I chose. I had Shen Qingxuang project the truth to her, the whole ugly real of it, that while her family was being butchered to draw Xiaoyuan into the open, Xiaoyuan had not come to save them. He'd used the distraction. He'd slipped past the executions to go recruit a poison master, and at his side the entire time was Wen Ruxu, my mole, whispering him further and further from the woman who loved him. I let Anruolin watch her devotion get spent, in real time, on a man who'd stepped over her family's bodies to shop for allies. She came apart, and then she came for him. She stormed his stronghold as a demon empress, and on the way she drained the sorceress Zhou Feng and the poison master Wei Long dry, two of Xiaoyuan's pillars, gone, drunk down by a heartbroken god of bone. And she found Xiaoyuan in the ruins and demanded to know if it was true. And Xiaoyuan, the emperor of mouth power, the man who talked a Saint King into his service and a guilty sorceress onto his banner, did what he did best. He wept. He reached for the past life love, the shared lifetimes, the tragedy of them both. He tried to talk her back onto the leash. I stepped in because I couldn't stand to watch a perfectly furious woman get her intelligence lowered in real time. Not out of mercy, out of taste. Xiaoyuan died with his mouth open, mid-plea, and Ruolin burned her great Nirvana demon body down to the wick to be sure of it. Wen Ruxu, my mole, put a knife in his back at the exact right moment, and Ruolin reached into his chest and took the heart he'd been aiming at everyone but her. Between the three of them there was nothing left to talk his way out of. Ding. Persistent target Xiaoyuan slain. Reward, 200 draws. New title unlocked, 3-second Emperor. I read the title twice, and my stomach dropped because 3-second anything sounds like a nerf. 3 seconds of what? Was this a downgrade? Had I finally hit the joke prize at the bottom of the villain lottery? I braced for the punchline. The punchline was that for 3 seconds, on a 3-day cooldown, I could hold the power of a great emperor at his absolute peak. 3 seconds is not very long. 3 seconds as the single most powerful thing below the heavens is an eternity. I stopped complaining, which was good timing because killing Xiaoyuan rang a bell in the 3,000 devil domains, and the demons came to collect. First, a crimson-eyed demon general, a great emperor sevenfold, which was a problem. Then, behind him, a puppet clone of the demon lord himself, which was a much larger problem, the kind that flattens a country as a greeting. I hit the title. 3 seconds, great emperor peak. In the first second, I took the demon lord's clone's hand off and dragged him out of the sky. In the second, I killed the clone. And in the third second, because I had the great Tao of time, and because I am petty, I rewound that one killing. Over and over, 101 times in a row. Somewhere far away, the real demon lord felt every death of his clone land at once. He convulsed 101 times, regressed a whole realm from the shock, and fled into seclusion to reconsider his entire life. The grand elder of my family arrived a beat later, ready to help, and found the fight already over and a demon general trussed up for questioning. He took it well. The Immortal Long family is used to arriving after I've cleaned up. There was one thing left, and it wasn't loot. My family had promised the old ruler 10,000 years of protection for Great Qi, and the old ruler had spent the intervening days feeding his own bloodline into the fire one prince at a time. When the dust cleared, there was exactly one survivor of the imperial line that mattered, a 5-year-old girl named Xiao Ling, abandoned in a corner of the ruined palace because she'd been born with a 9 calamities curse meridian, a body so unlucky the whole court had marked her forsaken and left her to die. Her mother had died shielding her with her own body. The girl had been sitting beside her for 2 days, too small to understand, too loyal to leave. I don't do the villain thing with children. I checked her, and under the curse, the panel showed me something the court had been too superstitious to see. Bind her to me, treat her well, and the 9 calamities meridian flipped into its mirror image. A reverse fate, a body whose cultivation rose the happier she got, a child who grew stronger by being loved. The most valuable battery in the world, and all it cost was not being cruel to a 5-year-old, which even a villain can manage. She called me dad first, out of confusion, and then benefactor once someone corrected her, and she swore in her tiny, serious voice to repay me someday. I set the Long family's spare quasi-emperors to rebuilding great chi around her as a puppet throne, gave her people to keep her safe and fed, and let her be happy on purpose for profit, which is the only kind of good deed a villain is allowed. 3 protagonists eaten, 1 persistent enemy finally put down, a demon lord humiliated, and a small cursed princess installed as my ward. And I still hadn't so much as knocked on the door of the real upper realm, the ancient clans, the ancestral land, the game the heavens were actually playing. That door was about to open, and the thing on the other side of it had an eye, and the eye had been watching me kill its children this whole time. By the time I hit the entering Saint realm, still 20, which the local monsters found insulting, I'd picked up a 4th Great Dao, the Great Dao of the Sword. I'd like to say I earned it. What actually happened is I comprehended it sitting next to Long Xiaoyun because the greatest sword talent in a billion years only had to be near me for me to catch the edge off her. That stayed the one soft line in a cold story. Her, patient, pretending not to notice she was the reason I got stronger. My next target was a strategist named Han Ming. To scout him, I went to a party, the Blade Emperor's banquet, and that banquet taught me exactly how much a name is worth. The banquet was a beauty pageant for arrogant young geniuses. Every rising talent in the region gathered in one hall to sneer at each other and be admired. I brought Long Xiaoyun. That was my whole strategy. A blade tempering disciple named Zhu Gang made his move early. He looked at my veiled bodyguard, decided she was decoration, and said something crude about her. Long Xiaoyun didn't answer him. She just glanced his way. He came apart. One sword glance, no motion I could see, and the loudest young man in the room was suddenly a quiet stain on the floor. The hall went silent. I sipped my tea. Was that necessary? I asked her. He interrupted the tea, she said. The host was the problem. The Blade Emperor, a genuine power, the local king, was off in sealed seclusion, having left strict orders that he was not to be disturbed for any reason by anyone on pain of death, which was inconvenient because I wanted him at the party. So I sent him an invitation. I had a jade slip with my family's mark on it delivered directly into his sealed chamber. That should have been impossible. A sealed seclusion is sealed. That was the point of doing it. To prove there was no wall in his house I couldn't reach through. The Blade Emperor came out. He came out of a seclusion he'd sworn to die in rather than break, walked into his own banquet, took one look at the single character stamped on that slip, and did something no king does in front of the people he rules. He abolished his own house rules on the spot, cancelled his own decree, and he bowed. Deep, formal, to a junior young enough to be his great-grandchild, in front of every genius he'd invited to worship him. One character. Long. That's all it took. I decided to see how far it went. I stood up and told the Blade Emperor, warmly, that he wasn't worthy of his own title, that my grandfather would have drawn his sword before finishing a sentence with a man like him. I insulted him in his own hall, at his own party, to his own face. He took it. For a long, trembling moment, the most powerful man in the region ate an insult from a boy because the boy had the right surname. Then his pride cracked, the way I'd been prodding it to, and he reached for his blade, because a man can only be humiliated so long before he'd rather die. I let him reach. Then I killed him. Netherworld armor to eat his best strike. 3 seconds of borrowed Emperor Peak to close the gap, the great Tao of killing to finish it. The king of the region, dead at his own banquet, over a party I'd thrown to lure him out of a room. The other geniuses had all been very rude to me on the way in. Long Xiaoyun took out a list, their names, their families. And across the region in the same hour, the houses of everyone who'd sneered at me simply stopped existing, long family strikes falling in unison, whole bloodlines erased between one breath and the next. The ones who survived did it by racing each other to bring me the heads of the offenders to prove they'd never been on the wrong list. 2 things came out of that day. First, the Blade Emperor had secretly been a son of the Chen family, one of the 5 ancient clans, which meant I just made a large and patient enemy I'd deal with later. Second, and worse, an elder of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, shaking, cornered, coughed up one of his order's own prophecies to try to buy his life. A bloodthirsty lone star would rise, he said. It would destroy the pavilion that birthed it, and then it would turn its blade east. East was the Long family. Professional future readers had forecast my own execution. They'd even named the blade Han Ming. I've never liked being told how my story ends, so I went to have a word with the ending. Han Ming was the smartest man I ever killed, so I want to do his scheme justice, and then tell you how it broke on the one variable he couldn't read. He was the abandoned bastard of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's own master, a man named Gao Wuyang who'd thrown mother and child away, and Han Ming had grown up on that grievance and turned it into a mind like a chess engine, feather fan, eyes that saw through any illusion, a gift for divination that let him read 3 moves ahead of everyone at the table, and he'd built a plan to burn down his father's pavilion and protect his own adoptive Han family in a single motion. The plan, compressed, he manipulated 3 powers into war by dangling a rare dragon-pattern fruit and a rarer woman, Lian Muxu, an alchemy goddess out of the Dan Alliance, granddaughter of the 7th-rank alchemist Lian Zhaoyang, born with an innate medicine spirit body, the single most valuable pharmacist of her generation. He murdered 2 pavilion disciples for the fruit, framed it, baited the pavilion master's wife into trapping Lian Muxue, and lit the fuse so that the enraged Lian Zhaoyang would march the entire Dan Alliance army to raise the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion off the map. His father's house destroyed by someone else's hand while he stood clean at the edge of it. It was beautiful work. It would have worked. It didn't, because Lian Muxu, it turned out, was mine. When I slipped into the middle of the war quietly, wearing a borrowed face, standing in the crowd, and got a look at her panel, there it was, the pink long token, another of the 9 my family had bound to their heir years ago. Lian Muxue was one of my allies in waiting, betrothed in the old inscribed sense, an alchemy goddess whose medicine spirit body would one day pour its output into my faction's furnaces. Han Ming had, without knowing it, built his masterpiece around stealing a piece off my board. That's the trouble with reading the future. You can see everything except the one man the heavens have stopped writing about. I stepped out of the crowd. The old pavilion master, a quasi-emperor at his peak, a man who'd once killed a great emperor, slapped his own scheming daughter-in-law across the hall, dropped to his knees, and offered me his life on the spot because he'd read the same character everyone reads. I declined. I had a use for his pavilion still standing. I peeled Lian Muxu out of the trap Han Ming had built for her, and I did it without a single degrading thing attached, because an alchemy goddess is a national treasure, not a bargaining chip, and any man who treats her like the second is telling you exactly how small he is. Then I went to find the man himself. Han Ming's whole power was his eyes, the double pupils, the sight that let him read the future and see through every illusion. So before I let him see me coming, I made his eyes lie to him. There was a secret passage his divination had shown him, a guaranteed escape route, a fixed point in his beautiful plan. I moved it. Just picked it up and set it down somewhere else, so that the future his eyes had promised didn't match the ground under his feet. Then I found him, and I stabbed him, not to kill, to test, and did it twice more, 3 times total, each strike landing exactly where his eyes had sworn it wouldn't. A man who has trusted his own sight his whole life, watching it fail 3 times in 3 seconds, does the one thing that finishes him. He starts to doubt his eyes, and a divine sight that its owner no longer trusts loosens. The double pupils detached. I took them, gouged them out, and devoured them with the devouring body, and they gave me a gift I hadn't known to want, not just his future sight, a deeper thing underneath it, an eye that could see the quality of any Kui, read the truth of any technique, and when I lifted it to the sky, see the heavenly Tao itself. I killed Han Ming, the lone star, the man forecast to come for my family, with his own stolen eyes in my skull, and that's when the heavens stopped pretending they weren't watching. There was no tribulation cloud, there was worse. A divine punishment came down, not the automatic sort that greets every breakthrough, but a targeted one, personal, the sky reaching down specifically for me. And with my new eyes, for the first time, I could see what was doing it. Behind the clouds, above the whole upper realm, there was an eye, vast, ancient, the heavenly Tao eye, the thing I'd felt watching me since the 3rd protagonist died, and now that I could see it, I could see something the old stories all insisted was impossible. It had an expression. It was angry. It looked at me the way a man looks at something crawling on his food, and the emotion in it was pure, undiluted disgust. The heavens weren't a blind machine sorting fates. They had a face, and the face hated me, personally, for eating the children it had so carefully raised. I'd spent this whole story assuming I was cheating a system. It turned out I'd been picking a fight with a god, and the divine punishment it had just aimed at my head was, by a wide margin, the largest thing that had ever tried to kill me. I had exactly 1 card that might answer it, and, because the villain lottery has a sense of humor to the very end, the card was a hairpin. The hairpin was the 4th piece. I want you to sit with that. Panties, doo-doo, stockings, and now a jade hairpin. 4 items of one unknown woman's wardrobe. The match set the villain lottery had been assembling on my head over months, each one outpowering treasures that started wars. I'd resolved to never think about it, and now the biggest thing in the sky was coming down to erase me, and the only object I owned that could possibly answer it was a lady's hair ornament. I threw it up at the divine punishment anyway. What else was I going to do? The hairpin ate the divine punishment, all of it, the whole targeted wrath of the heavens, swallowed by a hair accessory like it was a light drizzle. And then, because it apparently was not done, it kept going. It flew up through the broken clouds, and it found the heavenly Tao Eye, that vast, disgusted ancient thing, and it stabbed it, right through. A single jade hairpin, punching a clean hole in the eye of God. The heavens screamed. I felt it in my teeth. And then it started to rain, and the rain was red, because the heavenly Tao Eye was bleeding. A blood rain across the entire upper realm, every drop of it a piece of a wound I just put in the sky itself. Here is the part I didn't understand until much later, so I'll only give you what I knew then. The heavens had been holding something down. For as long as anyone could remember, cultivators in the upper realm had hit a wall at the Emperor Peak and never climbed past it. No supreme realm, no ascension, a ceiling nobody could name and nobody could break. That ceiling was the heavenly Tao Eye, pressing its thumb on the whole world. I'd just put a hole in the thumb. The shackles broke. All across the upper realm, in the same instant, the buried old ancestors of the 5 ancient families and 1,000 hidden monsters felt the pressure lift for the first time in an age, and they began, one after another, like a chain of lights coming on, to break through past the ceiling, toward realms the world had been forbidden for epochs. The stories would later call it the chaotic era, the golden age, the age of monsters. It started with a hairpin and a hole in the sky, and it was, technically, my fault. Han Ming was already dead by then. The loss of Lian Muxiu, the ally he'd tried to steal, becoming the exact wound the heavens would later use to sharpen the next chosen one against me, though I didn't know that yet either. The system, cheerful as ever amid the cosmic bloodletting, handed me a new function as a reward, and this one I loved. Luck recycling and transfer. When I killed a child of destiny, I could now take the fortune I stripped off them, the heaven's own favor, and pour it into someone I chose, an ally, my people. And a person carrying a transferred body of luck came off the heavens grid entirely, protected, accelerated, their cultivation smoothed like a chosen one's, but loyal to me instead of to fate. I thought about Long Xiaoyun guarding a man who didn't need guarding all night at the mouth of an ice cave. I thought about a 5-year-old getting stronger every time someone was kind to her. For the first time, the system had given me a tool that wasn't for taking. It was for giving. A villain's version of a blessing, stolen from the sky and handed to the people I'd decided to keep. Down below, my father and my grandfather, Long Hyoshin and old Zifu, 2 of the most terrifying men alive, felt the ceiling break and without a word to anyone, went straight into seclusion. Because the ceiling was gone, and that meant the climb was open again, and there were realms up there that no one in living memory had been allowed to reach. The whole world was about to start racing upward at once. Every ancient monster, every ambitious clan, every chosen one the heavens had been quietly raising for exactly this. And the heavens, bleeding, one-eyed and furious, were going to spend the entire race trying to grow a blade sharp enough to finally put me down. Good. I was getting bored of easy. Breaking the sky did wonders for my mail. Within a month of the Red Rain, every power in the upper realm that still had a pulse had sent an envoy to the Long family begging to become a vassal, not to visit, not to negotiate, to submit. Because the message had gotten around, the ceiling was gone, the ancient families were falling one by one, and the last safe place to stand in a world coming apart was in the very long shadow of the name Long. I let Shen Qingshuang screen them mostly, because watching grown old ancestors grovel is funny exactly once, and then it's paperwork. But a few of them earned a personal audience through sheer commitment to the bit. My favorite was a sect master from some middle domain who arrived with a cart, an actual cart, hauled by his own disciples, piled with every treasure his sect owned, and on top of the pile, wrapped in silk, his own grandson, a genuine prodigy, the boy his whole line had pinned its future on, offered up as a gift to serve in my household. Divine son, the old man said, forehead to the floor, my sect is yours, my treasures are yours, my heir is yours, we ask only to exist beneath your protection. I looked at the boy on the cart, who looked back at me with the specific terror of a young genius who has just learned his grandfather will trade him for safety without blinking. I've been that boy. Different world, same cart. Keep your grandson, I said. Raise him yourself. Teach him that a family that sells its best child for a handshake isn't worth protecting. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, off a man named the Old Ruler, and it had cost him his whole empire. Your sect can be a vassal. The boy stays free. That's the deal, and it's more than you offered him. The old man wept with gratitude and confusion. The boy stared at me like I'd grown a second head, and I filed another sect under the Long banner and made, without particularly trying, a young genius who would spend the rest of his life quietly loyal to the villain who'd refused to let his own grandfather sell him. That's the thing nobody writes about being feared. Fear makes people hand you everything. What you do with the things they hand you, that's the part that decides whether they fear you or follow you. I'd watched every other power in this world take the grandson and the cart and the treasures and grind them all up the same. I took the treasures and gave the grandson back, and it cost me nothing, and it bought me something no amount of grinding ever could. Momo, meanwhile, had opinions about the vassal carts. Specifically, she had opinions about the food on them, and she developed a habit of napping directly on top of whatever tribute pile smelled best, so that terrified envoys kept having to present their life's treasures to a small white cat who would crack one eye, judge the offering, and go back to sleep. One envoy, misreading the situation catastrophically, tried to shoo her off his family's ancestral gourd. Momo did not move. Momo looked at him, and the envoy, feeling the weight of a beast whose combat power sat somewhere north of an emperor, slowly withdrew his hand and apologized to the cat. "She's not a guard," I told him. "She's just a cat that got powerful. It happens to the best of us." "Meow," Momo agreed, and reclaimed the gourd as a pillow. I want you to hold on to that image, because it's the truest picture of what the Long family had become. A hall full of the proudest powers in creation, kneeling, offering up everything they had, and at the center of it, a spoiled, soul-eating cat sleeping on their treasures, and a villain who'd decided, more or less on a whim, to be the kind of monster who gives the grandson back. The world had spent an age terrified of the immortal Long family. It was about to spend the next one finding out that the scariest thing about us wasn't the cruelty. It was that we could afford not to be cruel, and sometimes chose it anyway, and you never got to know which day was which. Only the divine sun is allowed into the family's ancestral land, and now that I'd broken the sky and opened the road upward, it was time I went in. 16 old ancestors waited inside. 16 Emperor Realm monsters, all that remained of a family that had once counted its emperors past 100. That number stuck with me, 100, down to 16. When I asked, Long Chu told me why, and it was the first crack of the real story showing through. Breaking past. The Emperor Peak, in the age of the sealed sky, wasn't just forbidden, she said. It was fatal. The heavens would let you try, and then at the summit, they'd hit you with a chi deviation that made you kill yourself, or you'd simply vanish, mid-breakthrough, gone without a corpse. We threw emperor after emperor at that ceiling. We lost most of them to it. The ones who stopped climbing are the ones who got to grow old. And their founder, Long Yuan, the man who wrote the art in all our veins, had, according to the oldest of them, not stopped. He'd climbed past the ceiling in an age when that was impossible, and then vanished from the world, the way the heavens made climbers vanish, except none of them believed the heavens had gotten him. There's a difference, they said, between a man the sky erased and a man who walked out the top of the world on purpose. They thought Long Yuan had done the second, they just didn't know where he'd walked to. I filed that under the biggest question in my life, and I took their tests. The first test was Long Chen's. A pit, and out of it climbed a swarm of Saint King Realm netherworld skeletons, a realm above me, howling. I put my hands in my sleeves and walked into them. I didn't use a Dao, I didn't draw a weapon, I let the heavenly tyrant body do the whole job. Realm above me monsters coming apart against bare knuckles, bone dust, and dead silence, because I wanted the old ancestors to see the physique before they saw anything clever. When it was done, I hadn't taken a mark, and Long Chen, who'd expected at least a good fight, closed his mouth. The second was Long Xiao's. He raised the 5 elements Great Tao, metal, wood, water, fire, earth, a master's life work, 5 laws braided into one crushing bloom coming down on my head. Freeze, I said. The Great Tao of Time locked the whole technique mid-flower. 5 elements, an age of study, hanging motionless in the air like a photograph. I stepped through the gap in it and tapped Long Xiao once on the forehead, and the trial was over. All 16 old ancestors gave their approval. Everyone, which had never happened. The current Grand Elder, in his own youth, had won over 3 of them and been called a prodigy for it. 16 out of 16 made the old monsters look at me the way you look at weather that shouldn't be possible. They gave me gifts to match. 3 extreme Emperor weapons, a spear called Emperor Slayer, a ruler called Azure Nether, and a nameless gourd that ate light, which I named the Immortal Slaying Gourd because it could swallow a galaxy and ask for seconds. An Emperor-grade spiritual plant that raised your realm a full step just by being eaten, saved for a rainy day, and more. Refining 3 extreme Emperor weapons is supposed to take a master years apiece. I hit the 3-second Emperor, held Great Emperor Peak for 3 seconds, and bound all 3 at once, in that single breath, before the timer ran out. The old ancestors watched a 20-year-old do in 3 seconds what should have taken 3 centuries, and I watched them realize the same thing my father had realized at dinner. The immortal Long family had, entirely by accident, produced the exact monster it had spent 100 emperors trying and failing to become. I didn't tell them it was a system. Some things you keep. But I let them believe in me, because a family that believes in you hands you the keys to the ancestral hall, and there were things in that hall, behind a certain founder's statue, that I was going to need very badly before this was over. First, though, the heavens had a game to run, because the moment the sky cracked open and the whole world started racing upward at once, the heavenly Tao rolled out a board, and every surviving chosen one in creation was invited to play. The heavens called it the Heavenly Evolution chess game, and it was a trap dressed as an honor. Here's what it actually was. A recreation, a real one, a whole pocket world spun up to relive the War of the 10,000 races, all the old clans reborn inside it. Dragon, phoenix, human, witch, heavenly demon, golden-winged rock, the works. Every under 50 genius, one slot per faction, dropped into the age of monsters to fight for pieces and climb a sky-spanning scoreboard called the Heavenly Stele. And every surviving child of destiny in creation had been invited because the heavens had built this game to grow them, to forge in a war-shaped furnace the blade that would finally cut me down. So naturally I signed up. The first thing the game did was rank us, and the first thing my rank did was make everyone laugh. Because the system firewalled the Heavenly Stele's attempt to scan my cultivation, and rather than reading unknown, it read worthless, and I appeared at the absolute bottom of the board. Dead last, below children, below the heavenly demon whelp who couldn't fly straight. The four great families saw the long air ranked beneath their janitors and celebrated openly, and I let them, because there is no dramatic irony sweeter than a room full of geniuses gloating over a scoreboard that is lying to them on my behalf. I bent the rules while they gloated, grabbed 2 race slots at once, a golden-winged rock and a human, because a belly band and a hairpin from my little collection put out enough aura to scare off the game's own referee punishments, and the game decided not to argue with objects it couldn't understand. 2 clans, 1 player, off the books. And the arena, it turned out, was Shenqing Shuang's. The ground the recreated human domain stood on was her old country, from the life where she'd been one of the 8 kings. She got quiet, walking it. I found another echo of her there, a second Mirror Queen consciousness the heavens had pieced into the game and trapped, and I recruited her too, because you can never have too many mind readers, and because leaving a piece of my banner spirit stranded in a war she'd already died in once felt wrong. Then the face slap started, and the board began to eat its favorites. Chen Qiang went first, and he went funny. The Chen family heir marched into the Dragon clan expecting to be crowned and got thrown out, then tried the Witch clan and got thrown out of that one too. Because the Witch clan, the moment Long Xiaoyun walked among them, stopped taking orders from anyone and started worshipping her, bowing, calling her ancestor. A whole reborn race of witches recognizing my sword immortal on sight as something holy, which the game was not supposed to allow, and which was the first hard hint that Long Xiaoyun was carrying more in her blood than a talent for swords. Chen Qiang, kicked out of 2 clans in an afternoon, became the first genius eliminated, and the Chen family became the laughingstock of the board. Xuemeng went next, and his elimination came with history. There was a grudge between us older than my current body. The boy whose life I wore had, as a small child, played a humiliation on a 5-year-old Xuemeng so thorough it had lodged in him as a lifelong heart demon, the kind of thing that curdles a proud man from the inside. I didn't have to do much. I burned his prized spirit grass with exotic fire, tanked his 36 hammer secret art in the netherworld armor without blinking, and let the old wound do the rest. The heart demon he'd carried since he was 5 swallowed him whole, and Xuemeng went out consumed by a joke played on him before either of us could cultivate 2 of the 5 ancient families out of the game in one arc, and in the middle of it, a new thread I couldn't read. Qin Yao, the acting leader of the Phoenix clan, stunning, powerful, looked at me across the board with a hatred so deep and so specific that it had to have a story behind it, and yet the panel gave me nothing. She wanted to tear me apart, and she wouldn't say why, and I'd learn. The why eventually, and the why would turn out to be, of all the enemies I'd made, one of the pettiest and most personal on the list. For now, I filed her, killed a mouthy human elite named Qin Wei with a power no one could see to cow his whole faction into silence, and turned my attention to the 2 names still climbing the stele, a heavenly demon prince named Duan Li, and a dragon, a boy called Wang Hao, who was doing something the recreated war had never seen, climbing the dragon god ladder, floor after impossible floor, 900 of them, higher than any dragon in the game's memory. The heavens had built this furnace to forge me a nemesis. Wang Hao was the blade taking shape in the fire, so I went to break it before it cooled. Wang Hao died on my spear with all 4 of my Daos riding it, and he was worth every one of them. The boy had climbed 900 floors of the dragon god ladder, and the heavens had poured a war's worth of favor into him, and when he fell, it was the first true death inside the game, the kind the whole board felt. Killing him woke something old. An ancient dragon named Yinglong, a beast so vast it had chained itself down on purpose to keep from breaking into the Emperor realm, and being smote for it, felt its bloodline's chosen son die and tore its chains apart in fury. My grandfather, old Siefu, met it in the sky, and the 2 of them turned a corner of the recreated war into their private argument. Duan Li, the heavenly demon prince, I put out of the game almost as an afterthought, and 3 of the 5 ancient families were now humiliated on the board where the whole world could watch, which left Qin Yao and the mystery of why she wanted me dead. She finally told me, and I have to be honest, it was small. Years ago, when I was a spoiled little heir, the Long family had assigned her, a gifted girl from a lesser house, to serve me, to wait on the sickly young master, and the sickly young master had humiliated her for it, leaned on the difference in their stations, made her feel like a thing instead of a person, and then, when she'd been considered for one of the 9 and found wanting, discarded her too. She'd carried it for years, that specific burn of being made small by a boy who'd never earned his height. Here's the thing. She didn't want revenge in the end. She wanted to prove she'd been worth more than the boy had decided. So when I met her as I was now, a man who treated a 5-year-old cursed princess like a treasure and an alchemy goddess like a national asset, she recalibrated the way the smart ones do and chose to stand with me on the terms she'd wanted all along, as someone worth having, not someone to be used. I took the offer. I've made a lot of enemies. I don't mind converting one back when the conversion is honest. And in the middle of all of it, the truth about Long Xiaoyun finally surfaced because the game couldn't hold it down anymore. She wasn't just my mother's disciple with impossible sword talent. She was a witch ancestor. Shi Chen, one of the 9 born at the very dawn of the world. The reason a whole reborn race had knelt to her on sight. The woman who'd guarded my sleep at a cave mouth was one of the oldest and most powerful things in creation, wearing a veil, pretending to be a bodyguard, quietly in love with a man who spat tea when she teased him. I did not know what to do with that information. I still don't, entirely, but it explained a lot. Then the heavens sprang the trap they'd built the whole game to spring. The board turned on us all at once. The recreated war, the pieces, the whole pocket world, it clenched, becoming a mountain of pure pressure meant to crush everyone inside it, the heavens deciding that if the game had failed to grow a champion strong enough to kill me, it would simply drop the mountain on the lot of us and start over. A cage disguised as a contest, snapping shut, and it had a flaw. The cage was a chess set, and a chess set only closes if every piece is on the board, and I'd hidden a piece. The Mirror Queen Echo I'd recruited was tucked inside the Human Emperor banner, off the count, a missing square in the heavens' perfect trap. The mountain couldn't finish closing around a game that was 1 piece short. It hung there, straining, incomplete, because I'd cheated at the heavens' own game the way you cheat at any game the house has rigged, by palming a piece before the deal, so I put my finger through the gap. The Great Desolation Prison. Heaven Finger, the founder's stored strike, the one that could poke a hole in the sky. I aimed it not at an enemy, but at the closing cage itself, and a figure of god and demon rose up behind me and reached up through the flaw in the board, and it did not destroy the heavenly Dao Eye. It caged it. The same trick the heavens had tried on me, turned around and dropped over the Eye of God, a prison of pure imprisoning force, closing around the one-eyed, bleeding, furious thing that had been running this whole game to grow my executioner. And the moment the eye was caged, the heavenly stele, the great scoreboard hanging over the whole upper realm, the visible thumb of the heavens on the world, cracked from top to bottom and shattered, and every last ounce of the sky's pressure on the world simply lifted. The chaotic era didn't dawn, it arrived, all at once, complete. The ceiling was gone, the scoreboard was gone, the eye that had held the whole world down for epochs was in a box, and the world stood up straight for the first time in memory and looked around, dizzy, at a sky with no one watching from behind it. I'd walked into the heavens furnace to break the blade they were forging. I walked out having put the blacksmith in a cage. I would not stay smug for long, because with the sky's thumb off the world, everything the sky had been holding back came loose at once, and not all of it lived inside the upper realm. Some of it had been waiting, a very long time, just outside. With the ceiling gone, the world went vertical. Everywhere at once, the old monsters broke through past Emperor Peak into the Supreme Realm, the height the caged eye had forbidden for epochs. My family took 4 in a rush, the 3 old ancestors and my father, all supreme nearly together. That made the immortal Long family, already terrifying, into a thing the other 4 clans could only crane their necks at. My grandfather crossed too, so did the ancient dragon Yinglong, chains and all, and the moment the sky's thumb lifted, the world found out it had neighbors. There'd always been an outside, a beyond, past the realm's edge, held out while the eye held everything down. Now it wasn't. Extraterritorial powers started slipping in through the seams. A chaos-eyed envoy walked into the Chen ruins and offered terms. A new heavenly demon killed and wore the old demon lord and took his throne. My father, freshly supreme, told me what he'd pieced together. Several outside powers, supreme and up, disunited, all of them stepping carefully around the Long name. Good. Fear is a fence you don't have to build. Then I gathered the 9, and I want to do this properly, because in the wrong story it's an ugly thing, and in mine it wasn't. I called them to Star Illusion Hall one at a time, and the first through the door was Lian Muxu, the alchemy goddess, granddaughter of a 7th rank master, born with a medicine spirit body, the single most valuable pharmacist of her generation, and, per the pink token my family had bound to their heir an age ago, one of the 9. She came in wary. The last time a young master had wanted her, it had been Han Ming, building a whole war around stealing her like a rare herb. I'm told I belong to you, she said. Flat. Testing. You belong to a furnace and a reputation, I said. Neither of which is me. Here's the actual offer. I have a faction, and it's about to be the largest thing in this realm, and it needs an alchemy division that can outproduce a whole Dan alliance. That's you. You run it. You answer to results, not to me. And in exchange, you get resources most sects would go to war over, protection, nobody in the sky can crack, and this? I held out a wisp of stolen luck, a body of fortune, peeled off a dead chosen one, off the heavens grid. What is it? A hero's destiny, with the hero removed. Take it and your cultivation climbs like fate itself is greasing the rails, except fate has nothing to do with it. You'll be mine, not heaven's. There's a difference, and it's the only one that matters. She looked at the luck. She looked at me. She'd spent her whole life being wanted for what her hands could make, and here was a man offering her a division to command and a fortune stolen out of the sky, and treating the arrangement like a hire instead of a harvest. And if I say no? Then you walk out, and I wish you well, and you're on your own in a realm that eats alchemists. But you won't say no, because you're the smartest person in 3 sects, and the smart choice is standing right in front of you being unusually reasonable about it. She took the luck. So did the others, one after another. Mei Zhou, Ye Shuyan, the rest of the 9. Each of them a genius the heavens had earmarked, each of them choosing, with clear eyes, the strongest patron in the sky. I poured stolen fortune into all 9, and their cultivation went up like a formation of rockets, and my faction gained a general staff no power in the Immortal Realm could match. They weren't trophies. They were the fastest growing, most dangerous team ever fielded, and they'd picked the winning side on purpose. Everyone came out ahead. That's the only kind of deal I make. The loot, meanwhile, had gone grim in a way I found funny. I drew a corpse from the lottery, an old spirit race body, worth a whole realm, and absorbed it up to Sovereign Second, 4 Daos glowing. Then the system, in the fine print, told me where it came from. It had stolen it. Out of a cave from a young man named Shen Tian, a chosen one destined to find that exact body and rise on it. The system reached into his story, took his moment, and dropped it on my head, and with his destiny suddenly gone, Shen Tian got beaten to death by a random bully 3 days later over nothing. That's the reverse of a chosen one. Somewhere out there, protagonists were dying in ditches because their guaranteed fortune had quietly rematerialized on me. I didn't lose sleep. I'd already made peace with being the thing at the top of the food chain, and Momo woke up long enough to drink the last of a dead dragon's ancestral blood, gain a slice of ancestral dragon power, badly alarm the ancient dragon Yinglong, and go back to sleep on my shoulder. She was becoming slowly the single most powerful nap in creation. Then the undergarment situation escalated to crisis levels. Far beyond the realm, in an ice coffin in a place even the caged heavens couldn't reach, a woman woke up. My eyes couldn't see her clearly. Just an outline wreathed in chaos, with dragons turning slow circles around her like planets around a sun. But I felt the exact instant she woke. Because the instant she woke, she noticed her clothes were gone. All of them. And across creation, in my own hall, I sneezed hard enough to knock the cat off my shoulder. 4 pieces now, facing the wall. System, I said, into the quiet. How far away is she? The system declined to say. The system never said. But far away, I was starting to suspect, was going to turn out to be extremely relative. I put it out of mind. I had a fishing rod for gods to test, a remote system powered by the sliver of heavenly Tao origin in that hairpin that reached down past the upper realm into the thousands of lesser worlds and lit up every chosen one in all of them like ships on a radar. And I had staff now, so I sat back in my hall like a security guard at a wall of monitors, picked a promising young protagonist out of some distant world, pointed an agent at him, and had his fortune stripped and shipped up to me before he ever learned my name. He died shortly after. They always did. A robbed chosen one is just a corpse the heavens haven't caught up to yet. I had a whole cosmos of them to work through, a family war brewing outside, and a cold, furious, underdressed goddess somewhere in the dark, going through an empty wardrobe, getting angrier by the hour. Busy times. The extraterritorial heavenly demon who'd stolen the demon lord's throne decided to test the Long family, and my father answered the test personally, and I got to watch a Supreme Realm duel from my own front garden. The demon came with the entire army of the 3,000 devil domains at his back and supreme middle power in his fists, and my father, Long Haoshin, supreme middle himself, but it turned out unfairly strong even for that. Walked out to meet him alone. The three old ancestors, all likewise supreme, found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. My father waved them off. Then he opened up the Long family heads' legacies one after another, called on the great Tao of destruction, and had a conversation with the demon that leveled a mountain range and ended with the demon in pieces. 100+ Long emperors mopped up the army behind him like a man wiping down a counter. The whole upper realm watched the immortal Long family erase a supreme extraterritorial and his horde in an afternoon, and the message landed exactly as intended. My father came home, got fussed over by my mother for the dust on his robes, and complained that the demon hadn't even been a good warm-up. I love my family. They're the most dangerous people alive, and they argue about laundry, but the fight coughed up two pieces of the real picture, and they changed the shape of everything. The first was a mystery about the human emperor. She'd reached the Supreme Realm, supreme late even, and she'd still died in some great upheaval that came after the War of the 10,000 Races, which meant the ceiling I'd broken wasn't the top. There was something up there that could kill a supreme late human emperor, and no one now living knew what it was. The second was worse and clearer. That, beyond the realm, the outside my broken sky had let in, it wasn't wilderness. It was a built thing. A world made on purpose, to watch. Whenever someone in the upper realm broke into the Supreme Realm, the outside noticed, and its keepers were supposed to guide those Supremes toward the real ascension, up past even the Supreme Realm to somewhere called the Immortal Realm. There were 9 keepers out there, 9 peak masters, Supreme Realm jailers of the whole road upward, and the woman in the ice coffin, the one whose wardrobe I'd been quietly stealing, terrified all 9 of them. The 9 had a plan, and the plan had a name. His name was Yu Xuan, and he was the heaven's next attempt at me, a carp demon who'd leapt the dragon gate and come out the other side with an innate Holy Spirit body, Saint King at his peak, marked Destiny born, backed by all 9 of the peak masters, their prize student, sent down into the upper realm to make a name, build a legend, and eventually unify the whole realm under the outside's hand. A chosen one with 9 supreme sponsors. On paper, the most dangerous target I'd faced. And his method of building a legend was, unfortunately for him, aimed directly at me. Yu Xuan understood that the Long family's real strength wasn't just fists. It was the network. My 9, my staff of geniuses. Those rare physiques and rarer talents I'd assembled into a faction no one could match. So he set out to take them. Not the crude way the old stories always went, but as a public humiliation and a power grab. He'd steal the Long family's prized talents out from under us, strip our faction of its edge, and parade the theft across the sky to prove the mighty Long could be robbed. He put out a realm-wide message recruiting exactly the kind of gifted people I collected, aping our own methods, naming my people specifically, daring me to answer. It was a good provocation. It was designed to make me either look weak by ignoring it or overextend by charging out. I erased his sky message with a wave, just wiped it out of the heavens like a man cleaning a whiteboard, and put a strike through the hidden envoy he'd left to watch my reaction. Not weak, not overextended, just a quiet, precise no and a promise underneath it. Because Yu Xuan had made the one mistake none of my targets survived, he'd decided the way to beat me was to take the people I'd chosen to keep. And I did not, it turned out, have a soft center, but I had a very hard line, and he just walked up and put his hand across it. He had 9 supreme masters behind him. I had a family that ate supreme demons before lunch, a cat with a dragon's blood in her, and a growing suspicion that the scariest thing in all of creation was an underdressed woman in an ice coffin who was going to be looking for me specifically one day and would find my address written on her own missing hairpin. The board was getting crowded. I started clearing it. Yu Xuan wanted to steal my talent, so I made it a public contest of who could attract talent, and I won it so badly it became a comedy. His pitch, plastered across the sky, was a recruitment drive dressed up as a legend. Come serve the Destiny-born carp who leapt the Dragon Gate, be part of the faction that would one day rule the upper realm. And it worked, a little, on people who didn't know better. My counter was simpler. I had the Skywatch Pavilion. Remember, they still groveled, announced that the Immortal Long family was opening its gates, an open tournament. Any cultivator of any background could come test themselves, and the standouts would be taken into the Long faction directly. Resources, protection, a body of luck stolen off some dead chosen one, a place inside the most terrifying name in the sky. You can guess how the market moved. Yuxuan was offering a legend, I was offering the Long family, and everyone in the upper realm had spent their whole lives watching what happened to people who crossed that name and what happened to people who got behind it. The talent came to me in a flood. Every gifted young cultivator within 1,000 realms packed their bags and pointed themselves at my gate, and Yuxuan's grand recruitment drew, in the end, the people my tournament had turned away. He'd tried to poach my staff and ended up with my rejects. Somewhere out beyond the realm, 9 supreme masters watched their prize students' legend-building campaign collect a pile of cultivators nobody else wanted, and I like to imagine the silence was very long. The tournament itself gave me one thing I hadn't expected. Huangfu Qingling came out of the Human Emperor Pearl to compete. Years of inside time had made her formidable, the Human Emperor's bloodline fully awake, and she was extraordinary, right up until she met Long Xiaoyun in the ring. My sword Immortal, the witch ancestor in a veil, beat the heir of the Human Emperor without drawing blood, and I stood there doing math I didn't like the answer to. Long Xiaoyun's ceiling might be higher than the Human Emperor's. The woman who'd guarded my sleep was quietly one of the most dangerous things ever born, and she still teased me about my tea. You're staring, she observed after the match, not looking at me. I'm assessing a strategic asset, I said. A pause, the amused kind. The asset assessed you back 3 years ago and found the report satisfactory. I did not have a response to that. I filed it with the rest of the things Long Xiaoyun said that I didn't have responses to. The file was getting thick. Shen Qing got her body. I'd promised the Mirror Queen a real one, and I finally had the ingredients. 9 treasures gathered and fed into a heavenly origin cauldron, a forged divine body built to hold a king's soul. She stepped out of it whole and physical for the first time since her death in the ancient war, and the frivolous, hustling ghost who'd bluffed me 3 times in one conversation was suddenly a supreme late powerhouse, the single strongest cultivator in the whole upper realm, standing in a courtyard flexing her new fingers. She celebrated her return to the living by immediately trying to read my mind again. Now that I have a body, she announced, my mirror Dao is fully restored, and I can see every thought in your… What am I thinking? You're thinking you're glad I'm back. I'm thinking you still can't read me. That, said the strongest cultivator in the upper realm, with total dignity, was a courtesy. I don't read the thoughts of people I respect. She'd used that exact line 4 times now. I let her have it. Everyone in this story kept people by putting a hand around their throat. The Mirror Queen kept me by being funny about it, and I found I preferred the arrangement. She appointed herself my mentor and bodyguard in the same breath, and the other factions, seeing a supreme late resurrection that looked exactly like the legendary Mirror Queen of old, quietly concluded the Long family had learned to raise the dead. They weren't entirely wrong. Yuxuan, out-recruited, outshone, and out of patience, did what cornered chosen ones do. He came to my gate alone to make his stand a spectacle. He should not have come alone. The immortal Long family's estate is not a place, it's a machine. He crossed the outer boundary, spitting his challenge, and the ancestral formation, the one the old ancestors had been refining since before his great-grandparents were spawn, folded shut around him like a hand closing over a fly. He had an escape. Of course he did. The heavens don't send a chosen one out without a way home. A life-saving ring, keyed to teleport him clear of any trap, the kind of trump card that had saved 100 protagonists at the last second. I let him trigger it, watched the ring flare. And then I reached out with the great Tao of time and ran it backward, took the moment of the ring activating and simply rewound it over and over so that from Yuxuan's side the escape kept almost happening and never landing, a door that opened onto the same closed room every time he stepped through it. While he was stuck in that loop, fighting a ring that had become a treadmill, I recycled it out from under him. His guaranteed escape, gone, converted to coins mid-use. How? He managed when the loop finally let him go and he understood there was no door anymore. You had 9 supreme masters teach you everything about power, I said, and none of them taught you about time. That's the trouble with being raised by jailers. They only teach you the walls. I recycled the rest of him while he processed that. His Dragon Gate token alone came out to 834,000 coins. The whole haul cleared 5 million. The Destiny-born Carp who was supposed to unify the upper realm stood in my formation stripped of his treasures and his exit, and for the first time the arrogance drained out of him and left something underneath that I hadn't expected. Not fear, grief. Because far beyond the realm, his masters were having a very bad day of their own. The woman in the ice coffin had woken all the way up, discovered every last thing she owned was missing, and gone looking for someone to blame. She'd found the 9 peak masters, and she'd decided, since they were the only powers standing between her and the world, that they must be the thieves. She was, at that moment, beating 9 supreme jailers half to death over a wardrobe I had stolen. Yuxuan felt his masters screaming across the void, and something in his face changed, and he asked me, the man who'd just robbed and trapped him, a question I did not see coming. Before you kill me, he said quietly, will you let me tell you what they actually are? I let him tell me. When a man who was born to be a weapon suddenly decides to talk instead of fight, you listen, because he's about to hand you the manual for the people who built him. Yu Xuan's true form wasn't the proud youth. Underneath it, he was still a carp, a soul carp, the thing he'd been before the Dragon Gate, and in the moment his master started screaming across the void, a phantom of that old carp self surfaced in his eyes and told him something his masters had spent his whole life hiding. They hadn't raised him to rule, they'd raised him to be eaten. He was livestock, a prize physique, an innate Holy Spirit body, grown fat on 9 Supremes' careful attention for exactly one purpose, to be devoured when he was ripe, so that one of them could take the meal and cross into the Immortal Realm on the strength of it. He sat with that for a while. I let him. I'm not going back, he said finally. Not to be their dinner. He looked at me, and there was no arrogance left, just a strange, clean calm. You're going to kill me either way. Fine, but kill me here, on my terms, and do me one thing in exchange. Name it. My kind, the carp of Huaking Pond. They farm us. They've farmed us for ages, raise us, ripen us, eat us for the climb. He pressed a jade talisman into the air between us, and it drifted to me. That's how to find the 9. When you go up, and you will, I can see it on you. You're already halfway a thing that doesn't belong down here. Kill them. Avenge us. That's my price for dying quiet. I took the talisman. Done. And then Yu Xuan, the heaven's most expensive attempt at my executioner, closed his own eyes and ended himself, choosing the manner of it, robbing his masters of their meal in the last thing he'd ever do. I've killed a lot of chosen ones. He's the only one I'd have shared a drink with first. Ding. Yu Xuan slain. Title upgraded. 3-second Emperor now channels Supreme Peak. New title. 1 second long Immortal Master. Plant a random long in any target, ignoring realm and distance. 3 uses. 3 seconds at the peak of the Supreme Realm now, instead of Emperor, and a 1-second window where I was the greatest long master alive and could seed a curse in anyone, anywhere, no matter how far above me they stood. I didn't know yet who I'd spend those on. I would later spend one on the most powerful woman I ever met, and it would be the single best decision of my life. But that's ahead. Yu Xuan's jade talisman held more than a map. It held the shape of the whole board, and reading it, I finally understood the game I'd been playing without a rulebook. The outside, the beyond, the built world with its 9 keepers, it wasn't a neighbor, it was a cork. The Immortal Realm, a place above the Supreme Realm, above everything, where the truly powerful lived, had made the outer realm on purpose and stationed 9 Supreme Peak jailers in it, for one reason, to keep the upper realm sealed. To make sure that when someone down here broke through to the Supreme Realm and reached for the real road up, they were caught, harvested, and never allowed to actually arrive. We weren't a world, we were a farm, and the 9 Peak Masters were the fence. And somewhere past that fence, in the Immortal Realm itself, might be the answer to the biggest question in my life. Because my family's vanished ancestors, the 100 emperors who disappeared, the founder Long Yuan who'd climbed out the top of the world and never come back, hadn't necessarily died at the ceiling. They might have gotten past the fence. They might be up there right now, in the Immortal Realm, waiting. I looked up at a sky I'd already cracked once, and for the first time the climb stopped being about getting stronger and started being about getting out. There was, however, the small matter of the wardrobe, because while I was having my cosmic epiphany, the villain lottery finished its long, patient project. It pulled the last piece, and with that final draw, the woman in the ice coffin, the chaos-wreathed thing that had just beaten 9 Supreme Masters half to death, was stripped of the 6th and last item she owned. She now had nothing, not one thread. The single most powerful being I had any awareness of, an entity the caged heavens themselves couldn't reach, woke up fully and reached for her clothes. And found nothing. Some unknown thief, across all of creation, had spent months methodically stealing her entire wardrobe down to the last stitch. She woke up in an ice coffin with nothing but her own fury and a growing specific desire to find the person responsible. I felt the karma of it hit me like a slap. I sneezed so hard Momo fell off my shoulder. System, I said, into the silence of my hall, holding 6 pieces of the most dangerous laundry in the universe. When she comes looking, and she is going to come looking, is there anything at all, you can do to help me? Reminder, the system guarantees that drawn rewards carry no negative consequences for the host. Please rest assured. That's not an answer, I said. That has never been an answer. The system, as always, rested assured on my behalf. I put the 6th piece in the corner with the other 5, facing the wall, and I stopped resolving to never think about it, because that ship had sailed. Instead, I made a different resolution, which was to become powerful enough, fast enough, that when a naked, furious goddess eventually tracked her missing hairpin to my address, I would at least have something interesting to say. It was time to become an emperor, and then, whatever came after that, the fence wasn't going to climb itself. I went into seclusion to prepare for the Emperor realm, and I came out of it having turned my whole operation into a factory. The seclusion itself was fast. A cask of Earth Heart Spirit milk pushed my physique up to Emperor rank. A 9-patterned shattered creation pill walked me from Sovereign Peak through the Shattered Realm and into the Quasi-Emperor realm without so much as a bottleneck, 6 DAOs turning around me like a small solar system. But the real upgrade wasn't my cultivation. It was a rule I'd figured out about how the Heavens' own game could be turned against itself. A child of destiny is protected. The Heavens punish anyone who kills one. Backlash and karma and bad ends. Unless the killer is also a child of destiny. Heaven against heaven cancels out. And I had made several of my people into carriers of stolen luck, off the grid, functionally chosen ones loyal to me instead of fate. Which meant I could point them at the Heavens' other chosen ones and let them do the killing clean. No backlash, the sky unable to object because its own rules said this was allowed. Ye Shuyan, buffed into a daughter of luck, became my forward hunter. She'd drop into some distant lower realm, find the local trash-turned genius the Heavens were grooming, and strip and end him before he got his origin story rolling, and the sky couldn't lift a finger. Shen Qing Supreme Late Now, went a step further. She could kill a chosen one, and then, if the whole realm's heaven objected, destroy the heaven too, with my banner drinking the karmic backlash, so none of it landed on us. I sat in my hall watching the monitors and clearing the board a world at a time. I'm going to tell you about the worst thing I did in this stretch, because if I skip it, I'm lying to you about what I am. There was a boy named Gu Dan, a cowherd in one of the lesser realms, cheerful, kind, the sort of open-faced nobody who makes friends with his ox and shares his lunch with strangers. He wasn't a threat yet. He was a seed of one. The panel flagged him as a future chosen one, years from becoming anything, and I sent Shen Qing to kill him anyway, him and the ox, before he ever grew into the enemy the Heavens intended. The realm's heaven threw a tantrum over losing its favorite and self-destructed. A lot of people who'd never heard my name died under a red sky. I felt the weight of it for about as long as it takes to read this sentence. Then I moved on. Because I'm a villain, and a villain who only kills people who deserve it is just a hero with a body count. I'm not going to dress it up. That one didn't deserve it. I did it because it was efficient. That's the whole cost of the system, right there, in one dead cowherd. The power to eat the future comes with the requirement that you be willing to. I was willing. Make of me what you want. The Chen family fell while I was doing all this, and it fell exactly the way I'd arranged. They were the last of the old enemies, the Blade Emperor's clan, the one I'd made quietly furious an age ago, and they'd been hiding in their ancestral grounds licking wounds. So I tipped off the Duan and the other clans that the Chen were undefended, timed it to the window when Yushuan's masters were too busy getting beaten by a naked goddess to intervene, and let my enemies do my work. The clans stormed the Chen grounds. The Chen Grand Elder, cornered, blew up their burning flame valley, and took 4 Emperor Peak experts of the 4 families down with him out of pure spite, which thinned the herd of everyone I disliked in one blast. A bonus. The Chen family head ran, fled beyond the realm to beg the outside powers for reinforcements, and got instead the single most satisfying ending on my whole ledger. Because the outside, remember, was a farm, and the Chen head, arriving desperate and weak, was simply grabbed and put to work as livestock. Last I heard, the proud head of an ancient clan was mining starstones in a pit beyond the world, one more body feeding the fence he'd run to for help. His 2 supreme middle guards I had refined into a matched pair of stone lions for my family's front gate. They're very good lions, very loyal. They don't say much anymore. 5 ancient families. When I'd arrived home, they'd been the untouchable pillars of the upper realm. Now the Blade Emperor was dead. The Chen were slaves in a mining pit. The Zhou and Shui were ash. The Duan were my footstool. And the immortal Long family stood alone at the top of a world it had quietly finished eating. There was only up left. And up, I now knew, meant the fence and the 9 jailers, and the immortal realm past them. But the Heavens weren't quite done with me down here, because caging their eye had bought me a chaotic era, and a cage thing is not a dead thing. Somewhere out beyond the realm, a Supreme Peak jailer had gotten loose, and he was coming to the upper realm with a very simple plan: find whatever the Long family was hiding and burn the whole world down to get it. His name was An Feng, and he was one of the 9, and he arrived at my family's gate the way a landslide arrives at a village. The naked goddess out beyond the realm had gone quiet for a month, off healing, or sulking, or shopping. I didn't know and didn't want to. And in that window, one of the 9 peak masters had spent an enormous price to punch a hole out of their sealed world and come down here. Supreme Peak. The single strongest thing the upper realm had seen, dragging a body full of injuries and a very simple agenda: exterminate the Long family, tear the realm apart, and find whatever secret had let people down here start climbing again. He announced himself by killing the Dwan ancestor on the way in, just closed his fist around a Supreme Realm elder's throat in front of everyone, and crushed him like a walnut so the whole upper realm would understand the difference between the outside and the inside. Then he came for us, and half the realm's spies came with him, image stones out, recording, because the outcome of this fight would decide who ran the sky. My father went out to meet him. Long Haoshan, Supreme Middle, with old ancestor Long Xiao at his shoulder, 2 of ours against 1 of theirs, and on paper that was already generous, because a Supreme Peak is a mountain above a Supreme Middle. And Feng found it insulting that only 2 came out. He snorted, and his snort alone killed a courtyard's worth of the weaker cultivators who'd come to watch. Break, he said, and pointed at our formation, and the whole sky above the estate came down in a fist meant to erase the family. My father answered it the old way. He reached into the ancestral hall, into the founder era Trump the Long family had guarded for epochs, and pulled down a Dharma manifestation of one of our vanished ancestors, a figure that carried supreme peak power and something older underneath it, something that shouldn't have existed in a sealed world. The manifestation caught in Feng's world-ending fist bare-handed, and the 2 of them held there, straining, and it cost my father half his chi to sustain it for a single exchange. And Feng smiled because he could do that all day, and my father couldn't. That was when I walked out. Xiao Yun, Long Xiao hissed, alarmed. Get back! My father put a hand on the old ancestor's arm. Watch, he said. I believe in him. He couldn't see through my cultivation any more than the rest of them could, but he'd felt something off me that made his own heart skip, and my father had never once been wrong about me. And Feng turned his head. It was all he could move, pinned as he was by the manifestation suppression, and looked at the young man strolling toward him across a battlefield, and something in him went cold, because he'd felt an aura like mine exactly once before, and it belonged to the naked goddess who'd been beating him half to death for a month. You, he managed. How does the Long family have someone like you? Are you a man or an immortal? Little of both lately, I said, and I hit the 3-second emperor. For 3 seconds, I was supreme peak, the absolute ceiling of this world, his exact equal and then a hair above it. His suppression evaporated. The pressure that had been crushing an entire Dao domain flat suddenly had nowhere to go, and An Feng, one of the 9 jailers of all creation, stood there in the open with his mouth still forming the end of his question. I raised 1 finger. I didn't even use a technique. I just flicked it, the way you'd flick a bug off a table. His head came off. A pillar of pure Qi Tenjiang High went up in its place, because his aura was so thick even his death was dramatic, and the entire upper realm watched, through 1,000 image stones, the Long family's divine son flick the head off a supreme peak extraterritorial like it was nothing at all. He wasn't dead yet. A soul that strong doesn't die from losing a head, so his spirit came screaming out of the corpse, still supreme peak, still terrible. You're too weak, I told it, and put the great Tao of force through 1 more flick, and the soul burst, and the black banner opened its mouth and drank the scraps. 3 seconds. The whole thing had taken 3 seconds, and I'd had 1 left over. Silence across the realm. Every spy, every holy lord, every clan head staring at their image stones. My own old ancestors, Long Xiao and Long Chen, rubbing their eyes. Their divine son had just done, casually, in 3 heartbeats, the thing their 100 lost emperors had died failing to approach. My father laughed, the only one in creation not surprised. Stronger than his old man, he said, delighted, and started planning out loud how soon he could hand me the family seat and go cultivate in peace. Out beyond the realm, on 9 broken mountain peaks, the 8 surviving peak masters felt in Feng die and opened their eyes all at once. They didn't know I'd done it. They assumed it was the naked goddess, because who else could kill one of the 9? But they knew their situation had gone from bad to terminal. Trapped, hunted by a woman they couldn't beat, one of their number gone. So they made a decision. They'd spend their last trump, the one they'd been saving, the one that would cost every last drop of what they were. They were going to open a door to the Immortal Realm and pull something down through it, and I, having just discovered exactly how far above this world I already stood, decided it was finally time to go home in the deepest sense, into my own family's ancestral hall, behind the founder's statue, to the one thing in it I'd been circling since the day I arrived, because if I was going to climb the fence, I needed to know what my ancestors had left me, and what they'd left me could talk. The 2 old ancestors, Long Xiao and Long Chen, sat me down in the ancestral hall for tea, and the tea itself told me half of what I needed to know about my own family. Long Xiao brought out a tea set, an emperor-grade tea set. The pot alone was worth more than most sects, and a little golden toad for brewing that carried the faint aura of an extreme emperor weapon. He set it down like a man laying out the crown jewels. Long Chen's eye twitched. That set, he said. I have asked to borrow that set to drink tea more than once. Every time you told me it was stolen by a villain and lost for years. And now I've found it again, Long Xiao said, brewing serenely. Isn't that wonderful? I brought it out immediately to share with you. You brought it out to make me contribute the leaves. That is a separate and unrelated joy. This is the family that terrifies creation. Two Supreme Realm monsters, old enough to have watched empires rise and fall, bickering over a teapot like a pair of pensioners. Long Chen, grumbling, produced a packet of premium enlightenment tea and set it down with the reluctance of a man donating a kidney, muttering that he was doing it for the divine son and not for that stingy old goat, and Long Xiao brewed it and got to the point. The point was the three statues at the heart of the hall. Those two flanking the center, Long Xiao said, nodding at the pair. Long Tianyang, the grand elder of the founding age, and Long Qian, second only to him, and the one between them, his voice dropped into reverence, Long Yuan, our founder, the man who wrote the Chang'e art, walked all of humanity through the war of the 10,000 races without losing a single clansman, and then vanished off the top of the world. The hall was our greatest trump, he explained. In a crisis, you could commune with those statues and pull down a dharma manifestation of the ancestor each one honored. Long Tianyang and Long Qian could each lend a supreme peak strike, the one my father had used to hold off on Feng. And Long Yuan, the founder himself, could lend something a sealed world should never have been able to hold, an immortal tier manifestation, one blow that could sweep a whole board clean. Then he showed me the thing behind the founder's statue, and my heart went sideways. A jade slip, not a message slip, a living one that updated, that received new words across the ages, time-stamped, from Long Yuan himself. The oldest entries were instructions from before he left, and the newest was only months old. He was alive, somewhere. My founder, who'd climbed out the top of the world epochs ago, was still out there, still sending the occasional line home, still watching over the family from wherever the top of the world led out. They offered to hand me the whole trump, the hall, the founder's manifestation, all of it. I turned it down. Not out of modesty. A trump like that comes with a duty attached, and duty is a leash, and I'd watched everyone in this world keep everyone else on leashes their whole lives. I didn't need the hall's power. I needed its questions answered, and I'd just gotten the biggest one. The road up didn't end in death. It ended somewhere my own ancestor was still writing letters home from. The tea did one more thing before I left. It was enlightenment tea, the good kind, and on a mind like mine it didn't just clear the fog, it opened a door. I fell into a river, not water, time. A river with no near bank and no far one, and I understood at once, with the great Tao of time already in me, what I was floating in. The legendary river of time. Downstream was the future, and downstream was walled off. I couldn't get an inch that way. But upstream was open. So I went back. I surfaced in the age of the war of the 10,000 races, and I watched it happen. Really happen. Dragons and phoenixes and golden rocks dying in drifts. Mountains flattened. A battlefield the size of the world. I couldn't touch anything. I was a ghost in the past, an observer the dead couldn't see. I watched one of the human emperor's 8 kings kill a lurking yaksha and stagger off wounded, and I heard the races, red-eyed, tearing each other apart, screaming about one thing over and over, the prize they were all supposedly dying for, an immortal stone. I sat with that in the river, because it didn't fit. Shenqing Shuang had lived through this war and died in it, and she had never once mentioned an immortal stone, not because she was hiding it, I trusted her, but because I was starting to suspect she didn't remember it. The memory had been taken out of her, out of all of them maybe. Someone had edited the past, someone powerful enough to reach into a war and delete its cause from every survivor's head. And the more I floated in that river, the more the immortal stone and the caged eye and the fenced-off sky and my letter-writing ancestor started to feel like pieces of one shape I couldn't yet see the whole of. I came out of the river with my time Tao a notch deeper and my list of questions longer instead of shorter, which is, I've found, how it usually goes when you learn something real. Then I got back to work, because the monitors were still on, and one of them was pinging red over a lower realm called the Heavenly Profound Continent, a place that had produced a chosen one unlike any I'd hunted yet. This one had done his homework. This one was a villain too. His name was Zi Ming, and he was the only chosen one I ever hunted who made me feel like the reasonable man in the room. The panel called him a child of destiny, but it also called him the reincarnation of something from far above, a great love immortal venerable, a title so at odds with the man that it had to be a joke he was in on. He was a long master like me, but where I'd stumbled into the art through a lottery, he'd spent lifetimes on it, and his method was simple and total. Everyone is material. He'd sacrificed his own clan to refine a batch of Long. He'd murdered the childhood friend who trusted him to use as a poison catalyst. He killed the people who wronged him, and then he killed the people who loved him, because the people who loved him were more useful dead, and he did not appear to feel the difference. He was, in the cold accounting of the cultivation world, correct. I'd say it made my skin crawl, except I'd just ordered a cow herd killed for efficiency, so who am I? I watched him work a woman named Lin Shi, and it taught me the whole shape of him. She was a plain, devoted girl who'd have walked into fire for him, and he'd planted an obsession long in her, a worm that ripened as her love for him did, so that when her devotion hit its peak, her blood would become the exact medicine he needed to heal a wound. He courted her toward that peak on purpose. He let her steal her own family's greatest treasure for him, let her leave her own parents behind to be punished for it, cross every line a person can cross. And the whole time, the long inside her fattened on her love, counting down to the moment she'd be ripe enough to harvest. I helped her, a little, from the shadows. Not out of mercy. I wanted his treasures and his physique, but I'll admit I enjoyed sabotaging him. When she went to steal the pendant that would heal him, I put her entire family's fortress to sleep so she'd make it out clean because I wanted him to succeed just enough to get comfortable. Then he did the thing. Her love hit its peak, the long ripened, and Ziming smiled and put a blade through the heart of the woman who'd given up everything for him and reached for the harvest. And I made her corpse sit up. I'd seated her too, without either of them noticing, a long of my own, one that woke on her death and turned her grief into a weapon. Her headless body caught him in its arms and would not let go, and her voice came out of nowhere and asked him, very gently, why he'd lied to her, and then it took his heart out through his chest, the same way he'd taken hers. Shiming died genuinely afraid for the first time in 3 lifetimes of a dead girl and a rival he couldn't see, calling out into the mist for the immortal level enemy he assumed was toying with him. He was right that I was toying with him. He was wrong about being able to leave, because that's the thing about a true reincarnator. Killing him once is a deposit, not a payment. He came back. His soul dropped straight into a freshly dead Saint King poison cultivator's body. No infant helplessness, just an upgrade, memories intact, cultivation inherited, ready to start refining a city into long. I killed that one too, with a Tao he couldn't see coming before he'd finished his first monologue. He came back again, born as an infant into a great family beyond the realm, so lethal that he murdered the delivery room the moment he drew breath, and his own father tried to kill the demon child on sight, and got killed instead by a wandering old long-obsessed supreme who wanted the baby's rare physique for himself. I let that play out because I found it funny, and then I killed the old Supreme too, and reached down and plucked the infant's heart before the story could reward anybody. 3 lives, 3 deaths, and in the last of them, dying for good this time, Ziming finally stopped assuming I was an immortal playing a game and understood, in the way only a dying man understands, that he'd been watched, really watched, from the very first life, naked under a gaze he could never escape no matter how he reincarnated. And he spent his last breath not on a curse but on a warning, which is how I knew he'd finally taken me seriously. "You can kill me," he said, blood in his mouth, "but you'll never take this world's origin. There are too many eyes on it from above. The Immortal Realm is watching. You don't even know what you're standing on." Then he was gone, for real, and I devoured his long poisoned saint body off the corpse, a physique so pure it was immune to all poison and could, in theory, one day refine the legendary fate long itself, and I sat there, in the midst of a dead man's 3rd failed life turning his last words over. The origin, this world's origin. He'd said it like it was a thing, a specific object, the actual prize under all the layers. The immortal stone, the erased war had been fought over. The secret the heaven-sealing pavilion had built a fence to protect. The reason 9 jailers stood between the upper realm and the sky. I'd spent this whole story thinking I was climbing out of a farm. Ziming, with his dying breath, had just told me the farm was sitting on top of something the gods themselves were afraid to be caught wanting. He also left me a shopping list, a stack of treasure vaults his past life had buried up in the Immortal Realm, waiting for a reincarnation that would never come collect them now. My first gold, up there, whenever I arrived. The most ruthless man I ever killed had, in the end, done all his saving for me. I pocketed the list, and I turned my attention, finally, all the way up. Because it was time to become an emperor, and to learn from a dead enemy's stolen memories exactly what kind of thing my world really was. I'd had Shen Qingxuang strip every memory out of the soul scraps of Anfeng before the banner digested them, and when I finally sat down and read them, the whole story of my world unfolded in my head at once, and I understood that I had never been the villain of it. I'd been a lab rat that learned to read the exit sign. Here's what my world actually was. The Upper Realm has a real name, and the name is the Origin Realm. And the Origin Realm is special in exactly one way that turns out to matter more than anything. Down here, you can grasp a great Tao at the Quasi-Emperor Realm. Everywhere else in creation, the Immortal Realm included, mastering a Tao takes lifetimes and a realm most cultivators never reach. Here, children do it. That's why I'd been casually collecting Taos like a man collecting stamps. It wasn't my system. It was the ground I was standing on, and that ground had been noticed. Long ago, the Immortal Realm, the true world above, figured out that the Origin Realm let mortals touch the Tao, and one of its top powers, the Heaven's Sealing Pavilion, decided to own it. They couldn't just walk in. The realm rejected anything above the Emperor Peak, so they did something insane and patient. They spent 40% of their entire power's resources over tens of thousands of years upgrading the Origin Realm itself, raising its class until it could hold Supreme Realm beings so they could send an army of their own people in to conquer it from the inside. The Origin Realm's own inhabitants found out, and they answered with the single most desperate, most brilliant thing I've ever heard of. They faked a war. The War of the 10,000 Races, the Sacred Tragedy, the Age of Monsters, the thing there's a statue of the human emperor for ain't was a lie. A staged catastrophe, orchestrated by the leaders of the 10,000 clans to force their own people to break through between life and death fast enough to meet the invasion. There was no immortal stone worth dying for. The immortal stone was the cover story, the carrot they told the rank and file they were fighting over so that a whole civilization would grind itself into Supreme Realm powerhouses in time to throw the Heaven Sealing Pavilion back out. It worked. It cost oceans of lives, the human emperor and her 8 kings among them, and it worked. The invasion broke on 10,000 races who'd been forged into weapons by a war their own leaders had scripted. And then it got stranger, because after the invasion failed, the Origin Realm didn't calm down. It started rejecting everything, outsiders and its own supremes alike, and every powerhouse above the Emperor Peak simply vanished, and the realm reset itself to a world where the strongest thing allowed was an emperor. That's the ceiling I'd been born under, not a natural law, a wound the world had inflicted on itself to survive. The Heaven's Sealing Pavilion, thrown out but unwilling to give up, sent 9 peak masters with a great formation to sit at the edge and wait. The naked goddess in the ice coffin, whoever she was, had shattered them and their formation and dragged them into a pocket world to rot, but they'd survived, and they'd spent epochs since running the fence, farming the ascenders, harvesting the climbers, keeping the Origin Realm sealed for their masters above. And the heavenly Tao of the Origin Realm, the eye I'd caged, had woken up on its own during all this, developed a will, and started grooming children of destiny to eventually break the fence and reclaim the outside. That was the game. That was always the game. The heavens were raising heroes to free the farm, and I'd been eating the heroes. I set the memory down and sat in the dark of my own hall for a while, because it's one thing to fight a system and another to learn you're a variable it never accounted for. The heavens had a plan to save the world. I'd been eating the plan, one chosen one at a time, and caging the planner. From the sky's side, I wasn't a villain. I was the apocalypse. Good, I thought. Let's finish it. The rest of that stretch I'll give you fast, because it was mostly me getting ready. The lottery handed me a vial of witch ancestor essence blood, and I gave it to Long Xiaoyun, and she drank it and finished becoming what the chess game had hinted at. The last of the 12 witch ancestors, waking a legacy called the Heaven Opening Art. A power that at its height could birth a whole complete world and stand over it as its god. My veiled sword immortal, who teased me about tea, could theoretically make a universe. I stopped being surprised by her. I just started being quietly, permanently grateful she'd picked me to guard. A second human emperor legacy poured into Huangfu Qingling and pushed her up beside Long Xiaoyun. Both of them jumped to quasi-emperor almost overnight. 2 of the most dangerous women in creation, both of them mine, not owned, chosen, which is the only kind of mine that's ever meant anything. And I bought a Dao, 5 million coins for a supreme grade Dao fruit, and it gave me the one that pairs with time to make a god, the great Dao of space. 6 Daos now. Force, killing, time, fortune, sword, and space, the 2 kings among them turning around me at once. The whole family sat down to meditate off the leakage, and none of them caught even a corner of it, because space at that depth isn't something you glimpse, it's something you're born standing next to, and I was the only one born there. Then I broke for the Emperor Realm, and the heavens, even caged, even one-eyed, dredged up one last insult from the record books to throw at me. The 9 revolutions, profound heaven tribulation. The strongest ascension trial that had ever been recorded, the one not even my founder had faced, 9 turns of escalating annihilation, so vast it tried to drag the whole Dao domain into dying with me. I told the realm not to worry, it was only about me, and then I stood in it and took it apart turn by turn. The 5-element lightning, the heart demon illusion that tried to send me back to my old office job on Earth and got laughed out of the sky, the yin-yang annihilation I punched to glass, the ice and fire that came together and got eaten anyway. 9 turns of the heaven's worst, and I walked out of it an emperor without a mark on me. I should have known the number wouldn't hold at 9, because the cage die had one card I hadn't counted, and it was about to play it, and the last turn of that tribulation was going to bring the whole sky down on me at once. The ninth turn of the tribulation was a fist-sized sphere of chaos, creation, and destruction folded together, the legendary chaos creation tribulation, and it descended so slowly and so absolutely that even the old monsters watching got headaches from looking at it. Momo woke up for it. She'd been asleep on my shoulder for most of this story, a lazy white cat with a dragon's heritage and an appetite, and something about that sphere of pure creation smelled like breakfast to her. She leapt off my shoulder, grew to 100 times her size, opened a mouth that had no business being that large, and swallowed the strongest turn of the strongest tribulation ever recorded in one gulp. Then she burped, shrank back to cat size, patted her belly, and cocooned herself on the spot to digest a piece of the fabric of reality, black and white bleeding across her fur as creation and destruction found a balance inside her. My nap had eaten the apocalypse's dessert. I put the cocoon in my storage to bake and finished my own breakthrough, Emperor Realm, then Emperor Peak, in the space of the following months, because at that point breaking through was just paperwork. I thought I'd won. I'd broken the ceiling, become an emperor, caged the eye, eaten the heroes. I thought the game was over. A caged god is not a dead god. And months later, the eye clawed its way back out. It came back wrong, wounded, one-eyed, a hole punched through it where a hairpin had gone in, dripping and furious, and it came back with the volume turned all the way up. Black mist poured across the whole realm, and the weak simply dissolved in it. The spiritual chi of the world dropped to a 10,000th of what it had been. A voice like the end of everything announced that since there were restless things below, all of it would be scoured clean and started over. The heavens had stopped trying to raise a hero to save the farm. They'd decided to burn the farm and replant. Two of the old families made the coward's bet. The Zhou and the Shui, what was left of them, decided that if they couldn't beat the returning heavenly Tao, they'd serve it, and they threw their forces behind freeing it, offering up their oldest treasures to help it break loose, kneeling to the sky and begging to be its instruments in the new world. The Eye rewarded their loyalty by killing them where they knelt, indiscriminately, because a thing that wants to scour the world clean does not keep pets. That's the last useful thing the Zhou and Shui ever did, demonstrate in public exactly how much mercy the returning heavens had for anyone. None, not even the ones who bowed. My family raised its true trump against it, an immortal grade formation the old ancestors had been building in secret since the Eye first vanished, a heaven-replacing array fed by every treasure we'd stripped off the dying realm, with a doomsday switch underneath it that would detonate every spirit vein in the world and throw all of creation's life onto the scale if the array wasn't enough. My father stood at its heart with the doomsday seal already formed, ready to sacrifice the whole realm to answer the sky, because that's the kind of family I come from, the kind that will burn everything rather than kneel. And the Eye, ignoring all of it, ignoring the array and the old ancestors and the doomsday switch, turned its wounded, hateful attention to exactly one spot in all the world, my residence, me, because it remembered whose finger had put the hole in it. I told my father to stand down. Then I walked out to meet the heavens for the second time. I wore the netherworld armor, and when the sky came down for me in a storm of purple gold divine punishment, the armor simply drank it, every bolt, until it hummed with stolen lightning and wore the aura of the heavenly Tao itself. You couldn't hide in the 9 heavens, I told the Eye conversationally, the whole realm watching through their stones. Is that because you figured out there's nowhere I can't poke a hole in you? It didn't answer in words. It just hated me, hugely, silently, an ancient god reduced to a wounded animal glaring at the thing that wounded it. And with the eyes I'd stolen off Han Ming, I saw something that changed the whole fight. This thing, this world-ending heavenly Tao, it couldn't strip my Taos away from me. A true heavenly Tao owns every law in its world. It could have simply switched off my space and my time. It couldn't, which meant it didn't own the laws, which meant it wasn't the real heavenly Tao at all. It was a fake, a caretaker, something left in charge that had started believing it was the master. So I stopped being careful. I hit the 3-second Emperor, Supreme Peak now, and I raised the great Desolation Prison Heaven Finger, the founder's sky-piercing strike, and then, because I'd bought 2 extra copies of it from the shop in a hurry and hadn't read the fine print, I discovered the 2 extras were the taunting version, and instead of 2 more dignified index fingers, 2 enormous god and demon hands rose up beside mine and extended their middle fingers at the Eye of God. 3 fingers hit the heavenly Tao Eye at once, 2 of them rude, 3 fresh holes. And then the 3 strikes turned to pure imprisoning force and locked the Eye in a cage again, tighter this time, and the more it thrashed, the wider its wounds gaped. I clutched the hairpin in one hand, the thing that had hurt it worst, and readied the killing blow. I was going to end the heavens, right there, on camera, in front of the whole realm, the villain who murders the sky. And a jade hand reached out of the empty air and plucked the Eye out of my cage like a woman picking a walnut off a table. The cage, the founder's imprisoning force, The thing that had held a god, collapsed at her touch like it was nothing. The heavenly Tao Eye, the world-ending terror, shrank down to the size of a marble in her palm and went utterly, instantly still, and I saw in it, clear as day through Han Ming's stolen sight, an emotion I'd never once seen the heavens show. The Eye of God was afraid of her. She stepped the rest of the way out of the void, and she was wearing a green dress and a jade hairpin, and I looked at the hairpin in her hair, and then I looked at the identical hairpin in my own hand, and my entire life flashed before my eyes, because I finally understood exactly whose laundry I'd been wearing on my head for the better part of 2 years. She looked at me. She looked at the hairpin in my hand, and she said, in a voice with no anger in it at all, which was somehow the most frightening thing about her, "Return it to me." Now, I want to walk you through my exact reasoning here because it was fast and it was cowardly and it was correct. This woman had, moments ago, plucked a world-ending god out of a cage the Long family's founder had built and made it go quiet in her palm. Her power fluctuated in a way I couldn't read, sometimes supreme, sometimes something far past it. In Anfeng's memories, she'd beaten 9 peak masters half to death over losing her clothes, and nearly destroyed their great formation doing it. She was, by a wide margin, the single most dangerous thing I had ever stood in front of, and she had 6 pieces of missing wardrobe, and I was holding one of them, and in a corner of my storage space I was quietly holding the other 5. "Sure," I said, and handed over the hairpin, because I'm not stupid. Here's the part that saved my life, and I still don't fully understand it. She took the hairpin, but she couldn't take it back. It's a life-bound treasure, connected to her by blood, impossible for anyone else to hold against her will, and yet when she tried to recall the other pieces of her set, the ones she could feel were near, some absolute domineering force blocked her. My system's guarantee, made flesh. Drawn rewards carry no negative consequences for the host. Apparently that included, the goddess whose underwear you own cannot repossess it. A being who could hold the heavens in one hand reached for her own belongings and something simply told her no, and it was a something she'd never met before in all her existence. She went very still. She looked at me, a mere emperor, an ant, and at the hairpin, and she came to a conclusion I could see forming in her face and could not correct, that a junior at the Emperor realm could not possibly be blocking her, which meant someone was doing it through me, someone above her, someone from the Immortal Realm maybe, playing a game she'd walked into the middle of. She took a long, careful look at me, the way you look at bait to find the hook. Then she turned and vanished, and took the eye with her, and the heavenly Tao of the Origin Realm. The thing that had ruled my whole world from behind the clouds was simply gone, permanently, plucked off the board by a woman going through her laundry. The realm exhaled. My family exhaled. I did not exhale, because I just learned that the scariest thing in creation now knew my face and thought I was the puppet of something scarier and was going to come back. She came back faster than I wanted, but not for me. The 9 had spent their last trump. The 8 surviving peak masters out beyond the realm swallowed pills that would kill them when the effect ended and poured every drop of what they were into one final working, the immortal descent, and they cracked open a door to the immortal realm and pulled something down through it. His name was Yungshi. He was an earth immortal, which does not sound like much until you understand that the entire supreme realm, the ceiling of my whole world, the height 9 jailers had died to reach, was to him the bottom rung of a ladder he'd started on. A true immortal, the first one my world had seen in an age, standing in the ruined outer realm with the casual contempt of a man who stepped in something. The goddess, I'll call her that until I can call her by her name, grabbed me and dragged me out beyond the realm with her, and I understood a beat too late what she was doing. She thought I was connected to some immortal realm power, so she'd brought her puppet along to bait out its master, to make my mysterious backer show itself and deal with the intruder for her. She was using me as a lure, and I was, at that exact moment, standing between 2 immortal tier beings with nothing but an emperor's cultivation and a very bad feeling. Yungshi looked at us both, this ant and this treasure, and decided the fastest way to flush out whatever was hiding was to remove the audience. He raised a hand and he annihilated the entire outer realm, a whole world, every life in it. Epochs of things that had lived and evolved out there, wiped out with a gesture, casually, to make a point. That's what an immortal is. A man who erases a world to clear his sightline. My system, sensing an above-immortal power in the neighborhood, panicked itself into an emergency upgrade, cramming immortal-grade versions of my treasures into me and shoving a fistful of 1-hour realm experience cards into my inventory. And when Yunshi tried to search my soul, the freshly upgraded netherworld armor bit him hard enough to make an immortal spit blood. He recoiled, baffled, because ants aren't supposed to bite. And while he was baffled, the goddess moved. She'd realized her bait had no master coming to save it, that the domineering force protecting me wasn't a person she could bargain with, just a thing, and Yungshi was destroying her world, her origin realm, the thing she was somehow the heart of, so she stopped playing games. Black chains of pure corrosion erupted out of the void and bound the earth immortal, and I watched a woman who couldn't reclaim her own hairpin tear apart a being from a realm above my entire world, and it cost her everything. Yunxi burst apart and vanished, thoroughly dead. And the goddess who'd killed him swayed, and her breath went thin as spider silk, and she collapsed at the edge of the ruined world, spent down to nothing, her power gone, dying. The 8 peak masters arrived a heartbeat later, thrilled, their meal ticket, the treasure their masters had wanted for epochs, lying helpless and alone. They rushed to grab her. They'd forgotten there was one other person there, an ant, an emperor, a man who had just quietly been handed an hour of borrowed immortal power and a very rare opportunity. You forgot about me, I said, and wiped the 8 of them off existence with the human emperor banner before they'd finished being happy. Then it was just me and a ruined world and the most powerful woman in creation lying unconscious and undefended at my feet, and a decision. I could kill her. She was a daughter of destiny, worth more slain than any hero I'd eaten. She'd almost gotten me killed for bait an hour ago. And she was the one being in existence who could ruin me if she ever woke up angry about her wardrobe. Or I could do the smartest thing I ever did, which was refuse to make an enemy I couldn't afford and make an ally I couldn't buy. I still had the 1 second long immortal master, the title I'd taken off Yu Xuan, the one that let me plant a single long in any target, ignoring realm, ignoring distance, ignoring the fact that the target was a being from beyond my whole world. 1 second where I was the greatest long master alive. I'd been saving it. I couldn't think of a better use than the one lying unconscious in front of me. I hope my luck's good, I said, and spent it. A long, random, I couldn't choose which, flew into her before she could wake enough to stop it, and of all the long it could have been, the dice landed on the one that turned a lethal problem into a permanent alliance, not a leash on the body. A bond on the heart, the kind that takes whatever regard the afflicted already holds and amplifies it into total, unshakable devotion and trust. She opened her eyes, and the most powerful woman in creation looked at me, the man who'd just neutralized her when she was helpless, and instead of killing me, she smiled like she'd found the one thing worth protecting in a burned world, and she called me by a name I hadn't earned yet, Longshuan. Let me be very clear about what this was and wasn't, because I've read the ugly version of this story, and I refuse to be in it. I didn't touch her, I didn't own her body, and I didn't want to. That's the crude use of a long, and it's beneath the point. What I'd done was reach past every wall she had and make the single most dangerous being I'd ever met decide, at the root, that she was on my side. And here's the thing that surprised me, and I think surprised her more. I treated her the way I treated the 9, the way I treated Long Xiaoyun, as a partner, not a possession. Because a devoted ally who could kill immortals was worth infinitely more to me as a person I respected than as a thing I used, and I'd learned that lesson watching every other villain in this world get it wrong. She'd chosen me, the Long had tilted the choice, but I intended to be worth the choice. That's the whole difference, and it's the only difference that's ever mattered. Then she told me who she was, and I understood exactly how large a thing I'd just befriended. Her name was Jiang Mingxia, and she had, in a previous life, been the palace master of the Divine Moon Palace, a top power of the Immortal Realm, one of the great houses of the world above the fence, and an immortal emperor, one of the handful of true peaks of all creation, and she'd wanted more. She'd hit a bottleneck she couldn't break, and in her searching she'd found this, the Origin Realm, newborn, and the treasure gestating inside it, the primal chaos creation cauldron, one of the most precious things in existence, whose power of creation was the exact key she needed. She couldn't refine it from outside, it was too strong, the backlash too violent. So she did what only a desperate immortal emperor would do. She abandoned her own body, reincarnated and recultivated from nothing into the incarnation of the cauldron itself, became the treasure, and then, at the moment the Origin Realm's own heavenly Tao was first flickering to life, she devoured it, ate the newborn heavens and took their place, which meant the woman now devotedly holding my sleeve wasn't just a powerful ally, she was, in the most literal sense, my entire world, the Origin Realm's true heavenly Tao. The I'd fought twice was a caretaker she'd created to run things while she slept. A stand-in that had grown a will of its own and started plotting to replace her, using the very children of destiny the heavens were grooming. And the more she explained, the more the whole 2 years of my life turned inside out. Every chosen one I'd killed had been one of the Eye's pawns, meant to grow up and depose her. Me caging the Eye had protected her, and the clothes, the wardrobe my lottery had been stealing, the thing I'd spent this whole story dreading. The missing wardrobe was what had woken her up early, before the Eye's coup could finish, in time to save herself. My idiot system, stealing a goddess's underwear one piece at a time, had accidentally been the alarm clock that kept the true heavenly Tao from being murdered in her sleep. So it was you, she said, wonder in her voice, piecing it together from the memories she'd torn out of the caged Eye. Everything. You're the one who helped me. I want it on the record, I said, that I was mostly trying to survive and occasionally trying to get dressed. She laughed, and the sound of the Origin Realm's heavenly Tao laughing was a strange and enormous thing, and I stood in a world I'd just watched an immortal erase, holding the alliance of the being who was that world, and I finally, fully understood the shape of the game. I wasn't climbing out of a farm anymore. I owned the farm. The heavenly Tao was mine. The eye was gone. And up past the fence, in the Immortal Realm, there was a usurped palace that used to be hers, an ancestor of mine still writing letters home, and a heaven-sealing pavilion that had spent 40% of its power trying to reach down here, none of them yet aware that the treasure they'd been hunting for epochs had just woken up, remembered everything, and taken a partner. Jiang Mingsha, I said, how do you feel about going home? She looked up at the fence in the sky, at the Immortal Realm past it, at the life that had thrown her away and the palace that had been stolen from her. I feel, she said, like it's time someone up there met you. Before we climbed, Jiang Mingsha and I did a cold and ugly thing together, and I'll give it to you in one breath so we can both move past it. She was the heavenly Tao now, which meant she could still make a child of destiny or two before the realm's balance ran out, bestow the fortune, seed the luck, and I could still kill children of destiny for system rewards, so we manufactured them. We picked a Tao domain, detonated its spirit veins, let the lone grieving survivor absorb the luck a broken heart soaks up best, watched him ripen into a chosen one over an afternoon, and then I killed him for the draws. 300 pulls ahead. We did it twice. A domain of humans, a corner of the demon realms, before the system caught the exploit and patched it with a prissy little note asking me to please stop abusing bugs. A lot of people who never heard my name died, so I could farm a lottery. I'm not going to perform regret I don't have. I told you at the start I was the thing that ate the protagonists. This is just what that looks like when you own the factory. Jiang Mingsha, my new partner, didn't blink because she'd spent lifetimes as an immortal emperor, and to her a Tao domain of mortals was a rounding error. We were, I'll admit, extremely well matched. The 600 draws paid out though, and they paid out the exact kit a man needs to sneak into heaven. 5 gold items, the best haul I'd ever pulled. A Hongmeng stone pendant, a stone that let me walk from the mortal world into the immortal realm directly, no ascension passage, no fanfare, invisible to whatever was watching the front door. A 4 seasons reincarnation lamp that granted eternal life without ascension. I gave that one to my father, quietly, for the family elders whose lifespans were running out because even a villain gets to do one nice thing for his parents. A Hongmeng Dao-splitting talisman, one shot that tore through any law or realm, an immortal emperor's worth of firepower in a single sheet of paper, for the day something up there needed a hole put in it. A 3 realms unification pouch, which could carry living people across the realm boundary that normally repels them, a way to bring my own up the ladder instead of leaving them behind. And the absolute thought-sealing heaven seal, which I already loved, pointed at one being, no matter how vast, and reduced them to immortal, cultivation sealed, laws and all, a stealth door, a firepower nuke, a carrier for my people, a god sealer, and a lamp for my parents. The system for once had built me a plan instead of a punchline. I gathered the family and told them I was leaving, not ascending in the loud way. No tribulation, no passage the heaven-sealing pavilion could watch. I'd slip up through the Hongmeng pendant, a ghost through the fence, and arrive in the immortal realm without anyone above knowing a new fish had jumped the gate. And before I went, I had Jiang Mingsha adjust the Origin Realm's own rules so that no one else down here could ascend and draw the wrong attention while I was gone. A lock on the door behind me, keeping my whole world quiet and safe under the protection of a heavenly Tao who now answered to my side. I took 4 with me. Long Xiaoyun, my sword immortal, the witch ancestor who could someday make a world. Huangfu Qingling, the human emperor's heir. Shen Qingshuang, my supreme late mirror queen. And Jiang Mingsha, the heavenly Tao of my whole world in the shape of a woman going home to a house that had thrown her away. The 9 and the rest I left below to grow, safe under the new order, my whole terrifying family standing guard over a realm that finally belonged to itself. All that was left was to say goodbye to the only world I'd ever half belonged to. My mother, who pretended she wasn't upset by force-feeding me enough travel rations to provision a war. My grandfather, the #1 swordsman of a world I was walking out of, who told me not to embarrass the family up there, which from him is affection. And the hardest goodbye, the one I still hadn't figured out how to say. The night before we left the world, Long Xiaoyun found me on the roof of the Divine Sun's residence, watching the Origin Realm I was about to abandon. She sat down beside me without a word, the way she'd sat at the mouth of an ice cave a lifetime ago, guarding a man who no longer needed guarding. She'd taken off the veil. Up here, in the dark, with no one to be a legend for, she was just a woman who'd known me longer than I'd known myself. "You're quiet," she said. "You're never quiet. It's unsettling." I ordered a cow herd killed a few months ago, I said. A kid. He hadn't done anything yet. I did it because it was efficient. I don't know why I told her. I'd said it to no one, felt it for the length of one sentence, and moved on, exactly like I told you I would. But sitting there on the edge of a world I'd eaten, with the one person who remembered the boy before the system, the sentence came back up. She was quiet for a moment. She didn't tell me it was all right. She didn't tell me I was a monster. She wasn't stupid, and she wasn't cruel, and both would have been. When we were children, she said instead, you were the softest thing in that whole cold family, sickly, kind. Everyone waited for the day the world would break you, because that's what the world does to soft things, and then you died on some other world and came back wearing that soft boy's face, and you decided the world would not get the chance. She looked at me. I've watched you do terrible things. I'll watch you do more. But I have never once watched you enjoy them, and I have never once watched you lie to yourself about them. You know exactly what you are. That's rarer than mercy, and it's worth more. That's a very generous way to describe a man who kills cowherds. It's a very accurate way to describe the only man I've ever chosen. She said it plainly, the way she said everything, no performance in it. I wasn't given to you, Longfentian. Your mother sent me to guard your life. I stayed to guard something else. There's a difference, and I picked it. I didn't have anything to say to that. The file of things Long Xiaoyun said that I couldn't answer had grown, over 2 years, into a library. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, which was reach over and take her hand, calloused sword hand in mine, and we sat there on the roof of a world we were leaving, not saying anything else, while below us, the Origin Realm slept safe under a heavenly Tao who loved me and a family who'd burn it down before they let it fall. When I get to the top, I said finally, I'm coming back for all of you, my parents, my grandfather, you, the whole family. I don't care how high the top is, I'll climb it and I'll come back down and I'll bring you all up with me. I know, she said, not, I hope, not, if you can, I know. The greatest sword talent in 1 billion years had run the numbers on me and simply concluded it was true. It's the closest thing to a home I've ever had, someone who looks at the impossible thing I've promised and doesn't argue. We ascended the next morning. The Immortal Realm humbled me inside of 5 minutes, and it did it twice. I stepped out of the void into a nothing corner of it, and the first humbling was cultivation. My Emperor Realm, the ceiling of my whole world, the height 100 of my ancestors died reaching for, meant nothing here. Here I was, a human immortal, bottom rung, the freshman. The air was so thick with power that a back alley in a mortal city held more of it than my entire home Dao domain. The second humbling arrived on foot, smug, mid-crime. A local human immortal, a poisoner named Lin Tao, in the middle of murdering some loose cultivator over a grudge, noticed the strange man and his quiet maidservant watching from the roadside and decided we were mortals who'd seen too much. You two, he said, not even turning fully around, watch less of the excitement in your next life. I opened my mouth to handle it. I didn't get the chance. Jiang Mingsha, my maidservant, broke through to the Immortal Lord realm on the spot, recovering a sliver of her old power now that she was home in a realm that let her climb, and disintegrated him with a glance. No technique, no warning. A crumb, flicked off a table. He interrupted our walk, she explained, taking my arm. I decided the Immortal Realm and I were going to get along fine. We spared the loose cultivator Lin Tao had been murdering, an old soul named Guo Xiang, and kept him as a guide, because a man whose life you save becomes very informative very fast. He led us to Han City, a 5th-class city, the lowest grade there is, guarded by a single human immortal named Han Dong. Han Dong was that rarest thing in any realm, a decent official. He treated us with courtesy despite our low cultivation, out of plain gratitude, and I liked him enough to leave a gift for later, a no-grade pill that would slowly, quietly uncap the aptitude of anyone worthy who took it. Plant a seed in good soil, come back in a century, see what grew. Jiang Mingsha filled in the scale as we walked, and the scale broke my brain a little. This city, she said, the lowest, poorest rung in the entire Immortal Realm. Yes? It's about the size of your whole Origin Realm. I stopped walking. This one city is my entire world. One of countless millions like it, she said gently, the way you'd break bad news to a child. Above it, 4th-class cities 10 times larger, 3rd class 10 times larger than those. 3 whole heavens, up and up, until the domains at the top where the real powers live. She named a few. The Divine Moon Palace, that used to be hers, the Heaven's Ceiling Pavilion that had hunted her, and a third name, New, that made even Jiang Mingsha go still when a passing rumor carried it on the wind. The Immortal Long family, a power that had appeared out of nowhere, killed a sitting immortal emperor, a thing that basically never happens, annihilated his faction, taken his seat, and then sealed its gates and gone silent. Nobody knew where they'd come from. I had a guess. A very specific, heart-pounding guess involving a founder who walked out the top of a world epochs ago and never stopped writing letters home. But guesses get you killed up here, so I filed it and did the boring, necessary work first. I took over a second-class city called Star Illusion City, and I took it the way I take everything. Its lord, a true immortal named Star Luo, made the mistake of attacking us on sight, some junior undergoing an unlicensed ascension tribulation in his city, an insult he intended to answer personally. He snorted, gathered his power, and reached to shake us all to death. He came apart mid-reach. Jiang Mingsha again, an immortal lord strike, and a true immortal city lord simply stopped existing between one word and the next. The local intel sellers, the stargazing tower, read the room and folded inside the hour. I had a base. The unlicensed ascension he died over was mine, or rather, my people's. Long Xiaoyun and Huangfu Qingling and Shen Qing Shuang all drew their own ascension tribulations in that city and crossed into the immortal realm properly, each of them stronger for the thicker air. Shen Qing Shuang's tribulation lit up the whole sky. She came out the other side and immediately tried to read my mind again, informed me she'd succeeded and could not tell me what I was thinking. Some things survived the climb. I handed the three of them City Lord tokens keyed to yank them to safety and turned them loose to grow, because a stolen body of luck makes even a fresh immortal climb like a chosen one. Momo finally hatched out of her cocoon, spoke her first real words in a little girl voice, took one look at Jiang Mingsha hogging my shoulder, and called her a wanton. Then she settled in as the single most powerful and least dignified cat in a new and much larger world. Jiang Mingsha herself kept climbing back toward the immortal emperor she'd once been. A slow process, she assured me, but an inevitable one. And me? I had a shopping list, a dead man's shopping list. Ziming's buried vaults, salted all through this realm, precisely located, waiting for a reincarnation that would never come. The immortal realm had no idea I existed yet. I intended to keep it that way for exactly as long as it took to get strong enough that it wouldn't matter, starting with a mountain range where an immortal venerable had hidden his life's work, and a Dao I was about to steal off a stone. Ziming's vault was hidden inside a dead mountain range in a third-class city, behind an illusion so good that an immortal king couldn't find it, and a mortal could walk right in if he knew the trick. Inside was a whole small world, mountains of spirit stones, a river of liquefied immortal qi, every long poison the man had ever refined floating in jars, and at its heart, three things. A jade slip that could shrink the whole small world to a mustard seed and carry it, a tablet engraved with 8 arrogant characters. Of the 3,000 Daos, all can be long. And an ancient book that held, in a plain list, the names of dozens of immortals, Earth Immortal up to Immortal Lord, that Ziming had poisoned in his past life and could command through the book like a man with a drawer full of leashes. I sat down in front of the tablet and comprehended the entire Dao of Long in 3 days. It's the rarest of all the Daos precisely because refining Long the normal way requires killing an ocean of people, so no one ever gets to the end of it. But the tablet was a shortcut a dead genius had spent lifetimes building, and I was the reincarnation that wasn't he'd left it for. When I stood up, I could plant a Long in anyone, invisibly, with no one but a fellow Long master able to even detect it. An immortal king, given time, could seed a Long in an immortal venerable and quietly own his mind. I now had that, plus a book of ready-made servants, plus a river of qi to bathe in. The immortal realm was going to be so much easier than the last one, and I hadn't even started hunting yet. Then I started hunting, and the Dao of Long turned me from a man who kills chosen ones into a man who arranges for them to die without ever seeing his face. There was a girl in the stargazing tower named Jiang Wanner, daughter of the local branch master, and, the panel told me, a destined female support whose chosen one was a fresh lower realm ascender named Yang Shen. And Yang Shen was a special case, the reincarnation of an immortal venerable named Yuan Feng, whose good friend, another venerable called Gentian, had literally created Jiang Wanner for him, built the girl to order so the reincarnated Yuan Feng could meet her, love her, and use the reunion to climb back to the top. 2 immortal venerables invested in one romance. Killing the boy the normal way meant making 2 enemies from a realm I couldn't touch yet. So I didn't kill him. I never touched him. I seeded a Long in him through the stargazing tower's own sacred healing medicine while they treated his wounds, and I planted another in the branch master, Zhang Shan, and took quiet control of the whole tower from the inside. Then I stood back and let the story tear itself apart. His own family arrived to collect him, a true immortal named Yang Ming, imperious, careless. I let my Long bloom in Yang Shen at exactly the wrong moment, drove his cultivation into a berserk spike he couldn't control, and pointed the madness at the one target guaranteed to break him, the girl he'd just fallen in love with. Yang Shen killed Jiang Wanner with his own hands, snapped back to himself for one unbearable second of clarity, and crashed all the way down to mortal from the grief, An ascended immortal falling out of immortality forever, which is a door that only opens one way. Then I had my puppet Jiang Shan finish him while everyone was too horrified to notice whose hand was really on the strings. I devoured his void bone marrow off the corpse, a space physique, letting me tear through the stable space of the immortal realm the way locals couldn't. He tried, dying, to bargain for it, and then, when he saw there was no bargain, he did what the good ones do. He asked me for one thing. If I ever mastered time deeply enough to walk into the past, would I carry a message to a woman he'd loved and outlived, back when he was mortal, before any of the cultivation, and tell her he tried to come home? I took the errand. I don't know if I'll ever run it. But I keep a little list of these, the last requests of the reincarnators I've killed, and it's the closest thing I have to a conscience, which is to say, it's a list. And I keep it, and that's all. The reward was the biggest single haul of my new life. 500 draws, and out of them a complete Earth Immortal Realm legacy, a treasure so rare it's usually forged by an immortal emperor for a beloved child. In fact, the system noted, it had just been forged by an immortal emperor for a beloved child, and stolen mid-ceremony out of the old man's hands. Somewhere up in a domain, an immortal emperor was kowtowing to empty air, apologizing to whatever unseen power had plucked his son's gift off his palm. I absorbed it and jumped straight to Earth Immortal. And alongside it came the Heaven-Earth Profound Yellow Exquisite Pagoda, a 49-floor tower where time ran 100 to 1, a place to cultivate a century in a year. I tidied up behind myself, of course, steered every clue toward a feud between the stargazing tower and Yuan Feng's grieving friend Gentian, so the two immortal venerables would go to war with each other over a death I'd caused, and neither would think to look down at the fresh human immortal, now Earth Immortal, who'd walked in, robbed the whole affair, and walked out. I was learning the shape of this realm fast, bigger, richer, and exactly as blind to a patient villain as the last one. And I was about to test just how blind, because I'd caught wind of a lecture in a nearby city, a suspiciously generous immortal offering to teach the Tao to any nobody who showed up. In my experience, when something in a cultivation world sounds too good to be free, it's either a trap or a chosen one. Sometimes, if you're lucky, it's both. First, I cleaned up a loose thread. The Chen City Lord's people had trailed me after the stargazing tower business, so I burned an hour of borrowed heavenly immortal power off an experience card and erased his whole line before they could report to anyone. Housekeeping. Out beyond it, the immortal venerable Gentian was rampaging across the lower heaven, smashing every stargazing tower he could find, hunting his dead friend's killer, following a trail I'd bent into a loop that led everywhere except me. Let him. A furious venerable chasing his own tail is a furious venerable who isn't looking down. Then Jiang Mingsha and I went to a lecture because I smelled a chosen one, and instead I found the single best con artist in the immortal realm. Here's the setup. 100 Transformations Immortal Lord had announced he'd lecture on the Tao for free to anyone in a nothing little third-class city. Free wisdom from an immortal lord is like a free yacht. The interesting question is never the yacht, it's what the yacht is for. Half the realm's local hopefuls pack the illusory arena anyway, because desperate people will always take the yacht. The lecture was genuinely good. The immortal lord expounded, and enlightenment rolled off him in waves, and half the audience fell into breakthroughs on the spot. Then, mid-lecture, he stopped, walked to a mediocre-looking youth in the crowd, and offered to take him as a disciple, and the youth, arrogant beyond his station, looked an immortal lord in the eye and said, "You're not worthy. Come back when you're at least an immortal emperor." The crowd gasped. The immortal lord, instead of vaporizing the boy, laughed with delight, cherishing such spirit, and the sheer profound joy of the moment tipped him over into his own breakthrough, the phenomena of a man rising to the immortal king realm, blooming across the sky. Jiang Mingsha, beside me, an immortal lord in her own right, watched it all and found nothing wrong, which is exactly how I knew the whole thing was fake. "Look again," I murmured to her. Not at the lecturer, at the audience. She swept her divine sense across the arena, and her eyes narrowed and then went wide. Longshuan, half these people are the same person. Half? Try all the interesting ones. The lecturer, the child attendant who opened the doors, every single person who conveniently fell into a breakthrough at the right dramatic moment. And I nodded at the arrogant youth, the brave boy who insulted him to set up the punchline. All one man, all illusions. He's not lecturing. He's performing a con with a cast of himself, and the con is aimed at heaven. Because that's what the 100 Transformations art actually was, a deceiving heaven technique. The old fraud couldn't reach the immortal king realm by cultivation, his talent was garbage, so instead he'd built an illusion so total that if he could fool an entire arena, including a real immortal lord like Jiang Mingsha, into believing he'd broken through, then the heavens themselves would believe it too, and grant him the breakthrough as reward for a lie flawlessly told. He was trying to bluff his way past a wall he couldn't climb, using our belief as the ladder, and Jiang Mingsha not seeing through it had been the final brick, an immortal lord's confirmation, the proof heaven required, so I took the brick back out. 100 transformations, immortal lord, I called, pitching my voice across the whole arena as his ascension crested. Save your strength. Your clones are a nice trick, but a nice trick isn't a Tao, and a lie an ant can see through isn't worthy of the immortal king realm. The breakthrough stopped dead. Frozen at half step, the wall rematerializing the instant one real cultivator refused to believe. His Tao heart cracked audibly. Jiang Mingsha, mildly furious to learn she'd been used as a set piece, ended the lecturing clone with a single strand of moonlight, and I brought down the absolute seal on the whole illusion, and the grand arena, the audience, the ascending immortal lord all dissolved into a single withered little old man plummeting out of the sky, cultivation sealed, aura gone, wailing all the way to the ground, a Middle-earth immortal. That was all he really was, a nobody who'd spent his whole life learning to lie so beautifully that reality occasionally agreed with him. I loved him immediately. Please, he wheezed from the dirt, expecting death. The celestial signs foretold a new star would rise in this place. That's why I came, to feed my art on its light. If it wasn't you, then... It was a chosen one I killed last week, I said. You came to steal a dead man's shine. I crouched down. But you have two things I want. You can fool the heavens, and you can read the stars to find where chosen ones are being born. That second one especially I have a lot of use for. I planted a long in him before he could beg, the binding kind, the loyalty kind, and the greatest fraud in the immortal realm became my personal star reader, a bloodhound for the very protagonists I'd come up here to hunt. He was thrilled in the end. He'd spent his whole life fooling the world alone. Now he got to fool it for someone who appreciated the craft. Between his sky charts and my Tao of Long, the immortal realm's chosen ones stopped being needles in a haystack and started being fish in a barrel. And I had a whole cosmos of them to work through. Between the big jobs, I kept the smaller trade running, because a cosmos is a lot of fish and I'm patient. Let me show you one, because it's a good picture of what the Tao of Long turned me into up here. My star reader, the little fraud, Xing Chen, reading the heavens for me now instead of lying to them, flagged a rising light in a fourth-class city, a young man named Yang Kai. Trash turned genius, the whole package, humiliated by his sect, gifted a legacy in a cave 1 month from the breakthrough that would launch his revenge tour across 3 cities. The heavens had big plans for him. He had bigger plans for himself. I never met him. That's the whole art of it now. I planted a long in his sex water supply, invisible, undetectable, and I sat in a tea house 2 cities away with Jiang Mingsha and watched the monitors while I ate. On the morning of his breakthrough, Yang Kai climbed his sect's sacred peak in front of the elders who'd once mocked him, drew on the legacy he'd earned, and reached for the power that was going to make him somebody. The Long woke up. Not to kill him. That's crude, and it leaves a body, and bodies get investigated. The Long simply reached into the legacy as it flowed through him and rerouted it, quietly, 1 stream at a time, up and out of him and into a jade bottle I'd left buried under the peak 6 days earlier. The great inheritance the heavens had spent years preparing for their chosen one poured out of Yang Kai mid-breakthrough and into my luggage, and from his side it felt exactly like a breakthrough failing. Just failing. His own fault, his own weakness, in front of everyone he'd come to impress. He didn't die. He fell all the way back to nothing, cultivation gutted, the legacy gone, and he stood there on the sacred peak in front of the sneering elders, ruined, unable to explain how or why. No enemy to blame, no villain to swear revenge against, just a boy who'd reached for greatness and, everyone agreed, simply hadn't been strong enough after all. That's the part I've gotten good at that I couldn't do down in the origin realm. I don't beat protagonists anymore. I take the thing that would have made them protagonists and leave them standing in the wreckage of a story that was never going to happen, wondering what they did wrong. The heavens don't even get to punish me, because from every angle it reads as fate, a chosen one who choked. You've become very tidy, Jiang Mingsha observed, refilling my tea, watching Yang Kai's future dissolve on the monitor. I've become very old, I said. Down there I was a kid with a hammer. Up here I'm a man with a scalpel. It's the same job. You just make less noise. I retrieved the jade bottle that evening. Another dead man's fortune. Another line off my list. Another protagonist filed under insufficient. And somewhere far below, the heavens quietly crossed a name off their own list of hopefuls and reached for the next one, never once looking at the patient things sitting in a tea house drinking tea, working through their entire roster of heroes 1 undrunk cup at a time. It was almost peaceful. It did not stay peaceful, because that's when my family found me. But for one quiet afternoon, in a tea house 2 cities from a broken chosen one, with a goddess pouring my tea and a cosmos of fish on the monitors, I'll admit it, being the villain was the best job I ever had. Gentian found me first, as it turned out. The grieving immortal venerable, still hunting his dead friend's killer, finally traced the loop back to a human immortal-shaped anomaly that had become an earth immortal at an impossible speed. He caught me on the road, reached out to drag me off for a proper interrogation, and I want you to know that for about 4 seconds I was in real trouble. An earth immortal against an immortal venerable is not a fight, it's a formality. I slapped the absolute seal on him anyway. Bought a breath. Watched a venerable's cultivation flicker under a gold-grade treasure and knew the seal wouldn't hold him long. It didn't have to, because someone else had been tracking me too, along a thread far older than his grudge, and she arrived in the gap. An old woman stepped out of the void, an immortal venerable herself, late stage, with an aura I'd never met and a face I somehow half knew. She ignored the sealed, thrashing gentian completely and looked straight at me, at the blood in my veins, and her cloudy old eyes went clear. "Young man," she said, "is your surname Long?" I said it was. I said the names Long Chen, Long Xiao, Long Chu, the old ancestors who'd guarded the family back home, and the old woman's whole body trembled because Long Chu was her little sister, left behind an age ago in a world she'd almost forgotten she'd come from. Her name was Long Yun, and she was family, real family, blood. One of the 100 who'd walked out of the Origin Realm the night the founder emptied it. Then she turned to Gentian, who'd nearly worked free of my seal, and she killed him, casually. The way the strong end the weak up here, an immortal venerable snuffing an immortal venerable, and she did it, she told me after, specifically so the karma of his death would land on her instead of me. My cultivation was too shallow to carry a venerable's death. His backers would trace it, so she took it. A stranger who shared my blood killed a man to protect me before she'd known me a full minute, because to her, protecting me was protecting the family, and the family was the only thing that had ever mattered to any of them. I'd spent 2 years learning that everyone in creation keeps everyone else on a leash. And then my own great-great-something aunt walked out of the sky and took a death for me for free, on principle, and I didn't have anything cold to say about it. I just followed her home. Home was the immortal Long family, and it was every guess I'd been too scared to say out loud, all true at once. They were us, the 100 emperors who'd vanished from the Origin Realm in a single night. Long Yuan hadn't taken them to die. He'd taken them up. Dropped them into a dying pocket world to grow, then rescued them into the Immortal Realm, where they'd clawed their way up over ages until they were strong enough to kill a sitting immortal emperor and take his seat. The mysterious new power the whole realm feared was my ancestors, and I was technically the crown prince who'd wandered in the back door. It was not a simple homecoming. A family that huge had grown complicated in the climb. There wasn't one Long family anymore. There were 9 lineages, branched off from 9 of the founder's clones across 9 different worlds, all reunited now under one roof and all roughly equal in strength, which is a recipe for civil war. To pick which lineage would hold the family head seat without the whole clan tearing itself apart, they'd agreed on a contest, a godchild competition. Each lineage sends its best young disciple, under 1,000 years old, and whichever prodigy wins makes his lineage the patriarch line. My lineage, the Origin Realm line, Long Yun's line, was the strongest of the 9. Its head was the Grand Elder, an immortal emperor named Long Qian, backed by an even mightier hidden elder named Long Tianyang. I knew those names. I'd stood in front of their statues, the 2 figures flanking the founder in my family's ancestral hall back home, the ones whose dharma manifestations my father had summoned to fight Anfeng, Long Qian and Long Tianyang, were not dead ancestors carved in stone. They were up here, alive, running my lineage, the living originals of the gods I'd been praying to my whole second life. Long Qian took tea with me and told me the rest over a chessboard, the way old men do. The founder, Long Yuan, the man who'd walked out the top of the world, was an immortal emperor who fought using 10,000 clones, each one a Long family head somewhere, all of them slowly funneling every branch of the family up toward this realm for a purpose no one below his rank was allowed to know. I placed a stone dead in the center of the board, the sovereign square, a beginner's arrogance, or a master's. Long Qian looked at it, then at the 20-year-old who'd made 100 lost emperors look like weather that shouldn't exist, and he did not correct me. "There's one complication," he said, moving white. "Our own prodigy. His name was Long Hao. Born with a curse-devouring body, a physique that eats curses and turns them into cultivation. In the fight to kill the immortal emperor, he'd stepped in front of a dying god's curse to save the family and swallowed the whole thing. It should have made him unstoppable. Instead, it put him into a sleep the elders were certain he'd never wake from. A tragedy for the lineage. A very interesting opportunity for me, because a curse-devouring body is exactly the kind of thing I eat, and its owner was in no position to object. "Will you fight for us?" Long Qian asked, the living face of a statue offering the family's heir a chance to win it all. "Will you stand for the Origin Realm lineage and make us the patriarch line?" "I'll fight," I said. I did not mention that I intended to win it twice, once for the family, and once for the sleeping man with the physique I wanted. The godchild competition ran 10 days, and for 9 of them, it was a formality. The 8 other lineages sent their best, prodigies who'd cultivated 7, 8, 900 years, each one a monster their whole branch had polished for exactly this. I was in my 20s, on the scoreboard. My sealed cultivation read as garbage again, so they lined up to teach the arrogant Origin Line Junior a lesson, and one after another I broke them without breaking a sweat. One named Long Fei swung a near-immortal lord weapon at me. I let it shatter against a body he couldn't scratch and put him down with a single punch. After that, most of them simply forfeited, because there's no honor in losing to a man who won't even use a technique on you. Then, on the last day, with the whole thing all but decided, the ground under my lineage's quarter cracked open, and Long Hao woke up, the sleeping prodigy, the curse-devouring body. He'd absorbed a dying immortal emperor's curse and slept on it for a season, and he did not wake up weaker. He woke up as a late-stage true immortal with the potential to reach the immortal king realm, the strongest young thing in the entire family, and he walked out of his crater, took one look at the competition, and announced that the godchild's seat was his by right and he'd fight anyone who disagreed. He was, on paper, correct. He'd earned it. He'd taken a curse for the family. And he was, conveniently for me, standing right there with the exact physique I'd come to this competition intending to eat. "I'll disagree," I said, and stepped into the ring. "I want to walk you through this one carefully, because it's the coldest thing I did in the Immortal Realm, and I did it in front of 9 immortal emperors, without one of them seeing it happen. We fought, and I climbed. Every time he escalated, I burned an experience card and matched him, heavenly immortal, true immortal, immortal lord, my cultivation leaping in clean, impossible jumps that had the watching elders muttering. And somewhere in the first exchange, when my fingers brushed his throat, I planted along. A single strand, invisible, undetectable by anyone in that arena who wasn't a Longmaster, which was all of them. Cornered, outclimbed, Long Hao played his ultimate. He crushed a Dao talisman and spoke 2 words, heaven and earth, silence, and the entire Long family froze. Everyone, the audience, the 8 lineages. Grand Elder Long Qian himself, an immortal emperor, caught mid-motion an instant before he could intervene, locked in the last frame of the world like a fly in glass. It was a genuinely terrifying trump, a talisman that could freeze even an immortal emperor for a few precious seconds, and Long Hao had spent it to buy the moment he needed to kill me clean, while the family stood paralyzed and unable to object. There was one flaw. It froze everyone, except me, because I also held the Tao of time and space, and his talisman's law slid off me like water off glass. So in the silent, frozen world, the whole Long family stopped mid-breath. No witnesses, no one able to move or see. I walked up to Long Hao, who could not understand why his own trump had left me standing, and I opened the devouring heaven divine body and ate his curse-devouring physique out of his living bones. And the moment the physique was gone, the dead immortal emperor's curse it had been holding in check erupted with nothing left to restrain it, and Long Hao came apart from the inside, killed by the very curse that had made him a hero. Then I walked back to my mark, reset my pose to the frame the family had last seen, and waited. The silence ended. The Long family unfroze into the exact instant they'd left, and saw Long Hao, mid-fight, suddenly detonate, his own borrowed curse finally consuming him. Everyone understood at once. The tragic prodigy who'd taken a curse for the family had pushed his unstable body one fight too far and self-destructed. A hero's death, a terrible loss. No one had seen anything else because there had been nothing else to see. No one, except Grand Elder Long Qian, who looked at Long Hao's ashes and then looked at me for a long, long moment and did the math an immortal emperor can do. He knew. He couldn't prove it, and he couldn't afford it. Killing another Origin Line prodigy over a dead man and handing the patriarch's seat to a rival lineage was a price the family would never pay. So he swallowed it, and I made sure the medicine went down easy. I suggested, publicly, warmly, that Long Hao be honored as a hero, his sacrifice recorded, his name enshrined. Give the dead man everything. It costs nothing, and it buries the question with the body. "So it really was you," Long Qian said to me quietly, when the crowd had thinned. "Long Hao died a hero for the family," I said. "And the Origin lineage keeps the seat. That's the outcome you wanted, Grand Elder. Everything else is just how we got here." He held my eyes. Then he inclined his head, because he was an immortal emperor and a family head, and he understood that a monster who wins is worth more than a hero who's dead. "Everything else," he agreed, "is just how we got here. They made me the godchild 3 days later. I want you to hold the 2 ends of this together, because I've been carrying them the whole way, and this is where they touch. On the first morning of my second life, I woke up in a stranger's body, having learned exactly one fact about myself, that I was the villain, the stepping stone. The young master who exists in Chapter 1, so the hero has someone to kill in Chapter 40. A tutorial boss with a death sentence stamped on his forehead by a story that had already been written without him. And on this morning, at the top of the tallest tower in a realm 10,000 times too big for the world I'd started in front of 9 immortal emperors and the assembled might of the most feared family in creation, they set me on the 9-dragon throne and named me the divine son of the immortal Long family. The heir. The one the whole sky would learn to fear the way the origin realm had feared my father. The stepping stone, standing on the throne the story had never written a line for. There was one last ritual. As I sat, the heavens themselves, even up here, offered me a contract. 4 words wrote themselves across the sky in a star map over my head, mandated by heaven. Sit, the words said, and be blessed. Take the sky's favor, and the road to immortal emperor opens easy under your feet, and you become the chosen one of chosen ones, fate's own darling, Chapter 1's villain redeemed at last into the hero the heavens always wanted. I looked up at the offer, the blessing every protagonist I'd ever eaten would have wept to receive. Then I put a finger through it. The great desolation prison heaven finger, one clean strike, and the words mandated by heaven shattered into falling starlight over a hall of stunned immortal emperors. Because being fate's chosen darling is a leash like any other, and I had watched, for 2 years and across 2 worlds, exactly what the heavens do to the heroes they raise. They raise them to be eaten, everyone. Yu Xuan, the carp fattened for slaughter, the chosen ones groomed to free a farm and die doing it. I'd started this story as the thing the heavens scripted to lose. I was not going to end it as the thing they scripted to win. Keep your blessing, I told the sky, and took the throne without it. The Chapter 1 villain sat down as the divine son of the strongest family in creation, having refused the mandate of heaven to his own face, and the whole hall knelt, and somewhere far below, in a world I'd left safe under a heavenly Tao who loved me, my father would have laughed until he cried. Being the divine son came with keys, and I spent them fast. Under my new residence, the old seat of the immortal emperor my family had killed, I found something the family's own 9 emperors had searched the place top to bottom and missed, a chaos green lotus, the head of all chaos treasures, born before the world was judged, a thing that could gestate a saint. It had been hidden there, waiting, keyed to the divine son. And the more I looked at it, the more I understood it hadn't been luck that I found it. It had been left for me, by someone who'd known there would be a divine son, and that it would be me. The family filled in the rest, one careful conversation at a time. How Long Yuan had scattered them into a dying lost world to forge them, then pulled them up here. How the top of the immortal realm held 4 saints, immortal emperors granted a saint's fruit, coexistent with heaven, effectively unkillable. So far above me, the gap was the gap between me and a bug. How the founder ran 10,000 clones across 10,000 worlds, all of it pointed at a purpose no one below his rank was allowed to know. And in the treasure vault, past a wall of extreme emperor weapons, I tamed a hammer, the purple gold hammer, an immortal emperor's artifact. My own lineage's old ancestors had tried to claim it and failed. It fought me too. An emperor-tier weapon does not answer to an earth immortal, right up until I called on the great Tao of force, and the image of the god who split the first chaos rose up behind me, and the hammer took one look at that and decided, in a small, terrified voice, to call me master. An elder watching me bind it said a strange thing on his way out. Do not fail the heavy trust clan leader Chang'e placed in you. When I asked what trust, he only smiled and said I'd know when I was ready. I sat with that a long time, because a founder who walked out the top of a world epochs ago had built all of this. The lost world, the climb, the 9 lineages, the throne, the lotus under my floor and the hammer in my hand. He'd built a machine ages long and 100 emperors wide, and at the far end of it he'd left a seat and a trust for an heir he seemed to have known would come. And I'd walked in the back door and sat down in exactly that seat, refusing the mandate of heaven on the way, and I had the growing, electric certainty that somewhere past the saints, Long Yuan had watched me do it, and had not been surprised. I'd spent this whole story thinking I was the variable the heavens forgot to write. I was starting to wonder if I was the variable someone much higher up had written very carefully indeed. But that's a question for later. Let me leave you at an auction, because it's where I am right now, and it's a good picture of what I've become. I'd gone down to the second heaven to collect one of Ximing's buried vaults, and while I was there, the biggest auction house in the region held its once-in-an-age sale, and I bought a ticket, mostly to watch. The first lot walked out in a cage, a woman with a serpent's tail. 9 colors on it, which meant an aptitude past even the immortal emperor realm, the last true daughter of a race the rest of the realm had hunted to near extinction, precisely because everything about her was worth stealing. The bidders in the private rooms lit up like wolves because the old ugly plan for a woman like that is always the same, and I could see every one of them thinking it. I outbid all of them before they finished thinking. Not to own her the way they meant. The sect's own steward, terrified of the long name the second I let it slip, simply gifted her to me to buy my goodwill, and the stargazing tower's man, who'd been about to win her, folded the instant Immortal Long family crossed the floor. I opened the cage myself. They sold you as a thing, I told her. Her name, the panel said, was Chuya, and under the despair, there was a queen. I'm not in the market for a thing. I'm in the market for the last royal of a race the whole sky wants dead, and the answer to why she isn't dead yet. I nodded at the divine stone glinting in a later lot. The 9-colored one, the exact treasure that could restore a snake queen's stolen power. Here's the deal. You want your people to have a future. I have a faction that protects what it collects, and room in it for a Medusa who owes nobody. Stand with me as what you are, a sovereign, not a prize, and I'll win you that stone, and your race gets to exist again. Or I open the door, and you walk out into a realm that will cage you again by nightfall. Your call. It wasn't a hard call. She'd spent her whole life being wanted for her body and her blood. I was the first person who'd offered her a throne instead. She chose the throne. The rest of the sale I spent teaching a room full of powers, a lesson about currency. A rare Dao fruit went by, and a 9-colored divine stone, and every private room bid their treasures and their favors, and one room bid with a forged decree stamped with the authority of the Divine Moon Palace. Zhang Mingsha beside me went very still. That isn't my master's aura, she said quietly. That's a lie wearing my house's seal. My palace has been taken. Her home. The place that had made her and thrown her away, and then been stolen out from under her while she slept as the heart of another world. A usurper was up there right now, running the Divine Moon Palace on a dead woman's authority, bidding on treasures with a name that used to be hers. I felt her hand tighten on my sleeve, not the Long's devotion this time, something older and colder, the specific grief of a person watching a stranger live in her house. We'll take it back, I said. All of it. That's a promise for a later chapter. Today we just spoil their shopping. I trumped the forged Divine Moon bid with a single sheet of paper, a piece of intelligence, handed to the auction's shaken Grand Elder, worth more than any treasure in the room. The fact that this auction was about to be raided and everyone in it slaughtered in about an hour. The Grand Elder read it, went pale, and handed me the 9-colored divine stone for free, because a man who knows the future is worth more than a man who owns a stone. I knew about the raid because I'd read it off the threads days ago, the way I read everything now. Black-robed killers would seal the hall and start harvesting the crowd, and in the chaos, one of them, a disguised immortal venerable, would peel off from the pack and come straight for my private room because the Snake Queen I'd just won was exactly the bait a new chosen one couldn't resist, and this hunter served that chosen one. So when the barrier snapped shut over the hall, and the screaming started, and a killer in black broke from the slaughter and came drifting toward my door with murder in his stride and a protagonist's fate riding on his shoulders, I was already standing, already smiling. Already reaching, with 2 years and 2 worlds of practice, for the thread that would pull him apart. You finally arrived, I said, to the newest chosen one walking into my hands. And that's where I'll stop because that's where I am. The Chapter 1 villain. The tutorial boss. The stepping stone the story marked for death on its very first page. Sitting as Divine Son at the top of a realm 10,000 times too large for the boy who died on a street on Earth. I have a heavenly Tao who loves me guarding the world I came from. A founder god who left me a throne, a lotus, and a trust I don't yet understand, watching from somewhere past the saints. A pavilion of immortal emperors about to learn my name the hard way, and a stolen palace waiting for me to come take it back. And a fresh cosmos of chosen ones lined up like fish, none of them yet aware that the thing at the top of their food chain has already eaten one whole world and come back hungry. The heavens raised every last one of them to kill me. They really should have been more careful about the one they scripted to lose.